When the noble heiress asked Luca out, he turned her down flat, simply because Luca was an orphan from the slums. This left her baffled. Wasn't marrying into nobility every commoner's ultimate dream? But the moment Luca turned his back to leave, she sprinted after him and grabbed his hand, because dating Luca was her brother's dying wish. Imperial Guard trainee number 32. Luca. For this training trial, Luca had to dodge and parry live bullets, because only by doing so could Luca shed the trainee title. And the opponents Luca faced were 5 death row inmates. Although Luca was heavily outnumbered, he had already cleared every extreme scenario simulation. So Luca made a quick calculation. 10 seconds was all he needed. The next instant, he exploded forward, charging straight at them. The first man didn't even have time to react before his head was cleanly severed from his shoulders. And just like that, Luca stepped right into the heart of their encirclement. This was Luca's chance to leave a strong impression on the commander. He couldn't let it slip. Even though Luca had never pulled this off in reality, he had to complete this close-quarter slaughter here and now. Luca pushed his senses to the absolute limit. Then, the remaining 4 pulled their triggers simultaneously. Luca swung his steel blade in a blinding blur. Under his flawless control, every single bullet was deflected, ricocheting right back to pierce the shooters. The commander nodded in deep satisfaction. It was hard to believe a mere trainee could pull this off. It seemed they had unearthed a terrifying new talent. Even after taking internal damage from the massacre, Luca had once again shattered his own limits. Just as Luca stepped out of the training room, the commander applauded his monstrous performance. Because ballistic control wasn't even part of the trainee curriculum yet, the commander gave a lethal grin, promising Luca a grand prize. The moment Luca turned his head, the commander's hand slammed violently over Luca's eyeball. As the surrounding crowd froze in absolute horror, the commander brutally crushed Luca's eyeball into a bloody pulp right then and there. Yet Luca merely smirked and thanked him. He'd been craving an eye capable of predicting bullet trajectories for a long time. When he returned to the barracks lounge, a blonde blocked his path. "I'm trainee No. 12, Eli. I watched your slaughter out there. You've got some serious talent." Seeing Luca's cold silence, Eli thought he'd crossed a line, but still gestured for him to come in. "If you're here to trade ego strokes, you've got the wrong guy." Eli Kartika. You could tell from the surname alone, he was born blue blood. Logically, Luca had no reason to bite the head off someone from a great noble house. Luca figured he could just chalk it up to pure jealousy. Right then, Eli pulled out a blue pill. It could dull the agonizing pain radiating from his fresh wound. Luca rejected it instantly, but Eli warned him that running on fumes would ruin his next training phase. For that at least, Luca grunted a word of thanks. Luca had seen Eli's training too. "When it comes to control, I've still got a lot to learn from you." Eli just tapped his own eye. "I've got a combat-grade cybernetic eye, so calculating trajectories is a piece of cake." Looks like the commander took a special interest in a trainee like you, paying out of his own pocket to gift you a new eye. Meanwhile, Luca was just fighting tooth and nail to survive the damn program. Unlike you elite nobles, a gutter rat like me can't afford to miss a single chance to climb, especially not through an individual assessment. Hearing this, Eli fell into a heavy silence. Sure, the nobles always looked polished and untouchable on the surface, but some of those bastards passed the trials and still got flushed out, all because they tried to buy their way into manipulating the final results. Luca never expected to hear a blue blood spit facts like that. Not every noble was genuinely elite. What the hell was this guy trying to say? Without warning, Eli extended his hand toward Luca, because he firmly believed that someone like Luca was bound for the top. A monster who had clawed his way here without leaning on a single outside faction. And Luca firmly grasped it in return, because every ounce of this was for the absolute glory of the Empire. This is the story of a boy forged from birth to be the ultimate military weapon, under the iron-fisted rule of a dictatorship known as the Clashia Empire. Cut to a few days later, Luca finally obtained the trajectory-predicting cybernetic eye he'd been craving, and his lethal accuracy immediately underwent a terrifying evolution. You put a bullet in every single target's head. Guess top-tier talents really are just built different. A close-quarters butcher who's also a dead-eye sniper. Isn't that practically a cheat code? Yet Luca found the whole exercise painfully dull, because Eli had buried every single shot into the exact same bullet hole. Still, Luca genuinely thought the Empire was desperate for talents like Eli. Hearing these words, Luca was utterly baffled. In today's Empire, the true value of ability and talent was being heavily diluted, because with enough status and wealth, even utter trash could be gilded to look highly capable. But if more monsters like you rise up purely on raw strength, won't the masses finally develop the eyes to tell the useless trash from the truly capable? Luca ruthlessly cut him off because that sounded dangerously close to treason against the imperial system. And if Luca reported him, even a highborn noble like Eli would face the full wrath of imperial sanctions. But Eli merely smiled, because he knew damn well that Luca wouldn't breathe a word of it. The scene cuts to the very next day. They were officially deployed on their first field mission. Luca and Eli were appointed as platoon leaders. Their objective: cross the canyon and completely eradicate the Koran outpost. The commander gave them one chilling reminder. This was a live fire purge, and they didn't need any prisoners. Staring at the distant settlement, Eli muttered, "They're just like us, splinters of the human faction from back on Earth." But Luca shot him a signal to cut it out. Don't get careless over pointless bleeding heart sentiment, because that towering mech lumbering behind them wasn't there for their protection. Luca was dead sure of it. It was an executioner sent to watch them, and if they dared take prisoners, that thing would slaughter them too. Here on Nova Planet, every other faction was just a bug in the Empire's eyes. Insects that only knew how to use and deceive the Empire for their own twisted gain. Hearing this, Eli sank into a heavy silence, because Eli knew the grim truth. Nothing here was as simple as it seemed on the surface, but the Imperial textbooks preached it exactly the way Luca just recited. The massacre proceeded swiftly, and the mission was soon more than halfway done. Yet a gnawing doubt ate at Luca. Why the hell was absolutely no one carrying a weapon? Still, he forced himself to believe the Empire's training program wouldn't make a mistake. Right at that moment, Luca spotted a small child shivering uncontrollably in the shadows. The kid was paralyzed by sheer terror, and for a split second, Luca froze, unsure of how to handle it. But the commander's absolute decree echoed in his head. Leave no prisoners. Luca kept brainwashing himself on the spot. They are nothing but parasites draining the Empire's resources. Without a second of hesitation, he plunged his blade downward in a vicious arc. Only the killing strike bypassed the kid entirely, burying the steel deep into the wall instead. Luca then told the kid to play dead. Maybe that would be enough to survive. Luca knew that if the Empire found out, the punishment would be a fate worse than death. But in the next instant, a gunshot cracked right beside his ear. When Luca looked up, he saw Eli had fired. Luca had no idea when Eli had shown up. He knew Eli wouldn't report it. But if it were anyone else, that was a different story. Then an attack shot straight toward Eli. That was when Luca noticed a man off to the side. Was he the one who caused the explosion just now? Eli moved before the man could notice and launched a surprise strike. What answered him was a blinding blast of energy. Luca hadn't expected the man to be an awakened power user. The commander hadn't told them anything about this. Was this some kind of test? Eli was in danger because Luca hesitated. Luca had to react right now. So Luca sent the others to secure the outpost. The man staying behind alone meant only one thing. He was buying time. Luca wasn't going to let him. From the man's hand signs, it looked like he could form energy spheres. Luca kicked his kinetic speed into maximum overdrive. Luca knew the cost. Keep moving at that pace too long, and his own body would tear itself apart first. But Luca needed to be even faster. The instant the energy sphere was about to slam into him, Luca broke through the man's defense. This was the best moment to finish him. Luca plunged his long blade deep into the man's vitals. At the same time, the man's hand landed on Luca's head. In the next instant, the tactical mech helmet on Luca's head shattered into a rain of fragments. Was Luca about to die? But the man hesitated, because in his eyes, Luca was still just a kid. In the end, Luca still won, yet Luca couldn't understand it. The Koran fanatics were supposed to be zealots, so why had he hesitated? But everything Luca had been taught told him one thing. This was all for the Empire. To eliminate enemies who threatened the Emperor and the Empire's people. For the Imperial Guard, no other reason was required. After Luca completed his first mission, the man's words kept echoing in his head. No one died in that operation, because the man hadn't truly gone for the kill, but Luca's will told him the opposite. Mercy was the exact reason for their annihilation. The scene shifted, and a centurion praised their outstanding performance, especially Luca and Eli. You two can set your sights on becoming centurions yourselves, for the glory of the Emperor and the people. Don't stop. Orphans from the slums like Luca were usually assigned to the most remote squads. Even so, Luca vowed he'd become the centurion of that godforsaken wasteland. Meanwhile, they were soon back in the sparring room. This time, it was Luca versus Eli. Luca could clearly feel the change in Eli's strength. After his last injury, Eli had replaced an arm with a cybernetic one, but it still wasn't nearly enough to beat Luca. Then Luca caught the gap in Eli's movement. He shattered Eli's rhythm in a single step. By the time Eli realized it, Luca's fist was already in his face. Looks like Luca wins again. I thought this time I'd finally win. If getting the Mind Sword is the only way you get stronger, then what's the point of training? Eli also noticed something. The whole centurion talk had hit Luca harder than expected. After that speech, Luca seemed more rigid than before. But Luca wasn't like Eli. Luca's only way out was to climb. Still, Luca couldn't help wondering what kind of soldier Eli actually wanted to be. For Eli, being a soldier was never his choice. His dream was to be a scholar, an archaeologist. But the Empire forbade private research into forbidden civilizations, and Eli's family had produced commanders for generations. They'd never allow him to do anything else. Luca warned Eli not to say that outside. One report, and it would be over. But you won't do that, Eli said. Same way I kept your secret. I hesitated because my opponent wasn't a combatant. Even if it wasn't for you, I'd go back and kill. I'm loyal to the Empire and the Emperor because they recognized my talent. An enemy of the Empire is an enemy. You're no exception. Eli didn't argue. He just smiled. If your loyalty to the Empire really went beyond simple obedience, you would have silenced me already. Don't push yourself that hard, Luca. Luca only frowned. Keep this up, and you'll die. Time moved fast, and the second mission arrived. They were sent into an uninhabited neutral zone. The structures here were millions of years old, yet they still carried lingering energy signatures. Eli was fascinated, because it proved that even millions of years ago, civilizations had already begun reaching for the stars. But Luca worried Eli would start talking too freely, so Luca cut him off. If we run into another faction here, we'll end up fighting. Eli wasn't worried at all. In his eyes, no one could stand against the Empire's dispatched guards. Right then, Claude, who also loved archaeology, stepped forward. With records like these, we can predict what comes next. No wonder so many people are obsessed with history. Luca knew Claude came from a great house too. Not as famous as Eli's, but still the kind of existence a commoner like Luca could only look up to. Then Claude suddenly asked Luca, I really like you. So, do you have a girlfriend? Luca broke out in cold sweat. If you step any closer, I'll classify you as a hostile target. Claude scratched his head awkwardly. Turns out he wanted to introduce Luca to his sister, but Luca believed he was just a slum orphan, nowhere near worthy of her. Eli piled on, grinning. I heard Claude's sister is a real beauty. Then they caught movement from nearby. Everyone immediately dropped into tactical stealth. Luca and Claude moved up to check it out. Before long, they spotted someone on the far side. The instant Luca saw who it was, his pupils shrank in shock. A holy knight, one who wielded the Force. The holy knight spotted them too. With a casual lift of his hand, a spear shot toward the group. Luca immediately told Claude to fall back. But before Luca could even process it, Claude's skull was violently punctured clean through. Claude collapsed, barely clinging to life on the ground. Luca's mind went completely blank. A teammate he'd been talking with just a second ago, gone in the blink of an eye. Right in front of him. Even Luca's cybernetic eye flashed with critical error warnings. The absolute suppression in their power tiers was too massive. It couldn't read the enemy's movements at all. Then Eli rushed in from behind to support him. They had to buy time. Luca agreed with Eli's decision. Escaping from a holy knight was impossible, so the only option was to stall until the Imperial Guard arrived. But that backup would take around 10 seconds to reach them. In the meantime, the enemy attacked again. This spear came straight for Luca. Luca barely managed to nudge its path offline with his blade. 10 seconds wasn't long. Yet to them it felt endless, because one slip meant getting cut down. With a light flick of his arm, the Holy Knight redirected the spear again. Damn it. Was Luca really going to die here? But the will in Luca's mind kept screaming at him. Don't you dare go down until the enemy's head is lopped clean off. The Empire's army had no need for worthless trash. Luca slashed at the incoming spear. A violent screeching impact rang out, and Luca's sword snapped clean in two. After that exchange, his arm was basically finished, but he was still alive. Only 7 seconds had passed. Now Luca had to brace for the next strike. The Holy Knight slowly drew his blade. Then he sent several lethal arcs of sword aura toward Luca. Luca dodged on pure limit-breaking reflex. But the teammates behind him weren't that lucky. That was when Luca finally realized it. Luca wasn't the real target. Everyone behind him was. In the next instant, the Holy Knight burst forward and charged Luca head-on. Damn it. Was this one truly impossible to evade? The timer hit 12 seconds. The guards the Empire had assigned to them arrived at last. At the very last moment, a massive hand violently crushed down on the enemy's skull. The massive hand smashed the Holy Knight down into a brutal crater. But the Holy Knight wasn't an easy target. He whipped his longsword around, trying to create distance. The armored guard answered with a single punch that sent him flying. Only then did Luca finally exhale. He was saved. And now, the real battle belonged to those two. After the Holy Knight forced space between them, he drew a battle axe from behind his back. One was an Imperial guard clad in the Empire's weaponry. The other was a Holy Knight wielding the Force. Luca had no idea which one would come out on top. Both sides swung their weapons at the same time. The instant they crossed, blinding sparks erupted. Neither gave an inch in presence. They separated again almost immediately. Then the armored guard pushed his thrusters to maximum overdrive and burst toward the Force Knight. The fight climbed from the ground straight into the sky. They were moving too fast. Luca couldn't track their weapons with his eyes. All he could do was pray the armored guard would win. The guard's axe kept driving forward, and in the next instant, Both weapons shattered at once. The armored guard seized the opening and tried to crush the Holy Knight's skull into pulp on the spot. But the Holy Knight's helmet wasn't something that would break so easily. At the same time, the Holy Knight was trying to control the spear in the distance. The moment Luca heard the roar behind him, a chill ran down his spine. The armored guard didn't know that spear's speed or its destructive force. He might not react in time, and if the Imperial Guard died, Luca would die too. The instant the spear burst out of the earth, Luca pushed his cybernetic legs into a frantic overdrive, desperately trying to bleed off its lethal momentum. Only then did the guard notice the movement. In the next heartbeat, the Holy Knight seized the guard's metal frame. The armored guard instantly routed every ounce of power into his right arm and unleashed it like a cannon shell straight into the enemy's skull. A violent explosion of sound erupted beside them. Luca couldn't tell who had won. He could only pray it was the guard. Footsteps approached from the distance. Luca's nerves stretched to the breaking point. Then a mechanical arm slowly reached out in front of him. "Good work, trainee. With your help, I was able to defeat the enemy." But Luca was staring in pure terror. The full-body mechanical armor granted to the Imperial Guard was forged by ruthlessly amputating every weak, fleshy part of the body deemed useless for combat. It was equipment that could turn a person into the ultimate weapon. Every trainee dreamed of earning a suit, because it was proof of becoming Imperial Guard. Yet the armored guard was moving even without a head. So what are you? Human? Or a machine? The air went unnaturally still. When the guard slowly reached for his head, he realized his skull was already gone. His power cut out, and he collapsed in front of Luca. The hero Luca had struggled to become was a grotesque, cybernetic monstrosity. Luca felt cold all the way through. He didn't even know if he could last until rescue arrived. Is this the last thing Luca will ever see? A voice suddenly cut through his thoughts. Somehow, Eli had survived. At that moment, only the two of them were left. Everyone else was dead. Luca didn't know if he could hold on. He felt like his lifeblood was rapidly bleeding dry. Then Luca asked Eli what he planned to do next. Up ahead was the place Eli longed for, a place that held things Eli could never find inside the Empire. So Luca wanted Eli to chase his dream. Reinforcements would arrive soon. Once they ran into them, the two of them would be forced back to the Empire. Eli came from nobility, and half the things he said went over Luca's head. But the last time Eli talked about his dream, Luca had seen the brightest light he'd ever seen. So Luca wanted to give Eli his own heart, so Eli could live the life he actually wanted. Eli pressed a strip of cloth down onto Luca's wound. "Don't say that kind of nonsense again. For a second, I really thought you were going to die. You're seriously hopeless." After Luca and Eli returned to base, they were grafted with military-grade cybernetic exoskeletons. Eli recommended the F-2421 US model. The adaptation period was short, and Eli said it would suit Luca. Last night, the two of them were summoned to different departments for questioning. 3 trainees and 1 Imperial Guard member had been killed, and they'd also encountered a force using Holy Knight. Luca thought they were digging deeper into the incident, but he was called in for another reason, because they'd found a highly classified anomalous cube, and Eli, as a noble, had access to additional information. It was about ownership of the cube. If the Holy Alliance refused to hand over the ruins and relics, a massive war could erupt. The Empire might go to war with Korra, and the Bellado Federation would profit just by watching them tear each other apart. So the people at the top were weighing the value of war against its cost. Luca didn't care about politics. He only wanted to follow orders and fight. That was what an Imperial Guard member was supposed to do. Even now, Luca couldn't let it go. How could a headless guard still move? The commander claimed it was only a post-mortem phantom reflex caused by residual signals, but Luca didn't buy it. The guard had reacted to Luca's words even after death. Luca still had questions with no answers. If his superiors wouldn't give them to him, he'd find the truth himself. The scene cut elsewhere. The base had built a reception hall for the academy, where trainees could meet friends and family. Luca came from an orphanage. He'd always thought he'd never set foot in a place like this, but he hadn't expected anyone to come looking for him. The visitor was Claude's younger sister, the girl who'd lost him days ago, Lillian Ramos. Luca didn't know why she was here, but he could think of only one reason. She'd come to demand answers about Claude's death. After all, Luca had been the commanding officer of that doomed squad, but Lillian signaled for Luca not to tense up. She wasn't here out of hatred. Ever since Claude joined the guard unit, their family had already prepared themselves for the worst. She'd come for one simple reason: to meet Luca. "I've heard your story from my brother again and again. A squad leader with real ability." Claude had even asked her back then if she'd be willing to date Luca. Luca said his background was too low, but Lillian didn't care. If anything, it cut out a bunch of pointless formalities. From the way she said it, Luca could tell Lillian was genuinely interested. "So what? Are you not willing?" Luca said he didn't know her at all. Lillian shot back, "Why not start getting to know each other now?" And then Luca asked, "Why me? My brother's last request isn't enough of a reason?" Lillian said it was a good thing for Luca. something most people couldn't even dream of happening to them. And she wasn't wrong. The tea was the kind of offer that was almost impossible to refuse. A chance for someone from the bottom to be connected to a great house. Luca had come here to rise. If he married a noblewoman, he'd be closer to his goal. But the offer felt too easy, which made it more unsettling, not less. So Luca ruthlessly shot down her offer and turned to leave. Not long ago, Luca would have called nobles who wanted to escape the Empire's grip fools. Now he realized he was making decisions based on a feeling, like an idiot. To a noble like Lillian, that might have been humiliation. Luca only hoped she wouldn't make trouble for him later, but Lillian ran after him and grabbed his hand, and Luca froze. She looked nervous. I rushed it. We can start as friends. Before Luca could even respond, Lillian fled in embarrassment, saying she'd come back in a few days. Luca stared at his own hand and fell silent. Looks like shaking her off won't be easy. He'd just have to take it one step at a time. The scene cut to the training grounds. Luca sought out the hand-to-hand combat instructor Kinu, because there was still so much he didn't understand about fighting. But Kinu told him there wasn't much left to teach. There were only a handful of trainees who could overpower Luca in brutal close-quarters combat. Luca didn't think that was enough, because it also meant someone out there could still crush him with absolute strength. Hearing that, Kinu signaled for Luca not to rush. Luca had come to Kinu because he felt Kinu was different from the other instructors. Strong, but not domineering. This time, Luca had a new arm, and his raw destructive output had multiplied tenfold. His only flaw now was that he wasn't a complete body. His organic parts had weaker durability. If Luca couldn't beat someone like Kinu, he'd never stand a chance against a monster like the Holy Knight. He had to get stronger. Luca threw a punch straight at Kinu. Kinu could tell immediately. Luca was testing the upgraded hardware. Luca kept firing off punches. Kinu caught them all, so Luca decided to close the distance and force it. In that instant, Luca found a gap and seized Kinu's sleeve. Thinking the session was basically over, Luca's fist drove in for Kinu's face, but Kinu only flicked his sleeve. Luca was sent flying like a broken rag doll. Luca didn't even see what Kinu did. He refused to stop. The moment he hit the ground, Luca sprang up and attacked again. Kinu shifted his body to the side and dissolved the ambush. Then he caught Luca's footwork and flung him aside like he weighed nothing. Luca looked stunned. What just happened? Kinu finally named the problems. Not understanding your opponent's strength is one. The other is going into a fight with the wrong mindset. So what are you rushing for? Luca was shocked, because he couldn't even explain what he'd just experienced. His first punch had been aimed at Kinu's chin, but Kinu only tapped Luca's arm, and Luca's body started to sway, like he'd lost control. More precisely, the kinetic force Luca delivered was redirected back into him, sending devastating shockwaves tearing through his internal organs. Luca immediately asked what that technique was called. Kinu's lips parted slightly. It's a form of self-protection. Luca stood up at once. May I learn it from you? Kinu brushed a strand of hair aside. Blood was already seeping from his right eye. Even seeing me like this, you still want it? Shortcuts always come with a price. The scene shifted. Kinu asked Luca what he'd learned from the exchange. Luca said it felt like his body had been hexed, like it wasn't under his control at all. When Luca heard the art was called Aegis, a massive jolt of shock hammered his chest. It was a method rebels were known to use. Still, Luca believed it could be folded into military standards. Turns out, Kinu had thought the same. Yet Aegis had three obvious flaws. First, it was brutally hard to learn. Second, it caused side effects, like the brain issue Kinu had just shown. As for the third flaw, Luca couldn't observe it yet. Even so, Luca still wanted to learn, but Kinu told him the Empire had invested too much in Luca. Luca was already a highly valuable piece of Imperial military property. He didn't get to decide freely. Training in Aegis would inevitably affect the brain. Could Luca promise he would never use it again afterward? Staring at Kinu's back, Luca knew that even if he lied, Kinu would see through it. So Luca answered honestly. I can't promise, but I'll try not to use it. Kinu's mouth curved slightly. He patted Luca on the shoulder. He preferred that honesty over any pretty fake answer. Then, without warning, Kinu lifted a foot and launched Luca brutally into the air with a blinding kick. From now on, stay on guard against my attacks at all times. Do that, and you'll be able to handle anything. Luca got up slowly, rubbing his head. Luca knew it. Instructor Kinu was willing to teach him. A month passed in a blur, and when Eli saw Luca, worry flashed across his face. Luca looked like he hadn't slept in ages. Turns out that for the entire month, Luca had been sparring with Instructor Kinu every single day. Kinu didn't teach him in the usual way. He forced Luca to learn through observation and self-adjustment. Aegis was nothing like the methods Luca had learned. Most systems focused on mastering a specific technique and grinding it until it was sharp. Aegis was about squeezing every ounce of value out of what you already had. In other words, it was an elite combat algorithm, one that could instantly activate every weapon built into your equipment. Then it arranged them into the most efficient killing pattern possible. At its core, it was overclocking the brain's neural limits. Luca asked how Eli's missions had been going. Eli shrugged and said it was nothing. Just easy work. Luca still warned him to be careful. The security captain hasn't been seen lately. Wasn't that tied to the same incident? Eli disagreed. I've heard things from my family. A rebellion might be coming. Luca's heart jolted. Eli didn't know details, only that a group of people was planning an uprising. Luca listened in silence, then said they were already at war with the Creed Alliance, and now someone wanted to ignite a civil war? It was absolute, suicidal madness. Eli cut him off. If all you do is call it absurd, the rot inside will keep spreading. Eli didn't even finish before Luca slammed him against the wall. Luca stared him down. Eli, I can ignore the fact that you want to leave the Empire, but if you plan to be my enemy, I won't let you walk out of here alive. Eli didn't panic, even with Luca gripping his collar. He just met Luca's eyes. Calm. Relax. I passed the Imperial Guard selection too. Do you really think I'd become the Empire's enemy? Luca released Eli's collar. Then don't say things that invite misunderstandings. I don't want to see your name on the traitor list. And those were words Eli would only dare to say in front of Luca. Once Eli caught his breath, he smiled. You free this weekend? Let me treat you to a meal. Luca turned away. I already have plans, and stop talking to me. You're seriously annoying. The scene cut to the lower sector of Acrisia. It was familiar to both Luca and Kinu, because both of them had clawed their way out of this hellish gutter. Ever since Luca became a trainee, he thought he would never come back to a place like this. He didn't want to breathe the same air as these idiots. Yet Kinu's plan to help him brought them here anyway. Beneath the capital, Acrisia, sprawled a lava zone. The geothermal energy extracted from it powered the entire city. The power plant's filtered waste and heat blanketed the lower levels where the poor lived. Thank God Luca had escaped. Otherwise, he would have rotted away as a nameless street rat. Soon, Kinu slipped into a narrow alley. Luca could feel the stares of drifters and beggars. If he showed even a crack, they could turn into robbers in an instant. Luca hadn't expected Kinu to know the lower sector's layout even better than he did. Kinu had been born down here, but he'd been an Imperial Guard for decades. So why was he still this familiar with the place? Like he came often. Kinu ordered Luca to use his prosthetic arm and leg locked at a severely restricted low-power output for this fight. Luca didn't know why, but if he wanted the training, he had to obey. They soon reached an entrance guarded by a gang. Kinu said, I need to see whoever runs this place. His confidence made the gang hesitate. What's your relationship with Boss Aleph? Kinu scratched his head. So the manager's called Aleph now. The gang member raised his gun. You crazy punk. Get lost. In the Empire, how many people could point a gun at an Imperial Guard and live? But Kinu didn't want to reveal who he was. Luca blurred forward in an instant, closing the gap and launching the security thug into the air with a brutal strike. Then he slammed him down with a clean shoulder throw, pinning him to the ground. Another guard reached for his weapon, but Luca already had the muzzle trained on him. If you want to die, go ahead. Try it. Now call Aleph. Trust me, that's not a bad outcome for you. After dropping their weapons, the two men ran off to report what had happened. Staring at the circular structure ahead, Luca couldn't help asking what kind of place it was. Kinu glanced at him and smiled faintly. An underground deathmatch arena. The scene shifted, and they were brought into the management office. The arena's manager, Aleph, was a heavy-set man. Kinu pointed behind him at Luca. Put this kid in a match. I won't charge a fight fee. If he gets beaten to death, I don't care. Only then did Luca understand why Kinu had ordered him to lower his power output. Aleph took a slow drag from his cigarette. Then he flicked the burning butt at Kinu. Luca casually caught it between his fingers. At the same time, the gang members leveled their weapons at the two of them. You're misunderstanding something. We didn't let you in to hear requests. We just needed a convenient slaughterhouse to dispose of your corpses. While the two talked, Luca studied the room and the air between them. In Luca's judgment, Aleph was bluffing. If he truly wanted them dead, he would have pulled the trigger already. Luca listened hard. There were two armed gang members outside the door. He had already mapped out a flawless slaughter scenario in his head. First, he'd kick the iron table over, using it to break their line of sight. Then his fist would punch straight through the table, obliterating the gang member's skull into bloody shrapnel. The men outside would be a beat late forcing the door. By then, Luca would have a gun, braced against wall and ceiling, clinging to the doorframe, and he'd fire 2 shots mid-air to finish it. Kinu asked the fat man where the previous manager had gone. Aleph hesitated. You mean Drogla? He's dead. Got caught fixing matches. Kinu saw through it instantly. This arena prints money, so you killed Drogla to take the seat, didn't you? But I don't blame you. Drogla killed the last man to get it. That's the blood-soaked law of the underground. Aleph sprang up and aimed his gun at Kinu. Who the hell are you? How much do you know? Kinu didn't flinch. Sit down, Aleph, unless you want to keep Drogla company. I don't warn twice. Aleph broke into a cold sweat under Kinu's pressure. He raised a palm, signaling his men to stand down. Instinct told him Kinu was not someone to provoke. You really want this guy in the arena? Aleph said, sizing Luca up. His pupils faintly glowed, like he was scanning Luca's body. Your arms and legs aren't fit for combat. The rest of you is still a squishy meat sack. You'll be pulverized into a bloody paste in a split second. Aleph agreed to Kinu's request, but he wanted payment. Kinu tossed out bait. I know where Drogla's safe is. You've got Drogla's eye as the key, don't you? Aleph went momentarily speechless. Now he was even more curious who Kinu really was, and how much he knew. Kinu only smiled vaguely, just a ghost from a past better left buried. The fat man didn't dare ask further. Luca had learned a lot from Kinu, how effortlessly he controlled the situation, how calmly he handled everything. Those were things Luca lacked. The scene cut to a lounge. Luca couldn't help asking, what was Drogla's safe? And why had Aleph's attitude changed so drastically? Kinu looked at the tablet. Hidden assets Drogla stashed away, enough to change Aleph's entire life. Luca finally asked the question he'd been holding back. If it really came to a fight, what would Kinu do? Kinu just smiled. So you really want to know? Win, and I'll tell you. On the screen appeared a hulking warrior whose arms glowed with light. Gabriel, the Iron Fist. The arena was full of junkies who traded their lifespans for black market cybernetics. Gabriel was the type who chased power and didn't care about side effects. In Luca's current state, taking even one punch would mean severe injury or death. Kinu called Luca back again. Remember what I'm about to tell you. This is the core of Aegis hand-to-hand combat. Accept everything you're given and flow with it. Luca frowned on instinct. Flow was a word he hated. It sounded like surrender. Kinu countered, water doesn't fail, it changes shape. You have potential. The moment you swatted bullets away barehanded, I noticed you. And when you came to me on your own, I was surprised. People with talent are always drawn to something. Luca looked at the hand on his shoulder, confused. Why was Kinu praising him all of a sudden? Kinu's smile turned strangely meaningful. Because this might be what you look like for the last time. The arena lights flared on. Luca walked toward the dueling platform, one step at a time. Seeing that Luca was still just a kid, the crowd sneered. A nursing brat on the stage? If you want to die, you don't have to come here. But some of them didn't mind at all. They wanted to see limbs torn off, rib cages caved in, and organs pulverized. Luca wasn't afraid. If anything, it felt better, because it finally felt like coming home. Let me see how you've been surviving, you pathetic pieces of trash. When Luca was little, he rarely ate until he was full. The Empire delivered supplies to the orphanage twice a month, but the caretaker always stole more than half for himself. For the kids inside, hunger was normal. Luca still didn't give up on studying or training. If he had time, he used it to sharpen himself. At first, the other kids laughed at him. Luca answered with his fists, smashing faces and taking their food. If you want strength, you eat more than the rest. Better this food fuels my own flesh and blood than rot inside the stomach of a failure. The strong devour the weak. Luca had learned that rule when he was still a kid. And in the end, Luca proved he was right. He took the second selection exam at 12, and by 15, he was officially a trainee. Luca never wanted to see these failures again. So for most of his time as a trainee, he'd practically forgotten this place existed. When Gabriel stepped into the arena, the entire crowd roared his name. The moment he saw Luca, Gabriel sneered with pure disdain. Aleph must have eaten too much today, matching me with some brat like this. Luca, meanwhile, was already analyzing him. Gabriel's limbs and torso came from different manufacturers. They worked together only barely, a grotesque cybernetic Frankenstein. That oversized hand alone pulled his shoulders forward when he clenched his fist, bending his spine. Still, he was strong. His body had been modified for one purpose: more strength at any cost. Gabriel looked Luca up and down shamelessly. You've got a pretty face. How about you come serve me for the night? Luca gave a cold smile. Sounds like you're the one who'll need a servant, because tonight, you're leaving this arena as a mangled cripple. Gabriel burst into laughter. I'll slam you into the ground and torture you. Hard, until you're begging to be my servant. Aleph shouted into the microphone. A mirror of our cruel, merciless world is about to begin. Will you be crushed, or will you crush someone else and stand back up? Kinu stood above the arena with his arms crossed, watching. An old, buzzing siren blared, declaring the start of the fight. Gabriel's body was engineered for combat. Luca, on the other hand, was running non-combat parts, meaning one clean hit could kill him on the spot. Despite his massive frame, Gabriel wasn't slow. Luca slipped to the side and avoided the strike. Then a lethal spinning kick smashed directly into Gabriel's skull, but the strike barely even registered to Gabriel. What is this? Are you scratching me? If Luca had been in a normal body, that kind of power would have made someone pop like a watermelon. Luca quickly pulled back. The dueling arena was cramped. There wasn't much room to dodge. Gabriel charged again. Every one of his blows was lethal, while Luca's attacks did almost no damage. The crowd started chanting for Gabriel to crush Luca's skull. Luca ignored them. He kept thinking, why did Kinu bring him here? And what Kinu called the core. Accept what you have. Obsessing over what you don't have won't solve anything. Praying won't make a gun drop from the sky. No matter what Luca had, he still had to fight with it. Kinu told him not to use the enhanced mechanical hardware, but he never said Luca couldn't analyze with his eye, which meant Kinu never expected Luca to overpower Gabriel. He wanted Luca to learn acceptance, because Aegis was about maximizing your own potential. Gabriel's fist was like a destructive cannon. The subtle twitch of his shoulder was the trigger. Where he stared was the barrel. The length of his arm was the range of force. Compared to a real gun, his windup was slow, and his trajectory was obvious. The crowd's faces twisted into disbelief. In Kinu's eyes, Luca was a genius. In this short time, he'd grasped Aegis and fused it with his own understanding. Gabriel, meanwhile, couldn't understand it. Why could his fists never touch Luca? Gabriel snarled, furious. How the hell am I losing to a kid? Luca's focus was sharper than ever. That was why he could fully predict Gabriel's attacks, which meant, could Luca do what Kinu did? Luca seized Gabriel's arm. Then he drove his lead foot into Gabriel's knee. The big man was flipped up into the air. Before Gabriel could even react, Luca's heel crashed down onto his face. Luca could hardly believe he pulled it off. So this was how Kinu had been looking at him all along. Gabriel rubbed his head, eyes burning. I don't know what kind of magic you used, he snarled, but your weak little hits can't beat me. Gabriel swung at Luca again. He was faster than before, but Luca still slipped the punch in the next breath. Luca materialized right in front of him like a phantom. You really think my attacks won't work? If I don't have pure power, then I'll make up for it with something else. Luca sprang up and snapped his legs with full force. His hands locked around Gabriel's head. The world spun for Gabriel. Then came the sickening, bone-shattering crunch of his spine. The crowd stared, stunned into silence. And like Kinu before him, a few drops of blood leaked from the corner of Luca's eye. In a real battlefield full of variables, Luca never would have been able to focus like this. But this was a controlled environment, so he could push his cognitive focus into absolute hyperdrive. That was how he could predict Gabriel's movements with precision. Luca had to admit it. Kinu truly was an outstanding mentor. Kinu acknowledged Luca's performance. Luca had crossed the threshold of Aegis. Then Kinu pulled out a storage card. Luca frowned. Was this compensation? Kinu shook his head. No. This is the money I bet on you to win. Use it for Gabriel's treatment. If you can win his goodwill, there's no reason to make an enemy. A measured friendliness is simply smart. Luca said, I want to be a lethal soldier and warrior, not some bleeding heart saint. Kinu rested a hand on Luca's head. When it comes to dealing with people, you're still young. The friendliness, isn't virtue. It's investment, so it can be useful later. Today, I collected my investment from Drugla. Kinu's smile was laced with a predatory, bone-chilling edge. Luca realized he might have misunderstood everything. He'd thought Kinu taught him because he valued Luca's talent, because they came from the same place. That was wrong. One day, Luca would face that moment too. Kinu's collection would come for him, and it might come in a way Luca couldn't refuse. The scene cut elsewhere. Gabriel was in a miserable state. He could only use his tongue to tap a display and scroll through artificial spine products. Without proper treatment, he might be crippled for life. The doctors pushed the newest model because they'd been waiting to fleece Gabriel, but he couldn't afford it, Meso. They offered a solution. Harvest and auction off his remaining intact limbs, then replace them with cheaper mechanical arms. The normally explosive Gabriel looked helpless. Without those parts, he'd be one step from death. Luca stood at the doorway watching. Glad to see you're still as lively as ever. The moment Gabriel saw Luca, rage twisted his face. You bastard. I'll get revenge. Luca walked up, eyes sharp. I warned you before that fight. I told you I'd cripple you. Luca remembered what Kinu had said. Don't make enemies. Yet his instincts still made him mock Gabriel anyway. Then Luca turned to the doctor. How much is that Hyperlindal Mark 9 cyber spine you mentioned? The doctor looked stunned. He probably never imagined Luca would pay for Gabriel. Gabriel's eyes went wide. What is this? Are you messing with me? Luca glanced back at him. Can't you tell? I'm paying your treatment fee. Gabriel's pupils trembled. The rage from moments ago vanished like it had never existed. Then he asked Luca's name. Luca, I don't know why you're doing this, but if you ever need help, tell me. I'll repay this debt. Luca stared at Gabriel for a moment, then nodded. The feeling wasn't as bad as he thought it would be. The scene cut. Luca was back at the training base. The first thing he did was look for Eli and spar. Eli snapped a kick toward Luca's head. Luca simply knocked the kick aside. Then he pushed, riding the motion. His kinetic momentum flawlessly redirected. Eli lost his balance. Luca immediately hooked a kick into the outside of Eli's lower leg. In an instant, Eli hit the ground. Luca had effortlessly floored him using an absolute minimum of kinetic force. Eli stared up, shocked. "So this is the Aegis fighting style you learned from instructor Kinu?" Luca confirmed it. "So it really is our street fighting stuff? Like grabbing sand when you fall and throwing it? Or hiding broken glass in your fist and gutting a bastard with it?" Luca used to scoff at that kind of thing. But after the arena, he changed his mind. Use the environment. Use whatever is at hand. Because enemies don't care about being honorable. Just then, Eli called out to Luca. Eli had a problem, and he needed Luca's help. The scene shifted, and the two of them entered the lounge. Luca frowned at Eli. Eli could only shrug awkwardly. Luca knew immediately. Eli had let Lillian in. "Sorry, Luca," she begged. "I couldn't refuse. Our family has always been connected with the Ramones family." Lillian stared at Luca, unblinking. "Why have you been avoiding me?" Her pride had clearly taken a hit. She'd probably never been rejected in her life. Luca answered bluntly. "Because I'm not interested. Consider that my rejection." Eli tried to smooth it over with a smile. "Luca, you could say it more gently." But an irritated Luca didn't even look at him. Lillian's eyes widened in shock. "I don't understand what I did wrong. Guys, there's something about me you dislike." Luca shut that down. "No, I don't have time to deal with women. You know I came from an orphanage. I'm not like you. One single misstep, and I'll be buried in the dirt forever." Luca continued. "You still don't get it, Lillian Ramones. If I depend on you to succeed, a single fleeting whim of yours could shatter everything I've built into dust. But if I build it with my own strength, it won't fall so easily." Lillian glanced at Eli. "You're close with Eli, yet you claim you don't want to benefit from nobles. That's a contradiction." Luca shook his head. "Eli is a comrade and a friend I can entrust my life to. On the battlefield, what protects me isn't some noble pedigree or empty titles. It's the brothers in arms standing beside me." Lillian went momentarily speechless, unwillingness written all over her face. "You won't even give me a chance?" Luca was already braced for a slap. He felt a little sorry, but he refused to leave any room. "If there's nothing else, I'm leaving." With that, Luca turned and walked out of the reception room. Eli followed right after. "Luca, you were way too direct. You didn't have to be that cold." Luca was silent for a moment. "If I'm not, she won't let go." But Eli still didn't understand why Luca resisted Lillian so hard. Just try getting to know her. What's the harm? Luca didn't even know himself why he disliked her. It's instinct. And the reason she's looking at me differently is only because Claude praised me before he died. So she has to be planning something. Eli hurried to tell Luca to take it slow, but Luca cut him off. "You like her, don't you?" Eli looked confused. How could Luca tell? "Your eyes. Your breathing. The way you panicked earlier," Luca said. "Either way, I'm not interested. If you like her, cut the crap and go make her yours." Eli clenched his jaw. Then he looked back toward the lounge. That kind of role was almost impossible for him. The scene cut to a few days later. Luca sought out instructor Kinu again. This time, Kinu taught him neural combat meditation. As Luca sank deeper into meditation, his mind circled back to what happened in that office. If a fight had actually broken out, what would Kinu have done? Armed men were waiting inside and outside the room. With no weapon, Luca couldn't see how anyone could get out without a scratch. Kinu smiled. "When the fighting starts, I'd get under the desk and stay out of the firing line." Luca frowned, unable to accept it. "If your first move is hiding, you lose the chance to strike. You'll end up getting shredded into bloody Swiss cheese anyway." Kinu knew exactly what Luca would do. You'd go head-on with the gang. Even if you took a few bullets on your mind, the safest option is to take Aleph hostage. But if you really did that, you'd both get shot in that place. Replacing a gang boss isn't a big deal. What you'd be doing is giving them an excuse to kill their own boss. In that situation, using Aleph as a shield is the correct play. You didn't even notice his fingers were modified into a gun, and you didn't know there was a secret passage behind the left cabinet. Only then did Luca understand the gap between them. Kinu could predict Luca's moves, and he already knew an escape route Luca hadn't even imagined. Then Kinu rose slowly. Aegis operates by cannibalizing every last drop of your brain's neural processing power. Do you understand what that means? It means it can't be standardized for the Imperial Guard. Luca shuddered. So Kinu's brain issue was a side effect of pushing the mind beyond its limit. Did that mean once you strapped into a heavy-duty Imperial combat exoskeleton, you couldn't use Aegis at all? Kinu confirmed it. "You're truly excellent. So excellent it's a shame. I thought it would take you another 2 or 3 months to realize." Once Luca became an Imperial soldier, he would be issued an Imperial Vanguard power armor, full coverage mechanical armor built from the Empire's top-tier technology. It wasn't something an ordinary person could wear for long. The neural implant relied on high-bandwidth memory signal transmission. Beyond the CPU that handled auxiliary computation, it had to drain the brain's entire resource pool just to run, which meant the moment the mech was on, there was no spare focus left to execute Aegis. Luca forced down his anger and snapped, "Kinu, you knew how I would react, and you hid this on purpose." Luca clenched down hard. If he'd known from the start that Aegis couldn't be used alongside Legion gear, he would never have learned it. After thanking Kinu for the help, Luca turned and walked away. Kinu gave a cold smile. "If you change your mind, you're welcome anytime." Luca ground his teeth. "That won't happen." The scene cut to half a month later. It was Luca's first time seeing the Imperial Guard captain in 3 months. The man was Hyros, captain of the Clashia Imperial Guard. Hyros asked how Luca had been lately, and Luca reported everything honestly. Then Hyros changed direction. "I've heard you've been in frequent contact with Instructor Kinu." Luca's heart jolted. So, that was why he'd been summoned? The higher-ups knew trainees' movements inside out. The hints about Luca going to the lower sector and the arena, surely they knew it all. Luca started to answer, but Hyros cut him off. "Have you been learning Aegis Book Taima under Instructor Kinu?" Luca admitted it. "Yes, but I've already abandoned Aegis." Hyros' brow lifted slightly. He hadn't expected Luca to quit. When the untalented try to learn Aegis, Kinu drives them away. The truly gifted, however, quickly realized there's no need to learn it. That's why, besides Kinu, no one else has managed to truly weaponize Aegis. Hearing that, Luca felt even more uneasy. "Do you want me to continue learning Aegis?" It turned out Hyros wanted Luca to stay close to Kinu, and the best way to do that was to keep learning Aegis. This was an order. Luca's eyes widened. This was a cold-blooded espionage mandate. The Imperial Guard captain was wary of Kinu. Even if Luca didn't want it, 1,000 guesses exploded in his mind, but he couldn't ask. He had to bury the questions and obey. That was what an Imperial soldier did, so Luca's only answer was yes. Hyros seemed pleased. "I've been watching you, Luca. You're the type who will rise." The scene cut, and Luca went to find Kinu. Luca didn't expect Kinu to agree so easily, without asking a single reason. Kinu stopped in front of a shop selling cheap imitation models of the Yuri Legion. He asked Luca if he liked toys like that as a kid. Luca nodded. "Yes, but I had no money. All I could do was stare at them from the dirt like a starving street rat." Then Kinu called the owner over and said he'd buy every toy in the shop. Luca couldn't understand it. Why buy that many toys? The scene cut again. They arrived at an orphanage in the lower sector. Only then did Luca understand why. At the same time, a rough voice cut in. Gabriel was ranting nonstop. The contrast between his massive body and his nagging tone was almost absurd. "You called me for this? Do I look like some glorified errand boy to you?" Luca smiled. "You said I could ask you for help. They refused to deliver the toys here, so you did me a huge favor." But Gabriel complained that what he meant by help was fighting, like a brawl between two gangs. Luca noticed Gabriel's condition had improved a lot. His steps were steadier now, his balance far better. Then Gabriel looked at Kinu nearby. He'd never even heard Kinu's name before, a man even Aleph treated with caution. Luca guessed this was probably Kinu's old orphanage. Maybe the charity was just something he did because he'd made it. The orphanage doors swung open, and the kids burst out shouting, "Thanks, ugly uncle! Thanks, handsome big brother!" Gabriel didn't get angry. He just smiled. He wasn't the kind of lunatic who snapped at children's words. The kids clutched toys and game consoles. Some started fighting and arguing because they couldn't get what they wanted. Luca and Gabriel didn't stop them. They only watched. Dada, in this world, you fought for what you wanted. Fairness for everyone was a fantasy. If you wanted something, you ripped it from someone else's hands. If someone got to enjoy it, someone else would go without, because the world wasn't abundant. They all knew that. Just then, Kinu called Luca over. He said he wanted to talk. Kinu came here from time to time. The headmaster looked like he lived well, likely fattening his own pockets by siphoning the orphans' ration funds. Luca finally asked what had been on his mind. "Instructor, did you grow up here?" Kinu shook his head. "I've forgotten where I was born and raised. I just check nearby orphanages sometimes. Maybe I even visited the one you came from." Kinu looked tired. In that moment, he seemed like nothing more than a retired guard. Did the Imperial Guard captain really need to keep Kinu under surveillance? The question kept circling in Luca's mind. Kinu suffered from brain dysfunction. His nervous system had been damaged by overload, and he seemed to be stitching his crumbling mind together through sheer, monstrous willpower. Maybe Luca would end up like that one day too, but he didn't know if he'd live long enough to find out. Kinu called Luca back again. "Did Captain Hyros send you?" Luca's heart jolted, tension crawling from his scalp all the way to his toes. Luca avoided Kinu's eyes. Keanu could read people through the smallest details. A paranoid storm of worst-case scenarios hijacked his mind. Keanu might kill Luca right here. If you don't want to die, stay calm. I don't want to kill you, but it's hard to restrain you without killing you. Luca controlled his breathing and gradually lowered the output of his mechanical parts. I am an Imperial soldier. That's all I can answer. Keanu stepped closer. You accepted a mission and you know nothing. You don't even have a direction for how to respond. Obeying orders is natural, and your judgment is correct. You really are the kind of perfect soldier the Empire wants. Then Keanu's voice turned cold. When you came to me the first time, did you really think it was voluntary? From the moment you used ballistic control without an auxiliary computing device, the higher-ups started preparing. Because an oddity like me, and then another person with Aegis talent appears. You might think you came to me after the Clay incident to get stronger, but this meeting, you can thank the Empire's cold, systemic algorithms for it. Luca couldn't hide his shake. His body betrayed the surge of emotion. Luca still believed it was his own choice, untouched by anyone else. So Luca said, "This was my own choice." Keanu spoke again. Everyone in this world is someone's slave. Some know it, some don't. Free will is just a comforting hallucination to make puppets think they pull their own strings. If you want to report to Hiras, you can do it anytime. Keanu's words left Luca confused. Now even Captain Hiras's words felt suspect. Luca's mind screamed at him. Don't doubt the Empire. Don't let other people's words sway you. But if even his hunger for success wasn't truly his own will, then what was the point of his entire manufactured existence? Luca couldn't find an answer. The scene cut to the simulation training hall. Luca hadn't reported what happened that day to Hiras. If he had, the Empire would have put him through a psychological evaluation. Luca couldn't avoid suspicion, whether he'd been infected with treasonous ideological rot. His psych score would obviously drop below where it used to be. The Empire didn't forgive ideological risks. In the worst case, they'd strip Luca of his Imperial Guard post and ship him off to a forced labor camp. The thought gave Luca a headache. Had Keanu predicted that too? Was that why he wanted to pull Luca back through old connections? Eli was in the middle of simulation training. Electrodes covered his body. He looked like he was locked in a hyper-lethal combat simulation. One glance told you the intensity was brutal. The moment he came out, Luca tossed him a drink. It was the first time Luca had ever seen Eli train this desperately. Eli hadn't expected Luca to seek him out on his own. Luca got straight to the point. You said nobles manipulate the aptitude test, right? Eli confirmed it. Everyone knows it's true. Luca wanted to know how Eli passed the psychological test. Eli narrowed his eyes. He knew Luca was treading on highly classified, treasonous ground, but Eli didn't pry. He simply told Luca the method. Show the outside world a standardized version of yourself. Quarantine your true consciousness deep within, acting only as a silent observer. That way, you can pass the psych test. Luca frowned. What kind of nonsense is that? Eli smiled like he'd expected that reaction. It's like sealing the self you want to protect and storing it deep inside. Even normal people without any mental control training can lose memories or split personalities after a shock. We're just doing it deliberately. If you keep acting like a loyal soldier's self will gradually take shape in your mind. And if you maintain that false self for too long, the original you sinks into the deep layers, like a rusted iron vault swallowed by the abyss. You might permanently overwrite your own soul. Luca couldn't help wondering where Eli learned this kind of thing. But either way, this was the method Luca needed to find the Luca who existed before he met Eli and Keanu. Even though Eli didn't know what Luca was planning, he still warned him to be careful. Interfering with psych tests is extremely dangerous. Luca hadn't expected to hear words like that from a noble. Eli truly seemed worried about him. Just then, Luca's communicator buzzed. It was Keanu calling him. The scene shifted. Luca and Keanu entered the lower sector. Today's lesson was live combat training. Keanu never mentioned what happened at the orphanage. He acted like nothing had happened, treating Luca the same as always. Somehow, that made Luca feel worse. It's full of criminals in there. You have 20 seconds. Clear everyone inside. Luca placed his hand on the electronic lock and crushed the locking mechanism into sparking shrapnel. The men inside hadn't even realized danger had arrived. A man sprawled on the sofa noticed the sound. Kid, you lost? You don't look like a customer. Even before entering, Luca had caught the faint scent of gunpowder and the distinct presence of energy weapons. He scanned their faces, their posture, their gear. He assessed threat levels and set priority targets. In seconds, a flawless tactical slaughter route finished compiling in his mind. The man leveled his gun at Luca. Blame yourself for coming to the wrong place. But right as he tried to fire, Luca's punch sent him flying. The others froze, because the man was literally cratered into the concrete wall. His gun clattered to the floor a heartbeat later. By the time they tried to fight back, it was already too late. Luca's pre-fight simulation had already locked them all in. A few shots later, Every weapon they had was knocked out of their hands. The boss shot up from his seat and fired at Luca in a rapid burst. Luca only shifted his body and slipped the shots. People like this made a living by killing, yet they couldn't even do that job properly. Luca pulled the trigger. At the same time, a man from inside the room finally rushed out with a stun baton. If you don't want to save up and buy new limbs, then black out on your own when you get hit. The man looked at Luca's gun, then at his own baton. After 1 second of hesitation, he jammed the stun baton directly into his own neck, electrocuting himself on the spot. After clearing the office, Luca's gaze moved to the bathroom. The last thing left was the suspicious noise coming from inside. When Luca saw what was in there, a violent jolt of pure disgust slammed through him. "You degenerate scum!" Kinu gave Luca high praise. "Good work. About 12 seconds." Luca frowned. "Why not just kill all these bastards?" Kinu narrowed his eyes. "Even bottom-feeding scum have their place in the ecosystem. We're outsiders. Interfering too much will fracture the delicate, rotten balance of this underworld." Luca wanted to argue, but he swallowed it. Plenty of people in this world couldn't protect themselves. That woman was one of them. Without power, this is what happens. Luca understood that. The higher he climbed, the more unfair the world looked. From that day on, Kinu kept taking Luca into the lower sector and throwing him into fights without giving him any information. It wasn't to teach Luca how to win. It was to make Luca understand something vital: how to respond to the situations he was thrown into. Knowing an opponent's strength was only an experience rule. Luca had to read the environment and choose the best course of action to go beyond that rule. The scene cut elsewhere. A grease-stained young woman hurried out to greet them. She was the woman Luca had rescued from the gang office not long ago. Turns out she was a mechanic. She'd been locked in a small room and subjected to months of agonizing torture. Miraculously, her psyche hadn't completely shattered. After psychological treatment, she quickly returned to everyday life. Kinu knew Gilda came from an orphanage. Gilda had shown talent in mechanical engineering since childhood, so Kinu funded her education. Even so, what Kinu wanted most was for Luca to stay alive. Just then, a familiar voice interrupted them. Gabriel, of all people. They hadn't expected to run into him here. Gabriel asked for 2 beers, but Gilda shut him down immediately. His nervous system was already damaged. Gabriel leaned close to Luca's ear. "You've been kicking over every damn hornet's nest in the underworld lately, haven't you? The gang bosses are talking about making a move on you. If they insist, I can't guarantee Gilda's safety." Kinu signaled for Luca not to worry. "They won't come here for now." The most shocked one was Gilda. She wanted to know how long "for now" meant. Maybe months, maybe years. Kinu didn't give a real answer, because in the slums, knowing too much was a quick way to catch a bullet. Maybe today would be the last time Luca ever saw them. Luca gradually understood what kind of people Gabriel and Gilda were. They'd worked for everything they had, just to survive down here. Even after what happened to her, Gilda faced reality head-on and had already started working again. Gabriel lived on the edge because he refused to be looked down on. For them, that might have been the best choice they had. Luca could only tell himself, never waste pity on the bottom feeders. Maybe this would be Luca's last time coming here. The scene cut to the Imperial Guard office. Luca reported some of the recent events to Hiras. After listening, Hiras started talking about Kinu's past. Kinu entered the trainee system at an older age, someone who, on paper, should have never become Imperial Guard. But back then, the Empire was so chaotic that it had to weaponize even its impure dregs. Even I'm not sure what kind of man Kinu truly is. When I was still a rookie, Kinu was already one of the Imperial Guard's key members, especially when it came to classified Black Ops. Luca couldn't hide his shock. That meant even the captain couldn't access Kinu's full records. The fact that Kinu valued Luca was real. He'd sent off several trainees before, but none lasted long, so it proved Luca was exceptional. But Luca was also the type most vulnerable to negative influence. So Hiras decided Luca should undergo a psychological test. Luca bowed respectfully. "I'm only following orders." Hiras rubbed his brow, then stopped Luca. To be honest, Imperial Guard trainees who take on missions like this only end up one of 2 ways. Either they are quietly erased from existence, or their achievements get recognized and they become core Imperial Guard. I want you to be the second. If you deliver results I'm satisfied with, I'll become your backing. More precisely, I'll adopt you. Luca Castoria. It has a nice ring to it. Luca froze, eyes widening. He never expected Hiras to take him as an adopted son. Castoria, one of the Empire's most prominent families. Luca was so euphoric he almost cursed out loud, barely able to suppress the violent surge of adrenaline. This was a deal between Luca and the captain, an opportunity Luca had fought for with his own hands. The scene cut elsewhere. Eli was training hand-to-hand combat. Every punch he drove into the heavy bag landed with a loud thud. He was pushing his mechanical arm output to the limit. In the end, he launched the 1-ton heavy bag straight into the ceiling. When it was over, Eli gulped air in huge breaths. Then he took out a jar of ointment and rubbed it onto the flesh around the joint connection. Luca spoke. You've trained your joints to the brink. Are you really the Eli I know? Luca could tell Eli was carrying immense mental pain. If there's anything I can do, just say it. Eli looked downcast. He clearly had something he wanted to ask Luca, but he still couldn't say it. Soon, just once. Promise me you'll do what I ask. Luca didn't answer right away. If Eli had to put it like that, it wasn't a small thing. If you ever find yourself in danger in battle, I will come for you, even if it means trading my own life. Eli wanted to tell Luca everything, but before anything happened, he still hoped it wouldn't unfold the way he feared. With Eli's help, Luca scored exceptionally well on the psych test and was even commended. Now Luca's next step was to fight his way into the Custoria family. For people from the bottom, it was one of the few chances to turn their lives around. 1 month later, the Imperial Guard assembled everyone. From this moment on, we will operate under a special military order. Our objective is to brutally eradicate the insurgent forces opposing the Empire. The rebellion is led by 3 great houses, with the Ramones family at the head. Luca's heart jolted. Luca's gaze snapped to Eli. Lillian Ramones, Claude's family. So this was what Eli had been worried about. Before deployment, every unit had to undergo a full cybernetic and ordnance diagnostic. After the inspection, the train rolled toward the destination. Luca didn't expect the Empire to assign an Imperial Guard member as a platoon leader. Top brass was even planning to use a bloody insurgency as a live-fire training ground. Luca's assigned deputy was a battle-hardened veteran, the kind of man who'd be a true asset on this mission. And everyone knew it. They were being used as training tools. No matter how drilled Imperial soldiers were in hierarchy and obedience, they wouldn't pledge loyalty to a brand new commander whose ability hadn't been proven. Even so, Luca had to take control and command them personally. In that moment, 2 options formed in his head. Option 1, let Sergeant Kodra handle it. Even if Luca gave a vague order, Kodra would still make it work. Safest path. Option 2, provoke their resentment and crush it with force. I am far better than you, so you will obey my orders absolutely. Defiance will be punished. Luca intended to kill resistance at the root, crush them under the heel of absolute, overwhelming force. Every gaze snapped onto Luca. Kodra grabbed Luca's hand, trying to pull him into the next carriage. Squad leader Luca, may I speak with you privately? Luca flung Kodra off by the arm. Kodra spun once in the air and crashed violently into the steel deck right in the middle of the troops. Luca's voice turned cold. You touch your superior without permission? You think your age makes me a fool? Kodra brushed at his combat suit and spoke evenly. I'm from the lower sector too. I grew up in an orphanage with a 2-digit number, and I'm young. So why does squad leader Luca, who's even younger, stand so far above you in rank? Anyone with a brain knows the answer, because he is better than you. He will be the best platoon leader you've ever seen. Kodra straightened and bowed his head. My apologies. I'll watch myself from now on, squad leader Luca. Sergeant Kodra's comprehension was razor sharp. He could tell Luca hadn't chosen the easy route. As time passed, they soon reached the rebels' fortress. On the Empire's forward line, the Imperial Guard captain would lay out the operation plan. Eli also learned what Luca had done earlier. Luca did it because he refused to be treated like a child. But in their eyes, an Imperial Guard trainee was a child. Before long, Hyros appeared before everyone. The rebel forces have entrenched themselves within the excavated ruins of an enigmatic ancient civilization. The area is enclosed by 2 walls, and there are 5 defensive towers inside. Your mission is to obliterate those fortifications, paving the way for our main forces to execute a ruthless, all-out siege from every flank. Every member of the armored corps wore full-body armor. Luca understood the scale of this suppression was massive. The scene cut. Luca and Eli met halfway between their camps. As agreed, Luca asked, "Is this because of the Ramones family?" Eli fell silent. Eli gave a powerless nod. Luca knew Eli had ties with the Ramones family, but their hands were tied. Siding with traitors meant being purged without mercy, and even the prestigious Caltica bloodline wouldn't be spared. Eli wasn't expecting a miracle. If there was any chance at all, he at least wanted to get Lillian out. Luca let out a short, bitter laugh. "You're trying to play matchmaker for the woman you love in me? You're out of your damn mind." Eli had no choice. Lillian didn't want to marry a noble man, so he introduced her to the most promising option, Luca. But saving Lillian was insanely dangerous. This wasn't just a discipline issue. If they were found out, the higher-ups would execute them on the spot. So the topic of Lillian ended there. Eli said he wouldn't interfere, but Luca already knew he was lying. Luca could see the shift in Eli through Aegis. That idiot was going to drag Lillian out no matter the cost. Whether Eli accepted it or not, didn't matter. For Eli's own sake, the best outcome was that he never met her. That might be the only way to save Eli. The scene cut. Luca returned to the staging camp. For them, the most critical areas were the head, and the heart. As long as those two vital zones remained intact, an Imperial soldier was practically immortal. If oxygenated blood still flowed to the brain, the medics could reconstruct everything else. Just then, Kodra found Luca. He'd studied the higher-ups files and knew Luca was strong. Still, as a 10-year veteran, he wanted Luca to hear his advice. Luca signaled for him not to worry. If it's reasonable advice, I will listen, no matter who it comes from. Kodra saluted Luca, visibly relieved. After the mechanized legion clears the towers, we breach the fortress. That's the basic flow. As they drew closer, the assault vehicle came to a stop. The mechanized legion troops poured out of the halted vehicles. He led the agile armored units in a charge toward a cane fortress. Pitch-black myrmidons, a deadly mix of second and third generation models, swarmed across the horizon like a relentless tide of soldier ants. The squad barely dared to swallow, eyes glued to the battlefield on the screen. Blue smoke rose from the ground, and the enemy began engaging the legion. Some units were hit, but losses were only 4 or 5 machines. Soon, several mech units entered firing range. In perfect unison, they launched missiles into the shield. Using the smoke as cover, the mech soldiers drew spears from their backs. The spearheads of the myrmidons were fitted with blades forged from a special mineral called holish. The holish triggered a violent neutralization reaction with the energy field, ripping a temporary breach straight through the shield. These were weapons issued specifically for this operation. Under the soldiers' relentless assault, the shield was finally shattered. In this battle, the Myrmidons' performance was critical. If the Myrmidons failed, the fight would become brutally difficult. All they could do was wait for the Myrmidons assigned to disable the towers to report back. About a minute later, static crackled through the comms. Towers disabled. Proceed to the next phase. Relieved exhalations rippled through the area. An involuntary smirk crept onto Luca's lips. The battlefield was a meat grinder, yet he was exactly the kind of twisted bastard who found a sixth sense of euphoria and validation within the carnage. If I wasn't like this, I would have gone insane. Now it's finally time to prove my ability. The plan called for infantry to strike from every direction at once. The higher-ups were determined to leave the rebels no route of escape. The subterranean tunnels beneath the enigmatic fortress were a labyrinthine nightmare. Even the mapped sectors plunged hundreds of meters into the abyss. But the rebels had modified the interior, so the intel might no longer be accurate. They had likely narrowed the access points to the underground facilities to keep Myrmidons out. Before long, Luca's squad reached a split junction. Luca decided to take point. Luca's deputy, Kodra, froze for a moment. Taking point in a place like this is dangerous, squad leader Luca. Luca asked, "You're worried if I die, you'll be held responsible?" Kodra didn't hide it. He nodded, but Luca had already made his choice. "I don't care what happens after I die. Whether you and the squad get demoted or docked pay, I don't care." A cold shiver ran through him, like the squad's gun muzzles were aimed right at the back of his neck. Someone was definitely imagining it, putting a bullet in the back of their new commanding officer's head. He was rushing because he had to find Lillian first. Eli had to be somewhere in these tunnels too. He'd entered from another route. If he ordered the unit to push forward, they'd break through quickly. Even if he could do it without sacrifices, he couldn't spend loyal soldiers' lives for personal feelings. So he meant to carry the risk alone. Then a trap snapped out from the ceiling. Kodra shouted a warning, but before he could finish, Luca flashed forward and destroyed the mechanism. Luca used the Aegis method and drove every sense to the limit. Sight, hearing, touch, smell, even taste. By tasting chemical traces in the air with his tongue, he could pull in a flood of information. In a single instant, he systematically dismantled the entire kill zone's trap array. The squad behind him broke into a cold sweat. Luca could feel his blood vessels dilating, blood surging relentlessly into his brain. The cranial pressure pushed him to the brink. Suddenly, everything around him felt infuriating. He grew impatient with the squad's slow movements. They weren't actually slow. His brain was just under extreme load. That was the price of power. The squad could feel his volatility now. In that moment, Luca was radiating the suffocating, hair-trigger bloodlust of a rabid beast. Luca kicked the tunnel's iron door clean off its hinges. The rebel it slammed into smashed against the wall and was crushed flat in an instant. Luca's speed was terrifying. So fast they couldn't even process what was happening. He charged in with cold indifference, as if he already knew where every enemy stood. His blade never stopped moving. Then he burst to the side, rushing a rebel at the flank. The edge sheared cleanly through the rebel's throat, and he casually volleyed the severed head through the air. The grisly projectile smashed squarely into the face of another rebel who was still frozen in shock. Before he could react, he was already beheaded. A rebel who looked like a veteran tried to raise his gun and aim at Luca, but aiming at him was practically impossible. He cleaved the incoming high-explosive missile clean in half mid-air. The detonating energy bypassed him harmlessly, streaking past his shoulders like two blazing parallel lines. The veteran went slack-jawed. He never got a second chance. His skull cracked under Luca's foot. The squad members who'd been defiant earlier swallowed hard. Luca's voice cut through them. "Sergeant Kodra, you're too slow. Keep up with me." The deeper they went, the wider the fortress became. Rebels hid in the open chambers and poured out relentless fire. They'd built a defensive line here. Tactically, it was a smart choice. Luca used a reflective mirror to study the line. Roughly 100 troops held the front. Behind them were retreating non-combatants. Some looked like nobles. Lillian might be among them. Kodra offered advice. They'd pushed too fast. Maybe they should pause and link up with the other squads. He closed his eyes and forced his mind to cool down. Kodra was right. He hadn't overloaded his brain like this in a long time. His nervous system was screaming under a critical load, bordering on lethal neural feedback torture. At the same time, Luca heard gunfire from another position, shots that didn't seem aimed at them. Movement flared behind them too. Another squad had reached their rear. If it wasn't his unit, then it was likely Eli's. "Their fire is split front and back. Now we push in." He flashed a signal. Two squad members carrying body-tall shields moved to the front. Gunfire poured into the shields, but the layered shells cracked under accumulated damage. They'd only hold for seconds. Behind the shield bearers, Luca studied the enemy, classified threats, and mapped the firing lines of the high firepower weapons. There were roughly 8 heavy-caliber weapons capable of blowing him to pieces in a single shot. He waited for the exact microsecond half of them entered their reload cycle and lunged. He vaulted over the shield bearers' heads. A straight-line push of about 2 seconds would be safe. The enemy panicked and dumped fire. He ignored pistols and rifles. Helmet and chest armor were enough. The only priority was protecting the face. He covered his neck and head with his left arm, raised his pistol with his right, and aimed. He fired first on the soldiers locking their high firepower weapons on him. As the shots rang out, their weapons detonated one after another. He crashed dead center into their formation. The sheer shockwave of his landing paralyzed their trigger fingers for a crucial fraction of a second. In that gap, he drew his side blade. At that range, the gunners couldn't react in time. With pressure from inside and outside, the enemy finally dropped their weapons and surrendered. Luca handed the prisoners over to Kodra, then he froze. Several bodies on the ground were painfully familiar. Members of Eli's squad. Eli had been ruthlessly pushing forward, using his own men as meat shields without a second thought for regrouping. Was he really driven to such madness that he'd cannibalize his own squad? Damn it. Eli Caltica. Damn it. Lillian Romanese. Luca wanted to help Eli, but he was an Imperial soldier. Choosing meant abandoning the other side, and he didn't know how to choose. But if he ran into Lillian, he would execute her without a second thought, even if it meant Eli would hate him forever. Sparing his friend's life was worth the price of bearing his eternal hatred. At the same time, Luca signaled for Kodra to stay behind and wait for the other squads. From here, Kodra would take command. Then he moved along the direction of the fighting. Those nobles weren't skilled with weapons. The gear was too heavy for them. At best, it bought them a sliver of time. Most of the suppression force had already entered and was cutting down the rebels. He had to admit something. It sounded cliché, but Eli wasn't just someone he trusted in battle. Eli was his friend. Among his peers, Eli had been the first person who could trade deep thoughts with him as an equal. Yet now, blinded by personal obsession, Eli was actively feeding Imperial soldiers into a meat grinder. A normal squad would never chase rebels at the cost of their own lives. Even if Eli truly made contact with Lillian, how would he get her out? In the end, Lillian was already marked for death. She would inevitably end up swinging from the executioner's gallows. Luca knew Eli loved Lillian. But was Eli really going to pay for her with his life? A voice cut Luca off. A man forced the words out, barely conscious. "I'm a noble of the Ramones family." Luca demanded immediately. "Where is Lillian Ramones?" The man froze. "I don't know where she went," but his pupils flicked to the side for a split second. One of the oldest tells of a lie. Luca crushed the noble's hyper-expensive cybernetic optic implant between his fingers. The noble screamed in agony. Luca's voice went cold. "Last chance. Where is Lillian Ramones?" The man blurted out her direction at once. Then Luca asked again, "Have you seen Eli Caltica?" The noble confirmed it. Eli was the one who had slaughtered them all, even after they surrendered. Before the words even finished, Luca obliterated the man's skull in a sickening crunch. They were going to be purged anyway. Killing them now might even count as mercy. Luca usually felt no guilt when he killed, but today, he felt numb. Was this simply what the battlefield was? Not long after, Luca heard gunfire and screams. Yes, he had caught up to Eli. Even though they'd gotten along, Luca had always felt a thread of unease. If Eli betrayed the Empire, what would he do? Now it was time to give the answer he had been avoiding. In the center of the dining hall, Eli stood there like he was about to deliver a speech. "So you still came? Eli, you really did it. You slaughtered your own loyal subordinates to feed your selfish obsession. All for one damn woman." all for her. Luca's right eye rotated on its own. In one corner of the banquet hall stood the Ramones family, the patriarch, his direct relatives, and Lillian among them. Luca clenched his teeth. Damn it. Damn it. For that damned woman. Was Eli really going to become the Empire's enemy? Eli's voice was heavy. I know you can't ignore this. He drew the longsword at his waist. Come, Luca. Fight me. Luca forced his fury down. In the name of His Majesty, the Emperor and the Empire's people, I shall pass judgment on you. The suppressed emotion made his teeth feel cold. He had to fight Eli now. He forced himself to think calmly. He had the advantage. If he didn't make a mistake, victory was his. But real combat never follows a script, and his true target wasn't Eli. His eyes snapped toward the woman trying to flee at the side. Eli wanted to protect the Ramones family, more precisely Lillian. He had to kill Lillian. Even if hatred followed later, at least it would save Eli now. He was willing to permanently sever their brotherhood right here, right now. As long as it meant he didn't have to execute Eli with his own hands. Kill the Ramones family and every witness. Bury Eli's atrocities. Even if suspicion remained as a Celtica heir, Eli could find a way to cover it. But Eli saw through him. You're going to ignore me and go straight for Lillian, aren't you? Luca didn't answer. He surged forward. Eli fired to stop him, gunshots cracking in a chain. For people like them, ballistic prediction was basic. Single shots were useless. This was only meant to slow him down. But before stepping onto the battlefield, Luca had forcibly overclocked his neural signal bandwidth to critical, self-destructive speeds. Upgraded, he could move faster and more precisely than Eli could predict, meaning Eli couldn't stop him anymore. He broke through Eli's line. Two of the Ramones' sons raised their guns and aimed at him. Eli shouted for them to drop their weapons and not resist. They tried to pull the triggers anyway. Too slow. Painfully slow. With a single, blinding sweep of his blade, he bisected the younger son's torso cleanly in two. Through Aegis, Luca could predict Eli's attacks. Luca spun and raised his sword, parrying the bullet. With a twist of the blade, he redirected its trajectory, straight into the other son at the side. Now only three remained. Hugo Ramones, Lady Ramones, and Lillian. Hugo watched both sons die and tried to shout something. His blood-slick blade impaled the patriarch's skull, silencing his final words in a burst of crimson. He didn't pull the blade out. He kept the motion and cleaved toward the wife beside him. In an instant, 4 deaths were completed. Only Lillian remained. Eli screamed from behind for him to stop. Lillian Ramones, the woman who once confessed her feelings to Eli. No matter what, he would never forget her, at least not until his conscience was completely gone. All Eli could do now was hope she died without pain. Was a swift death the best he could give her? Goodbye, Lillian Ramones. But when he saw her expression, he realized she was smiling. A twisted, euphoric grin blooming amidst the slaughter. Why was she smiling? His mind went blank for a heartbeat. That heartbeat gave Eli enough time to catch up. Eli slammed into him and knocked him aside. The two blades collided and locked, violently grinding against each other in a shower of sparks. His voice was cold. Eli, did you see her face? Her family died, and she's happy. Eli sounded like he understood. She's finally free from that family. They treated her like a tool for an arranged marriage. In the next breath, he kicked Eli away. Is Lillian Ramones worth this? You're smart. Don't be stupid. It's not too late. Eli didn't seem willing to accept the warning. Luca, you don't know anything. The families branded as traitors, including the Ramones, never truly raised a banner in rebellion. The Empire just fabricated a casus belli. This isn't a war. It's a premeditated political slaughter. Look at this so-called rebel defensive line. Pathetic. If they really meant to fight the Empire, they would have courted the holy state of Crete or the Bellado Federation. Luca couldn't refute it right away. Just as Eli said, 3 great houses supposedly united, yet the rebels were too small, and they had no outside support. If they were truly plotting a revolt, there was no reason not to seek help from Crete or Bellado. Both powers would love to see the Empire fracture from within, and if Eli was telling the truth, then in the end, Eli would die too, just like Lillian. At the same time, Lillian finally spoke. This is why the Empire targeted our family. She rummaged through her father's corpse. Then she pulled out a cube. Because of this. This is what lets them activate this ancient fortress. He didn't understand why she was bringing this up now, but Lillian could see it. He wanted to kill her because he feared Eli would be dragged down with her. You know your friend can't live the life he wants inside the Empire. But there's one choice that benefits all 3 of us. With this, we can trigger the subterranean fortress's ancient spatial transit matrix. Luca, help us break free from the Empire's control. He stared at the cube in disbelief. If my death is the only thing that will satisfy you, strike me down right now. I won't resist. Eli isn't as strong as you. If I die, it ends here. I don't want to ruin Eli's life. But if this relic can truly activate the spatial teleportation device, Eli and I can escape the Empire. You can pretend you never saw us. Only the Ramones know this passage. As long as we go in, no one will find us." After hearing Lillian out, Luca hesitated. He didn't care whether Lillian lived or died. But for Eli, this might be the best option. Eli had once had a chance to escape the Empire, but he gave it up for Luca. On a battlefield, it was easy to fake being missing or dead. Even if Luca killed Lillian right now and kept Eli alive, Eli wouldn't last forever. One day, Eli would cross a point of no return where even his prestigious family crest couldn't shield him from the executioner's block. Luca spun his sword once and slid it back into his belt. Eli started to speak, but Luca cut him off. "Shut up, Eli. I only demand one thing. If Lillian's spatial teleportation device doesn't exist or can't be activated, then don't stop me. You heard her. Lillian doesn't want to see you trapped." Eli bit his lower lip and looked at Lillian. Lillian actually nodded. In the end, Eli agreed it was the biggest concession he could make. He felt like his sanity had finally snapped. He was actively committing high treason to help Eli and Lillian Romanese escape. If the higher-ups found out, he would be dead. They quickly set a simple plan. Activate the spatial teleportation device on the lowest underground level. Get Lillian out, and take Eli with her. Just then, Lillian stopped Luca. Eli's forehead was still bleeding. Lillian took out a handkerchief and wiped his face. "If we're lucky enough to make it out alive, you two should just live together." Eli wiped away the blood and gave a weak smile. Lillian blinked, guilt rising. She hadn't expected Eli to go this far for her. Eli signaled for her not to blame herself. It was Lillian who had shown him the world outside. "If it weren't for you, my mind would have fractured completely in this gilded cage. I'm an anomaly, not a broken toy." After hearing them, Luca frowned. Lillian was the woman who had fueled Eli's unsettled thoughts. To him, unsettled thoughts were like an infection. Once they spread, they passed from person to person and metastasized like a lethal parasite, rotting the Empire from the inside out. If those dangerous ideas spread, the Empire would collapse. And even before that, the Balato Federation, or the Holy State of Crete, could strike and finish it off. But he didn't want the Empire to fall. If Eli weren't his friend, he would have killed him already. "I am not one of the restless." He chewed on the sentence again and again, branding it into his neural pathways like a desperate mantra. As the three of them went deeper, luck held. They met neither rebels nor Imperial troops. No Imperial unit had reached this depth before them, and the rebels clearly hadn't expected anyone to push this far underground. Lillian's father, Hugo Romanese, was ambitious. He thought he could deceive and use the royal house, only to be the one used instead. He asked how far it was. Lillian pointed ahead. "Just follow the corridor to the end." Lillian thanked him, but he wasn't doing it for her. He was paying back his debt to Eli. Lillian and Eli then agreed. If they made it out, they'd go to a border city. If they got separated, they'd meet there. Lillian even urged him to come with them, but he refused. He had no interest. His body and mind were pushed to the limit, and even his sharp judgment began to blur. Maybe the decision to help Eli was a fatal miscalculation born from severe neural burnout and cognitive collapse. But he couldn't lower his guard, and he still had to think about how he would report this afterward. Fortunately, the Imperial Guard captain thought well of him. He had been assigned to monitor Kinu, and even if suspicion fell, he didn't believe he would be executed. At the end of the day, Eli and Lillian were just a trainee and a noblewoman. They weren't big figures. They weren't the core of the rebellion. The higher-ups likely wouldn't dig too deep. Soon, they reached the end of the passage. He signaled for Eli to be ready. If there was no spatial teleportation device here, everything would end. Eli didn't answer. He only nodded. The moment Luca hit the door control, something felt wrong. His senses soaked up the abnormalities like a sponge. He had to find the source of that dread. Otherwise, he would die. Now he was certain. The culprit was behind the door. As the door cracked open, he shut his eyes and sorted the scents at speed. First, the coppery stench of fresh blood. Then, the suffocating reek of heavy machine oil and cold steel. An absolute void of human warmth or biological scent. He bit his lower lip. Then he opened his eyes. There was only one conclusion. Imperial Guard. 4 of them. He froze, thrown off balance. If it were a single Imperial Guard without powered armor, maybe he and Eli could fight with everything they had. But 4? Escape was impossible. Worse, the Imperial Guard wouldn't kill Lillian. They'd capture her alive. She wouldn't endure torture and interrogation. She'd give up everything. No matter how strong her will was, she was still just human. She hadn't been trained to ignore pain like he and Eli had. He had thought he could get them out and give Eli the life he wanted. It was a beautiful illusion. The moment Lillian was taken alive, their betrayal would be exposed. He had only one brutal option left. Execute Lillian himself before the guards could take her alive. But Lillian was the person Eli had fought to save. If Eli lost control and rushed the Imperial Guard, it would be over. At the same time, all 4 Imperial Guard members noticed him. The longer he hesitated, the more suspicious they'd become. The last chance was right there. Just as he turned to deal with Lillian himself, gunfire cracked behind him first. Eli had already pressed the muzzle to the dead center of Lillian's forehead and pulled the trigger. A merciless, instant execution. Tears slid down Lillian's face. Her beautiful fantasy had shattered. With a dull thud, Lillian collapsed to the floor. One Imperial Guard member walked toward them. "Luca, why did you two kill that person?" Eli answered without wavering. "Just the summary execution of a compromised and useless prisoner." Then they demanded he report every detail so they could judge the situation. After that, they left. He hadn't expected Eli to kill Lillian with his own hands. He had even imagined the worst case of Eli losing control. Yet this outcome still caught him off guard. The scene cut to the next day. The rebellion of the 3 great families was officially declared over. Not long after, Hiras summoned Luca. "Well done, Squad Leader Luca of Unit 21. Kodra spoke highly of you. He especially praised your combat capability. He says you're the best platoon leader he's ever seen. But he also noted that you struggle to build trust with subordinates. You can correct that by learning from Kinu. The report says you reached the lowest level under Lillian's guidance, extracted the ancient spatial transit matrix, and then promptly disposed of her. Why did you choose Lillian as the guide?" He stood perfectly still, face neutral. He replied, "Because Lillian had the lowest combat capability within the Ramoni's family. The battlefield had too many variables, so we chose the easiest prisoner to control." Hiras nodded. Reasonable. But he clearly still had doubts. He decided to strike first before the questioning went deeper. It was slightly rude, but safer. "You mean my relationship with Lillian?" he asked. "Not just me. Eli and I both had personal contact with Lillian Ramonese." He clenched his fist. "Eli and I are exceptional. Even if we had personal ties to Lillian, we are not idiots who would compromise a mission for that. You know that better than anyone, Captain. And honestly, I wanted to give her a little hope. I'm not without feelings. After she guided us, Lillian believed she might live. We believed that was the least we could do for her." A calculated lie woven seamlessly into the bloody truth was always the most impenetrable armor. That was exactly what he was doing. After hearing Luca out, the Imperial Guard captain smiled. "That's enough. We'll end it here." Just as he turned to leave, Hiras called him again. Hiras remarked, his tone laced with razor-sharp implication. "That being said, the Ramonese family's tactics were unexpectedly lethal to completely annihilate Eli's entire squad." Luca stayed calm. The report was clear. During an emergency pursuit, Eli's squad fell into a Ramonese ambush and was annihilated. He had no reason to panic. Still, he couldn't read what Hiras was probing for. Sweat threatened to break out at any second. Luca answered with chilling composure. "If I had been in Eli's position, I would have ensured my unit didn't face total annihilation. It seems the top rank belongs to me this time." Hiras laughed, loud and pleased. "I'm looking forward to what you'll do." In the days that followed, Luca stayed wound-tight, never letting himself relax. Scenes and faces kept flashing through his mind. The border city, where Lillian said she wanted to go. She never made it out of the Empire. She died on the battlefield, shot by Eli, the knight she once believed in. He couldn't even bring himself to look at her face. He understood it. Eli pulled the trigger because he was there. Otherwise, Eli would have rushed the Imperial Guard and chosen to die with her. The path had been twisted and brutal. But in the end, he still saved Eli. After returning to the capital, Acretia, the 2 underwent repairs and recuperation. Then they were awarded an honor medal for their merits, the 7th grade Cross Key Medal. Among all Imperial Guard trainees, only Luca and Eli received it. 2 days later, Luca called Eli behind the dorm building. He said bluntly, "I didn't expect you to kill Lillian yourself. I thought you'd charge the Imperial Guard in despair." Eli replied flatly, "If you hadn't been there, I would have done exactly that." He had expected the answer. Eli didn't kill her because he wanted to live. Luca's voice hardened. "You should quit. You're not fit to be a soldier." He frowned, the memory still raw. Eli's personal feelings had gotten squad members killed. Eli looked straight at Luca, his eyes dead. "As long as I exist, no matter what happens, even if you murdered me right here, the absolute authority of my family would still force me to become an Imperial Guard." Luca drove a merciless, gut-wrenching blow straight into Eli's abdomen. The metal clattered to the ground. Eli clutched his chest, doubled over, and wheezed against the wall. The impact carried a dull snap, like ribs breaking. Luca's voice was cold. "If something's broken, replace it with a mechanical organ. Quit acting pitiful." Eli slid down the wall and sat on the floor, burying his face in his knees. "How ridiculous that I even received a medal." He started regretting that he hadn't trained harder. He stayed silent because he knew Even if Eli had trained himself to the bone, the outcome wouldn't change. Eli wasn't a cold-blooded killer. The suffocating blood guilt of marching his own men to their deaths was slowly tearing his psyche apart. No matter what he did, he still couldn't save Lillian. And there was no doubt, Eli wouldn't live long. Maybe it was his thoughts. Maybe it was fate. Either way, Eli didn't belong here. After they returned, Eli planned to take leave and go back to his hometown. He didn't ask why. He only sensed Eli had made some kind of decision. He hesitated, then finally asked the question that had been eating at him. Why could Lillian still smile after her whole family died? Eli looked at the sunset. Lillian Ramones had been engaged since birth. The man was over 30 years older than her. He paid a massive bride price to the Ramones, but the terms were brutally strict. He even sent photos, videos, and records of his late wife, demanding Lillian be meticulously groomed into a flawless, living replica of the dead woman, from appearance to speech to the smallest habits. Even the name Lillian came from that requirement. That's why she was so fluent in Balato. He couldn't process it at first and frowned. The sheer depravity of the demand was nauseating. A grotesque fusion of absolute power and twisted obsession hitting him like a physical blow. He asked quietly, "So she's been abused since birth?" Eli confirmed it. Claude was the only one who ever pitied her, but he still didn't understand. "Then why did you try to push Lillian onto me?" Eli laughed, covering his face. It had been his plan all along. "I told Claude that you were the Imperial Guard captain's illegitimate son. That's why he made that suggestion to you." He blinked. "A lie that ridiculous." "And he believed it?" Eli answered calmly. "Anyone can see the captain favors you. If you were his illegitimate son, then a kid from a 2-digit orphanage rising all the way into the Imperial Guard trainee system becomes easier to believe. And the captain is from the Castoria family. If you married her, Lillian might have gained her freedom." A bitter taste coated his mouth. Eli was his friend, but he was no saint. He was a manipulator who would lie, discard his own men, and even deceive him without a second thought. And the joke was, he still trusted him. The scene cut. Luca visited instructor Kinu again. Kinu teased with a grin. "So our war hero finally shows up. I heard you received the 7th grade Cross Key Medal?" He visited Kinu regularly because Kinu was someone he had to keep a close watch on. Kinu understood perfectly. He was acting under that high-ranking Legion commander's order. He replied lightly, "It's just a 7th grade Cross Key Medal, something anyone could get. It's nothing compared to your glorious record, instructor." He sat down in a nearby chair. The relationship between them wasn't stiff anymore, less superior and subordinate, more like mentor and disciple. Kinu skimmed his combat records. "You used Aegis well, but you rely too much on individual ability. As a commander, you have a flaw. Your subordinates don't really obey you, do they?" In his eyes, they were all excellent Imperial soldiers. Even if the order came from an unfamiliar squad leader, they would execute it without hesitation. Kinu rubbed his chin and thought for a moment. "As a commander, you have a fatal bleeding heart. You'd rather absorb lethal risks yourself than treat your squad as expendable ammunition, because to him, that was the only way to avoid losing combat strength." But Kinu rejected his view outright. "The more you fight on the front line, the heavier the load on your brain. That undermines the most basic skill of a commander, decision-making. You burned resources you should have preserved, all to protect your people." Luca couldn't accept it. "So you're saying I should spend my squad members?" Kinu didn't mean ordering them to die. He meant manipulating them into willingly marching to their own deaths. Kinu tapped the desk beside him. Gilda and Gabriel's images appeared on the screen. "Those two would be happy to help you." He understood. It was because he had helped them before. But Kinu said it wasn't enough. "When real danger arrives, they'll betray you. You need deeper bonds built through emotional connection. Make them see you like family, like a friend. But keep the distance. If you get too close, you won't be able to sacrifice them as expendable pawns without hesitation." Kinu's words carried a chill. He said it plainly. "I don't like that." Kinu didn't think he was wrong. If anything, that was exactly why he valued him. The key is this: consume their devotion, but offer nothing in return. That is the ultimate secret to weaponizing human connection. He frowned. "What if the mind can't bear other people's sacrifices? Guilt? Conscience? The weight of it?" Kinu answered lightly. "You surgically excise that weakness. If you let the dead drag you down, you will never claw your way to the apex, never stand above them." He nodded slowly. This wasn't about acceptance anymore. It was reality. Then he took his leave from Kinu. The scene cut to the next day. He hurried to the Imperial Guard captain's summons. Hyris was sending him to one place, Clashia Academy. He tried to refuse, but Hiras shut his refusal down. "You've never experienced noble society. This time, you'll get a taste of it. indirectly, if you truly want to become part of the Castoria family. In the end, he had no choice but to accept. When the appointed time arrived, engine roar rolled over the airfield. A black aircraft descended onto the pad. A girl's voice called out, "Stop gawking like a stray mutt and get inside." You couldn't see inside from the outside. Her tone carried impatient bite. He shrugged and stepped in. Inside, he saw the girl who'd spoken. He started, "I am an Imperial Guard trainee. My name is..." Before he could finish, she cut him off. "I know your name. Don't waste my time." Her attitude was aggressive, the unmistakable stench of a spoiled aristocrat who desperately needed a punch to the teeth. That meant noble, most likely. He gave her a brief glance. She looked about the same age as him. "I'm here under the Imperial Guard captain's order. Destination, Clashia Academy." The girl let out a cold laugh. "What difference does that make to you?" Then she turned away, like looking at him for one more second would make her explode. A thought flashed through his mind. He wanted to punch her square in the face. "Damn nobles," he said flatly. "Understood, miss of the Castoria family." For the first time, she looked him in the eye and frowned. "How did you know?" He explained. "Simple deduction. Very few people dare show displeasure toward Captain Hiras's orders." He also waited silently. Maybe she already knew he had guessed. Maybe she really was the captain's daughter. If he was wrong, it would only be a brief embarrassment. Fortunately, the gamble paid off. She seemed intrigued by his judgment, and her attitude softened slightly. "Giselle Castoria," she introduced herself. "I'm here as your guide on my father's orders. But stop acting like you can see right through me. It pisses me off." He thought of Lillian. Compared to her, Giselle's attitude was practically angelic. He didn't understand why he had to keep bending his back. He wasn't doing this to grovel to some lofty figure. He accepted the academy assignment precisely to escape that kind of life. He was sure Hiras understood his intent. Better to bite his own tongue off than kiss the ass of someone who hated him. He said coldly, "We'll each do our part. You guide me, and I follow. Is that acceptable now?" Giselle looked genuinely caught off guard, staring at him for a long moment. Then she bit her lower lip in frustration, said nothing, and turned away again. A spoiled brat who made him want to shatter her nose. And he meant that literally. He folded his arms and looked out the window. Before he realized it, they had arrived at Clashia Academy. After all, no matter how much pride she had, even a noble girl wouldn't openly defy her great father. So Giselle could only complain under her breath while doing her job as a guide. After climbing the steps, a towering statue of the first emperor came into view. The inscription below praised him, "Humanity's Guardian, Dino Clashia." He had seen Clashia Academy on the media countless times, but this was the first time he could truly feel the place breathing around him. The moment he stepped onto the grounds, he felt eyes locking onto him from every direction. Students moving through the campus stared at him, their expressions clouded with confusion. Almost everyone passing by wore high-grade mechanical bodies. To him, wasting that kind of top-tier cybernetic hardware on trash like this was an absolute joke. They were just a crowd of spoiled, coddled deadweights. Just then, Giselle stopped him. "Don't you have the light purple uniform?" She looked a little flustered. Her father hadn't told her he would show up completely unprepared. Her reaction actually amused him. At that moment, a student finally recognized him. Soon, he heard someone calling his name. It was another Imperial Guard trainee assigned here, Felix Eigen. The Eigen family was also a prominent, heavy-hitting noble house. Giselle seemed to recognize Felix too, and she chose not to interrupt their conversation. She gave them a short window to catch up. Felix slung an arm around his shoulder. "The captain favors you like crazy. Now he's not even hiding it. He sent his own daughter to stick by your side." He laughed softly. "She's an annoying brat. If we were outside the walls, I would have shattered her nose by now." Felix burst into laughter at Luca's complaint. Even an Imperial Guard captain loves his daughter. Maybe he wants you to become his live-in son-in-law. Even if that were true, Luca couldn't stand a woman like Giselle. If things fell apart later, it wouldn't be surprising. Besides, he had a secret agreement with the captain. In exchange for monitoring Kinu, he would be brought into the Castoria family, not as a live-in son-in-law, but as an adopted son. Still, Felix's guess couldn't be dismissed entirely. Felix was open and friendly. He lowered his voice and asked Luca, "That part, has it been modified?" Luca caught Felix's gaze and knew exactly what he meant. "No, not yet." Felix looked unsurprised and started rummaging through his pocket. Traditionally, military academy boys sent on assignment were popular with girls. Luca looked down and saw 001 on the display, which made him freeze. Felix casually introduced some basics about the academy. Luca liked Felix's personality. Maybe they could actually become friends. Felix had mentioned the dorms earlier. Geniuses from the lower sector like Luca and noble kids who weren't favored by their families lived there. They couldn't afford private housing. So even inside the academy, class still existed. With Giselle leading the way, Luca soon arrived at the dorms. At the entrance, a robot guided him onward. Luca couldn't help thinking, This is where commoners and useless nobles live? No wonder it was called the best academy. Maybe it isn't suited for soldiers, but this is where true talent gathers. Luca sat on the couch and slipped into meditation. This place was nothing like his imagination. After bringing Luca to the dorm, Giselle exchanged contact information with him. She was still annoyed, but she had to carry out her father's assignment. Luca thought, maybe Giselle wasn't just a spoiled kid. As Giselle was leaving, she gave Luca a small piece of advice. Don't get close to the dorm head, because she was the craziest person in the entire academy. Right then, the doorbell rang. A girl, about a head shorter than him, spoke in a fluster. Hi, I'm the dorm head. She looked genuinely surprised. He scratched the back of his neck, a little awkward. I'm the Imperial Guard trainee they sent. He gave her outfit a quick once-over. Worn cuffs, faded clothes, and no family name, meaning she wasn't noble. He couldn't see a single sign of madness on her, so he guessed Giselle might simply hate people from the lower sector. The girl looked shy. Nice to meet you, Mr. Luca. I'm Barbara. He motioned for her to relax. He was from the bottom, too. And you're the dorm head. That's making it in its own way. Barbara smiled, a little at a loss. He guessed she had fought her way here with the same kind of effort he had. Barbara stepped forward, then waved him along. Come on, Luca. I'll show you the dorm. No refusing. Dorm head's duty. He watched Barbara walking ahead. Her vivid red-gold hair was still beaded with water, like she'd showered right after class. He thought she must be obsessed with time, but through Aegis, he still sensed a faint wrongness. Though if Barbara was simply diligent, it would fit too. The scene cut to the next day. Luca put on the Clashia Academy uniform. Giselle was already waiting under the teaching building early in the morning, because Hiras had arranged for her to attend class with him. If Giselle kept the same attitude as before, Luca figured he would go insane. Just as the two were about to leave, a voice made Giselle flinch. It's been a while since I talked to you, Giselle. Giselle narrowed her eyes. Disappear from my sight. Now, Barbara shrank back, visibly scared. I just wanted to say hi. You always avoid me. Giselle turned around and walked briskly right up to Barbara. Hello, Barbara. And goodbye? Satisfied? Then get lost. I've got nothing to say. She turned and walked off. After all, Luca couldn't be late for his first class. Giselle and Barbara clearly had history, and Giselle's attitude toward Barbara wasn't much different from how she treated Luca, but Luca was confused. With Barbara like this, could she really be the dorm head? He couldn't understand it. Luca's curiosity was sparked, so he bluntly asked Giselle what she actually knew about Barbara. Giselle answered briefly, clearly unwilling to talk. I just know what she looks like. We enrolled the same year. Luca asked, You don't like Barbara? The question seemed to hit a nerve. Giselle stopped suddenly. Giselle said coldly, Barbara is the most insane mental patient in all of Clashia Academy. And yet, Barbara obsessively clung to Giselle. It might have sounded entertaining, but Luca didn't want to get involved. What he had to do now was endure 2 months, then become a noble. After that, he wouldn't have to worry about rumors anymore. But these classes were too boring, and Luca couldn't help wanting to figure out the relationship between Giselle and Barbara. In here, nothing offered him any entertainment, because these courses were prepared for nobles. Felix didn't want to spar with Luca anymore, because Felix knew he couldn't win, but Luca only wanted a real fight. If this kept going, he would start to rust. Maybe it was the training camp life still clinging to him. His head was full of war and weapons. He didn't care who it was. Even a screaming match with him would do. Right then, a voice cut him off. You've been sticking to Miss Giselle all week. What are you to her? Luca didn't expect the trouble to walk right up to his door, so he shot back. Do you like Giselle? The Center Park guy's reaction answered everything. Luca was almost surprised. Someone actually liked that annoying girl. In embarrassment and rage, the Center Park guy swung a fist at Luca, but Luca subdued him with a casual flick of the hand. Luca couldn't believe it. He was actually dumping his frustration on someone like this. He felt like he could kill him without even throwing a real punch. Luca told him flatly that he had no interest in Giselle. Before long, the two ended up sitting off to the side and chatting. Because Luca wanted to get info from him, what was really going on between Barbara and Giselle? Enrico's answer sounded bizarre. Her nickname is the Witch. Nobody at the academy likes her. Anyone who gets close to her ends up dragged into robot rampage incidents. 5 people have been injured in the last 3 years, so students call it Barbara's curse. Luca was surprised. Statistically, that's insane. It sounds more like someone is manipulating it. Enrico nodded. That was everyone's first thought, but there's no trace of manipulation or proof. The only link is this. Every victim was close to Barbara. Luca learned from Enrico that Barbara became dorm head not because she was exceptional, but because the position had no benefits, only trouble. Just then, Enrico pointed ahead. 3 girls were blocking Barbara's path. One of the girls dumped water straight over Barbara. Oops. Sorry, Barbara. I'll wash your clothes for you, so take them off right here. Barbara suppressed her emotions and said quietly, It's fine. I'll change on my own. The moment Barbara refused, the lead girl burst into laughter. Did I hear that right? Someone like Barbara just rejected my kindness? Take it off. I'll wash it and return it like new. Facing the threat, Barbara shut her eyes tight. Her hands trembled as she tried to undo the fastenings on her top. Normally, Luca might have ignored a scene like this. He didn't like helping someone with no will to resist, so that was why her hair had been soaking wet before. He rolled the dagger in his left hand. You're lucky, Barbara. He threw it. The blade punched clean through the empty cup in the girl's hand. The girls screamed. When they saw him, their eyes went wide. They knew he was an Imperial Guard trainee on assignment. His voice was cold. If you don't leave, my fist might land on your noses. I don't care whether you're girls. After a moment of hesitation, the girls left with bitter faces. Barbara called out to him and thanked him for stepping in. Flushed and disheveled, Barbara looked at him with a red face, his mouth curled into a smirk. So what? You're saying I'm close enough now to get attacked by robots too? The scene cut. Enrico was panting hard, visibly shaken. That woman was Carissa Kano, Enrico said. You picked the wrong enemy. Luca recognized the name. The Kano family doesn't sound that prominent. Enrico shook his head. On the surface, sure, but the Kano family has deep ties to the lower sector. They control gangs from the shadows and make money through illegal business. They may already be digging into your background. Luca signaled he wasn't worried. He was from an orphanage, with no family. Enrico added one more line. Carissa is vindictive. Barbara's curse killed her boyfriend. Luca nodded, not expecting there to be so much history behind it. Just then, a voice from the side cut the two of them off. He turned around and saw it was Giselle. He motioned for Enrico to step forward and say hello. You really like her, don't you? Enrico immediately started stumbling over his words. Tell her. Say hi for me. With that, Enrico turned and bolted. See? Enrico made a friend. He seems pretty kind, but Giselle felt a chill crawl up her spine because she realized that guy had been hovering near her the whole time. Seeing Giselle's reaction, he knew Enrico didn't stand a chance anymore. The scene shifted. He was summoned by Kinu. Someone had reported that he attacked a person with a dagger. Just as he expected, the former Imperial Guard member let him off. You're like a wolf that fell into a flock of tame sheep. The kids here aren't here to learn how to fight, he nodded. But they're all acting like my fangs can't touch them. Kinu burst out laughing at that. To you, these students might look like sheep, but some of them are monsters wearing sheep skin. Mutant freaks even worse than wolves. He took the dagger from Kinu's hand. I'll remember that. Kinu didn't seem to expect much. He only smiled. It was like Kinu already knew he had come here for monsters from the start. Compared to a bland, boring life, he preferred hunting monsters. After leaving the office, he deliberately headed toward the less crowded gym and the warehouse area. Everyone at Clashia Academy knew he had helped Barbara. If the rumors were true, a rampaging robot would come after him. He stopped in the middle of the woods. Then 3 people closed in and surrounded him. You're Luca, right? One look told him they were campus punks. Kersa told us to send her regards. The Kano family pays back every grudge. You're not going to run crying to your superiors just because some regular students rough you up, are you? Especially when you're such a big-shot Imperial Guard trainee. The 3 punks burst into laughter. Last chance, Imperial Guard trainee. Kneel and apologize to Kersa. She says that's the only way you walk away. But Luca wasn't afraid of them. The big man clenched his jaw, an obvious signal that his prosthetic was switching into combat mode. A rising hum ran through the brute's limbs as the output power ramped up. The guy had a high-powered prosthetic, and for him, that was perfect. Then a red infrared line swept over them. A patrol robot had spotted the group and blared a warning. The punk in front started sweating. You're sure you checked? There shouldn't be patrols here at this hour. The punk decided to let Luca off for now. Beside them, the robot kept repeating, Do you need help? Its voice was full of static, and its movements were wrong, jerky, and unnatural. A male student shoved the robot aside. The robot staggered from the push. That abnormal reaction made the student instinctively step back. Before he could even process it, the robot extended its arm. An iron fist slammed into his face. His head burst open like it was made of cheap props. Seeing that, the other student froze, mind going blank. The guy who'd been provoking Luca a moment ago was trembling now. The robot hunched low, sprang forward, and tried to go after another student, right as it drew back to throw a punch. Luca kicked the robot and sent it flying, because if they all died here, he would be the one stuck holding the bag. The robot's hardened shell was already cracked and shattered. One of the punks pointed at it in horror. That's Barbara's curse! The witch's curse is real! Luca clicked his tongue. Top students from Clashia Academy, and you still believe in curses? He didn't buy that kind of nonsense. Then he walked straight toward the robot. It lay there like a dead beast. Yet a low roar rumbled from inside its body. It was pushing itself into maximum output, but it wouldn't last more than a few minutes. He understood immediately. The robot wasn't rampaging from a simple malfunction. It was coming for him on purpose, someone's handiwork. He took a deep breath. He couldn't wait. The robot dug into the ground and charged straight at him. Luca shifted to the side, narrowly dodging a lethal swipe from its claws. Even in a rampaging state, the robot's reactions were terrifyingly fast. Its movements looked like it was driven by a military-grade kill heuristic. One hit from those razor claws, and he'd probably be eating through a feeding tube for months. But this still wasn't enough to satisfy him. He needed deadlier attacks. Needed a heavier adrenaline rush to spike his dopamine. After dodging a few more times, he launched the machine backward with a bone-shattering kick. He could tell instantly. This thing was no standard patrol drone. The moment he reached behind his back, from the robot's perspective, it registered as a quick draw for a gun, prompting it to lunge at him with full force. But he didn't have a gun. He tossed his dagger into the air, and the robot snapped its optical sensors upward, glitching through a loop of erratic twitches as it tried to analyze the flying object. It was a cheap trick to fry its tactical processors. The more meaningless the motion, the more computing power it wasted trying to predict his intent. The machine's hesitation lasted only a microsecond, but that was all he needed. He slipped into its blind spot and brutally hyperextended its mechanical arm until the joint shattered. Gears, wires, and metallic fragments exploded across the ground. Watching the sheer brutality of it, the punks nearly wet themselves in terror. Then the broken robot crackled, its voice warped by static electricity. "Do you need help? Do you need help?" A chilling smirk hung on his lips. His craving still wasn't satisfied. A tin can of this caliber couldn't feed his bloodlust. The exact second his gaze locked onto one of the punks, the guy spun around and bolted like a terrified rat. At the same time, an Imperial Guard aerial vehicle swept in with sirens wailing. It hovered right over his head, the floodlights under its belly washing him in a harsh, blinding white. The scene shifted to the next day. After the incident, a security agency demanded his cooperation in their investigation. Jillian wanted him to help them catch the criminal hiding among the nobles. Luca thought it could have been a commoner too, but Jillian shot that down. It was impossible. No commoner could bypass the firewall and breach Clashia Academy's closed network. Just as he was about to refuse, Jillian brought up the fact that he was studying Aegis, making him more capable than anyone under Jillian's command. Luca froze for a beat. He hadn't expected his file to spell out currently studying Aegis combat arts with such terrifying clarity. Seeing his reaction, Jillian chuckled softly and offered something interesting about Aegis. Users of Aegis Spictema were placed on a special high-priority watch list. Of course, only those who learned it properly, like him, not cheap street punks. Jillian added, "If you're curious, ask the person teaching you Aegis combat arts." Right then, a voice cut him off. Giselle stormed up to him, her hand raised like she was about to slap him across the face. "Didn't I tell you not to go near Barbara?" Luca nodded half-heartedly. "I just can't stand watching a bunch of people gang up on one person." Hearing that brush off, Giselle knew he still wanted to throw down. He wasn't afraid of Kirsa's retaliation in the slightest. If anything, he was eager for the bloodshed. Giselle thought for a moment. "I'll go meet Carissa and ask her to mediate. If it's me asking, Kirsa should back off a little." Her words caught him off guard. He couldn't understand why Giselle was going out of her way to smooth this mess over. But judging from her tone, she clearly had deep ties with Carissa. Giselle seemed absolutely confident that she could keep Kirsa on a leash. Luca agreed to the plan, which actually left Giselle looking surprised. He said, "Then let's go see Kirsa right now. I don't want to draw any unnecessary heat from my superiors anyway." He only agreed to meet Kirsa because he needed to verify a few dark suspicions of his own. The scene shifted. Carissa told Luca the supposed reason she'd been bullying Barbara. Barbara had gotten her boyfriend killed. He didn't buy it for a second. Carissa didn't look like the type to start a blood feud over something like that. He asked, "Are you sure you didn't deliberately hand your boyfriend over to Barbara to be dealt with?" Then he pulled up a projection. "If things don't go your way, you send your lackeys to cause trouble. How could I refuse? Just like what you did to me before. You just needed an excuse to torment Barbara." His deliberate provocation made Carissa snap. She slammed the table hard. "You damn bastard!" Beside them, Giselle signaled for her to calm down. Carissa still tried to argue. "Are you ignoring my orders right now?" Under Giselle's cold stare, Carissa choked on her words and averted her eyes. Then Giselle gestured for him to step outside first. Their dynamic was exactly what he expected. A strict hierarchy of superior and subordinate. But if that were true, it raised a glaring question. Why didn't Giselle just order Kirsa to stop the bullying? Luca would only be stationed at the academy for 2 months at most. Jillian really had his hands tied as an investigator, since he couldn't just drag noble brats into an interrogation room whenever he pleased. Not long after, Giselle came out into the hallway too. "I've already covered this up, so don't cause trouble again, and don't go near Barbara. Someone died this time because you ignored my warning." Luca bared his teeth in a grin. "I heard only nobles can operate robots, so I tested it out carefully. And Kirsa is one of the people who hates Barbara." Giselle motioned for him to drop the detective act. "Investigators won't casually open a case on noble kids. Are you mocking me right now?" He looked straight at her. I'm just stating facts. And for the record, Carissa follows your orders like a loyal dog. Giselle avoided his gaze. Family influence dictates everything. Carissa doesn't have the standing to ignore my orders, that's all. Luca pressed her. So, did you order Carissa to harass Barbara? Giselle's pupils trembled slightly. Luca cut in before she could organize her thoughts. Carissa needed a reason to harass Barbara, and she manufactured that reason on purpose. Hearing that, Giselle lunged forward and grabbed his collar. Giselle hissed in his face. Are you having paranoid delusions? I heard one of the side effects of running a high-performance cybernetic body is severe brain anomaly. Overloading your neural network causes actual mental illness. Go get a thorough exam while you're at it. The moment the words left her mouth, she realized she'd lost her composure. Before leaving, she warned him to stop stirring up trouble. Given the current board, he figured Giselle was the most suspicious player in this entire game. Still, something felt off. Why did Giselle look so genuinely terrified? The scene shifted. Lunchtime had arrived, and a girl with vibrant orange-gold hair sat beside Luca. Then, Barbara handed him a bento box. He looked confused. Barbara, thank you, but what is this? Barbara wore a timid expression. You helped me, and because of that, you might have gotten dragged into the robot rampage incident. I'm just really glad you're okay. While you're at the academy, can I make you bento? He thanked her, but refused the meal. He didn't want to spark any annoying misunderstandings. Barbara hesitated. I don't mind if people misunderstand. He wondered if Barbara actually had a crush on him. If she harbored real feelings for him, it would be a massive pain in the ass. Right then, he asked her directly, You knew getting too close to me could trigger a cybernetic kill mode. Why do you keep coming near me? Are you trying to get me attacked? Barbara looked genuinely flustered. I don't know why this keeps happening. He wanted to pry open her true intentions, so he pressed where it would sting. Carissa keeps harassing you because Giselle is pulling the strings. If Giselle doesn't get what she wants, she won't stop until someone's dead. But Barbara's response made his blood run cold. He thought he already had her completely figured out, only to realize his read was dead wrong. He stared at her and asked, Do you know why Giselle hates you? At that exact moment, Barbara stopped him. She lifted her head and smiled faintly. In that instant, an icy chill crawled up his spine. Luca, why would I tell any of you? Kinu's warning echoed in his skull. Some of these sheep were actually monsters wearing human skin, mutant freaks far more terrifying than wolves. He just never expected the deadliest monster to be the quietest girl in the room, Barbara. The scene shifted again, 2 days later. Luca reported his dark discovery to Lillian. Carissa had deliberately set her own boyfriend up to get close to Barbara, just so she could manufacture a twisted excuse to torture the girl. Lillian nodded grimly. Looks like putting you on this was the right call. Then he asked Lillian if he actually had the jurisdiction to push the investigation further. Lillian spread his hands. I can check 1 or 2 people, but if I grab the wrong noble, the blowback will hit me hard too. He frowned at Lillian's enthusiasm. Didn't take you for a bleeding heart justice warrior. Lillian laughed and shook his head. I just want to throw the arrogant bastard who thinks they can outsmart me into a dark cell. Next, he asked if Lillian had looked into Barbara. Lillian looked genuinely puzzled. It was literally impossible for a bottom-feeder commoner to crack the Academy's military-grade firewall and hijack the internal network to puppet those robots. He also understood exactly why the nobles were the prime suspects. They could easily rig the robots during manufacturing or slip in malicious kill code before delivery. With enough money and power, buying off the right people was child's play. That's when Lillian remembered a crucial detail. Barbara's sponsor was the Castoria family. After Luca finished exchanging intel with Lillian, he cut the comms. He felt like the threads were finally connecting, only to snap right at the end. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. The most direct method to get answers would just be brutal interrogation. These pampered nobles had zero training in pain tolerance or resisting interrogation, but flat-out torturing them wasn't an option here. He'd have to take the long way around. For the very first time, he went out of his way to find Giselle. She was currently practicing prosthetic body maintenance. The students around her were actually working hard. Turns out even nobles weren't completely useless. Even while tinkering with the tools at the workbench with only one hand, her technique was sharp and practiced. It looked like she hadn't gotten into Clashia Academy on her family name alone. She looked genuinely puzzled to see him. What do you want? After taking a sip of her water, she asked again. He tossed out a deadpan joke. I missed you. Giselle nearly choked and spat her water everywhere. Are you out of your damn mind? She glared at him with a volatile mix of shock and pure disgust. Get to the point. I'm busy. He glanced around. The lounge was completely empty, except for the two of them. He spoke up. From now on, I want you to stop lying to me and stop hiding the truth. Giselle bristled at his interrogator tone. He added coldly, I've officially accepted an investigation request from the Imperial Guard. A soldier follows orders. The guard told me to investigate this mess, so my hands are tied. At the mention of the Imperial Guard, Giselle stopped arguing. I hate to pull this card, but I'll remind you anyway. My father is an Imperial Guard captain. It was a blatant warning leveraging her status, but it did absolutely nothing to him. He cut straight to the bone. You want Barbara expelled from the academy? So you torture her. I found out the Castoria family is the one sponsoring her. Giselle flared up immediately. Do you even know I was the second victim of that curse? Isn't that enough of a reason for me to hate her guts? We used to be friends. But he thought to himself, if they were truly friends, she wouldn't have turned on Barbara over something like that. Giselle turned to storm off, clearly still hiding some dark secret. He stepped into her path and pressed on. The Imperial Guard believes the robot rampage was human-engineered. Based on motive alone, you're the prime suspect. Giselle exploded in pure rage. You're accusing me? I'm a victim of Barbara's curse too, Luca answered with terrifying absolute zero. A criminal hiding behind the mask of a victim is the oldest trick in the book. You're from the Castoria family. You're aiming to become a top-tier engineer, and you understand robotics perfectly. You have the exact skill set required to manipulate an AI network without leaving a trace. Hearing that, Giselle turned her back. She wanted him to stop digging into this mess. But he didn't believe she was the one behind the attacks. He just wanted her to spill everything she knew. Luca's lethal instincts, however, kept aiming straight at Barbara. Right at that moment, the adjacent door slid open. He swallowed the rest of his interrogation. Barbara stood in the doorway holding a bento box. Luca, I've been looking for you everywhere. You weren't in your usual spot. Barbara flashed a bright, radiant smile, but it felt entirely like she was mocking him. Luca was deeply unsettled by how she managed to find him. If someone had been tailing him, his senses would have picked it up instantly. Was there a blind spot he had completely missed? Why did she constantly play the helpless victim in public? And if that was just an act, who was the real monster pulling the strings from the shadows? He fought down a violent urge to lock the door. Give him 10 minutes. Just 10. And he could rip the entire truth right out of her throat. He clenched his fists, forcing himself not to snap her neck. Luca's voice dropped to absolute zero. Drop the fake smile, Barbara. Looking at your face makes me sick. Barbara's eyes widened in sheer panic, tears welling up in the corners. Luca, why are you talking to me like this? I like you. You even saved my life. If there's a misunderstanding, we can talk it out. Hearing that garbage made him want to vomit. He grabbed a chair and hurled it, sending it smashing into the wall right beside her. Giselle immediately signaled for him to dial it back. He spoke in a low, dangerous tone. Up until now, all of this was just a little entertainment to kill my boredom. But from this second forward, I'm dead serious. Barbara, you've been playing me for a fool. Barbara covered her face with her hands, making it impossible to tell if she was trembling in terror or shivering with psychotic thrill. Then she tilted her head at them, a twisted smirk stretching the corner of her mouth. Luca, I really don't know what you're talking about. Giselle's face turned to stone. Her shoulders visibly shook, raw, primal fear coiling around her body like a suffocating snake. Barbara walked toward the paralyzed Giselle with light, almost bouncy steps. She looked exactly like an innocent, carefree little girl. Reaching the table, she gently set the food down. I'll leave the bento right here, Barbara whispered softly. Enjoy your meal, Luca. With that, she turned around happily, humming a sweet tune as she skipped toward the door. Giselle was still trapped under a suffocating, paralyzing blanket of fear. Barbara gently brushed her fingers across the back of Giselle's hand. Barbara spoke in a soft, sweet whisper. Giselle, it's so good to see you. Goodbye. In that chilling moment, Giselle looked like a helpless, trembling lamb, while Barbara felt like a monster crawling straight out of the abyss. Under his intense gaze, Barbara happily hummed a tune and skipped out of the room like nothing had happened. A moment later, a dead silence fell over the lounge. Giselle's legs gave out, and she sank limply to the floor. Luca couldn't believe it. The proud young lady of the Castoria family was terrified to her very core, and this was the daughter of an Imperial Guard captain. So who was the real mastermind? And what exactly was the twisted connection between them and the innocent victims caught in the crossfire? He called Giselle's name. She buried her face in her hands. Don't ask me anything. Just keep your head down, let the time pass, and get out of this academy alive. Please, Luca. All the arrogant hostility and disdain were gone from her voice, leaving nothing but raw, desperate pleading. The scene shifted, jumping ahead a few days. Ever since that incident, Giselle had been avoiding him like the plague. That day, Luca reported the brutal truth of the situation to Hiras, because the board was rapidly slipping out of his control. But Hiras hit him with an answer he never saw coming. He told Luca to handle the entire mess himself, start to finish. That only made Luca more suspicious. If the Imperial Guard officially stepped in, they could rip the truth out into the open in a heartbeat. Yet Hyros chose to sit back in the shadows and use him as a proxy, especially considering this bloodbath involved the captain's own daughter. A dark picture began to form in his mind. Someone was moving pieces from the shadows, and he was nothing but a pawn on their board. Maybe that was the harsh reality of being a soldier, but it pissed him off beyond belief. Just as he expected, Giselle still wouldn't answer his calls. The bloody trail labeled Barbara's curse kept stabbing at his combat instincts. He was dead certain this was Barbara's own sick, twisted script, staged from the very beginning. But just like Lillian said, a bottom-feeder commoner like Barbara shouldn't possess the high-level clearance needed to hijack those combat robots. Luca shifted his brain into overdrive, piecing the fragmented blood spatter and clues together from every conceivable angle. He ruthlessly tested every hypothesis, isolated the most plausible threat, and peeled back the tangled lies through relentless, cold deduction. In the end, only one chilling answer remained. Giselle and Barbara were the co-conspirators behind the entire robot rampage nightmare. But right now, he had to corner Giselle, so Luca contacted Enrico. "Did you manage to get Giselle's attention?" Enrico smiled faintly. "Of course." Before long, Enrico actually managed to get Giselle out to meet him, his face flushed red. I like you, Miss Giselle." Giselle's brows tightened in disgust. "I'll be blunt. I have zero interest in you. In fact, your mere presence makes my skin crawl. Stop hovering around me for no reason." Enrico just stood there, completely blank-faced, before he suddenly burst into tears. He ran out of the garden like a whipped dog fleeing for his life. Luca hadn't expected Giselle to be that brutally vicious. Luca thought to himself, if Enrico ever needed a favor in the future, he'd help him out without hesitation. Even he had a shred of conscience left for using the guy as bait. Giselle turned to leave the garden. Only after Enrico was completely out of sight did he step out from the shadows. His sudden appearance made Giselle scowl. She instantly realized Enrico's confession had been a setup orchestrated by him. Giselle couldn't tolerate his manipulative games and was fully prepared to report him to her father. But his next sentence hit her like a sledgehammer to the ribs, making her stagger backward, because he revealed he had already told the Imperial Guard captain everything about Barbara. You told my father?" Giselle choked out, her voice trembling. Her reaction was even more violent than he had predicted. Giselle spun in place, completely losing her mind to a spiraling panic attack. Looking at her terrified state, it was painfully obvious her fear of Barbara was rooted deep in her bones. Giselle lunged forward and grabbed him by the collar. "Everything I've bled for, gone in a single second, all because of you. If you had never shown up, none of this nightmare would be happening. This is all your fault." He calmly signaled that they weren't out of moves yet. "Tell me everything you know. I will help you." Giselle looked hollow and defeated. "This is an internal family blood feud. You're just a nobody student." He shot back without missing a beat. "And what if I became an official member of the Castoria family?" Giselle looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "What did you just say?" He kept pressing. "I'm supposedly just a low-ranking Imperial Guard trainee, so why would a high-profile noble like you be assigned as my personal guide? Didn't that strike you as incredibly strange?" It's a little arrogant to say this out loud, but among the recruits, I'm universally recognized as a once-in-a-decade genius. Not long ago, I was even awarded the 7th grade Cross-Key Medal. The Imperial Guard captain values my potential highly. Even if I marry into the Castoria family, my standing won't be at the bottom. No matter what kind of hell you're facing, I will back you up. And the only way my chances of becoming the captain's son-in-law go up is if we exterminate this problem cleanly. If our interests align, then trusting each other is just basic survival." Giselle was gulping air, her body shaking from pure tension so hard she could barely stay on her feet. She hesitated for a long time, then finally forced the words out. "I controlled the patrol robot and Barbara's curse. I made it." At long last, Giselle spilled the ugly truth behind the curse and their twisted, toxic history. Barbara and Giselle's connection began 3 years ago. Back then, Barbara was Giselle's very first friend. Not just a passing acquaintance, but someone she could truly call a friend. Barbara was incredibly social, radiant, always smiling. That unique, open cheerfulness drew Giselle in completely. Around that time, a boy was openly pursuing Barbara, and her sunny personality and sweet smile made her wildly popular. Giselle assumed Barbara wasn't interested, but Barbara confessed she actually liked him back. Giselle couldn't stand the thought of her only friend being stolen away, so she decided to mess with the guy. Giselle built a makeshift robot and used it to terrorize him. She uploaded a voice file into its system, ordered him to stay the hell away from Barbara, and programmed the machine to chase him through the dead of night. But the prank went horribly wrong. The boy tripped, suffered a massive head trauma, and eventually had to drop out due to the severe after effects. Once the incident blew up, a full-scale investigation kicked off. Barbara was the very first person to figure out Giselle was the culprit. Because Giselle constantly built and tweaked robots right in front of her, The situation quickly spiraled completely out of control. That was when Barbara offered a chillingly perfect solution. If Giselle became a victim too, all suspicion would vanish. That was exactly how Giselle became the second target. Barbara handed Giselle a microchip and told her to install it in a drone. Normally, external hardware couldn't override a core AI, but for some inexplicable reason, the robots started hunting Giselle. They malfunctioned, went rogue, and nearly turned her into a genuine casualty. Giselle bit her trembling lip. After that, Barbara changed. She started making sick, twisted demands. She told me that to pull off the perfect crime, I had to completely isolate myself at the academy. She also said we needed new victims to pop up regularly. From his perspective, the grim reality was crystal clear. Giselle had walked blindly right into Barbara's psychological trap. Barbara manipulated her step by step, taking a situation that could have been resolved peacefully and dragging it straight into hell, until Giselle was completely trapped in her grip. Right at that moment, Giselle's terminal suddenly screamed with aggressive static. Her security encryption should have been military grade, yet she had been completely hacked. A horrific, distorted voice bled from the speaker. Our little secret. You told that man. Traitor, Giselle. But my dear, sweet Giselle. He strained his ears. The terminal's audio wasn't the only threat. He could also hear the faint, deadly hum of rotors cutting through the air. His combat instincts and hypersenses immediately blared like air raid sirens. He had to get out of there. Immediately. Suddenly, a shot rang out. Luca grabbed Giselle and rolled hard to the side. The two of them tumbled behind a stone pillar. Damn it. That faint, ghostly crack was the signature of a high-grade suppressor. He looked down and saw a fresh, finger-wide hole punched straight through him. He had to stop the bleeding, right now. He ripped his coat apart and wrapped the wound tight. Judging by the acoustics of the shot, he knew the attacker was almost certainly an airborne drone. If he pushed his body to high-speed movement, taking it down wouldn't be hard, but doing so would rip his wound wide open. And the only weapon he had on him was a single combat dagger. Thanks to the suppressor, nobody else on campus even realized a lethal firefight had broken out. That meant it was entirely on him to get the two of them out alive. Giselle snarled, I'm going to smash your nose flat, you bastard. Only then did she snap out of her shock and realize he was bleeding out. Giselle blurted out, do Imperial Guard trainees seriously not feel pain when they get shot? That question actually made him freeze. She was panicking so hard her brain had completely short-circuited. At that exact moment, the drone opened fire on them again, but he couldn't return fire. He couldn't even pinpoint its exact location in the dark. Then he noticed Giselle's makeup. Most girls carried a compact mirror on them. He immediately asked, do you have a mirror? Luckily, he gambled right. Using the mirror's reflection, he cleanly pinpointed the drone's position. Its matte black chassis made it nearly invisible against the night sky. He spun violently, springing out from behind the marble pillar. Riding the massive centrifugal force of his spin, he whipped his dagger out like a lethal projectile. A silver streak cut a perfectly straight line through the air, the blade shooting at the drone like a heat-seeking missile. The drone plummeted like a bird with its wings ripped off, spraying a wild hail of lead in every direction as it went down, but he had already vanished behind another pillar. He didn't expect his own tactical device to suddenly fail. The screen flickered a few times, then spat out a fatal error message. He glanced over at Giselle and asked for her status. Her answer was exactly the same. Both the Academy intranet and the global internet channels were completely dead. Right then, aggressive static bled from Giselle's terminal. Giselle, I wanted to protect you, so why did you betray me? And Luca, I like you, so please don't ignore me. Luca snatched the terminal from Giselle's hands and crushed it. Splintered plastic and microchips spilled from his palm like dust. No point listening to the ramblings of a psycho, he said coldly. This whole operation is probably... He cut himself off. Even if Giselle was the Imperial Guard captain's daughter, she was still just a civilian student. He couldn't say more. Someone was pulling strings from a level way above his pay grade. He immediately decided to move Giselle to a secure location. But at the garden entrance, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. Felix, he asked. Orders from above? Felix gave a curt nod. Looks like you're getting VIP treatment again. I didn't hear a damn peep about this op. Giselle looked like her world was shattering. Was all of this my father's plan? Luca and Felix were soldiers. Being treated as disposable tools wouldn't even make them blink, but realizing your own father considered you an expendable pawn would break anyone. Her emotional breakdown was completely justified. At that moment, Felix noticed the bleeding hole in his side. He gave a bitter, dry smile. If I don't get patched up soon, I'll be a corpse by tomorrow morning. Felix kept his combat dagger and tossed his sidearm to his wounded comrade. Then Felix pulled out his terminal, preparing to radio their superiors. They never even got the chance. A silenced bullet instantly shattered Felix's terminal, completely blowing off his right hand in a spray of blood. The two of them scattered instantly, plastering their backs against the solid wall of the garden entrance. The shot came from close range, but he still couldn't track the trajectory. A stealth drone so advanced that even Imperial Guard trainees couldn't detect it? Barbara simply didn't have the engineering experience to build military-grade stealth tech, which meant the person controlling this wasn't the real Barbara. Then, a cold, synthesized mechanical voice echoed from the dark. "If I had aimed for your heads, you'd both already be dead." He and Felix exchanged rapid tactical hand signals, shifting the plan on the fly. He would stall the attacker with conversation while Felix flanked for a lethal blind spot strike. The tactic was formed in a split second. Felix kicked off his boots and moved into the shadows without a single sound. Luca's voice was absolute ice. "You know exactly who we are, and you still want to chat?" The unseen enemy chuckled. "Of course I know. Aren't you two just adorable little Imperial Guard trainees? Let's skip to the business. Hand over Giselle Castoria." Luca tried to stall. "You're a soldier too. You should understand what I'm saying." But the response made his stomach drop. The attacker used the singular you, not you two. The bastard knew Felix was flanking them. He was just about to provide cover fire when the sickening, muffled crunch of snapping bone echoed out first. The attacker already had Felix hoisted into the air by his throat. The enemy was clad in a full-coverage combat suit, one heavily equipped with active optical camouflage. No wonder he couldn't track the ghost's position. Felix was taken down without breaking a sweat, meaning this monster was at least Imperial Guard tier. This was going to be a nightmare. Giselle desperately grabbed his hand. He shoved her off instantly. "The second I engage, you run. Do not look back. I'll buy you as much time as I can." Giselle opened her mouth to argue, but he clamped his hand over it. "No time to debate. Do exactly what I said." The exact millisecond Giselle bolted, Luca exploded forward, laying down suppressive fire on the attacker's last known position. His trigger finger was fast, but against a phantom like this, the bullets were practically crawling. The attacker stared at him, his tone chillingly casual. "I'd really rather not kill two of my juniors in one night." That single word, juniors, snagged his focus for a fatal microsecond. Before he could even blink, the enemy was already right behind him. Luca crossed his arms, barely absorbing the bone-rattling blow. A terrifying realization hit him. This guy was an ex-Imperial Guard. No wonder his counterterrorism CQC was so utterly flawless. In a deathmatch that demanded absolute perfection, he had let his mind wander. He cursed himself brutally. The enemy was moving in for the immediate kill. The Phantom knew that as long as he crushed Luca first, he'd have all the time in the world to casually run down Giselle. His combat instincts screamed at him. If he traded blows in a straight melee, he would be slaughtered. He had to flip the script. Aegis Combat Arts, a forbidden technique whose entire core revolved around extreme environmental analysis and hyperperception, even at the cost of catastrophic brain damage. Step 1. Forcefully expand all 5 senses until he could feel every single variable in his surroundings. Luca wasted 0 kinetic energy. His eyes locked onto the combat sword Felix had dropped on the pavement. In the next heartbeat, he violently whipped his empty pistol over his shoulder, like a heavy boomerang. The heavy steel of the gun collided perfectly with the blade, ricocheting the sword straight up into the air directly behind him. He snatched the spinning hilt out of the air and unleashed a blinding backhand slash at the Phantom. The attacker let out a low, genuinely impressed hum. Well now, an Aegis Combat Arts user. Hearing that, he frowned. How the hell did the enemy know that? The exact millisecond his boots hit the ground, the man's slash came crashing down like a guillotine. He barely managed to raise his sword to block it. The sheer force of the parry left his entire lower body wide open. He knew it instantly. The man was deliberately holding back. If he wasn't, Luca would already be sliced in half. The attacker clearly liked what he saw. An Imperial trainee actually capable of using Aegis Combat Arts. The man spoke in a calm, flat tone. "Stand down, kid. I don't want to kill you. Once you realize who I am, your superiors won't blame you for retreating. The Imperial Guard doesn't train you to throw your lives away for nothing." Luca immediately pinned the bastard's identity. Anti-Imperial terrorists. Hot breath shuddered past his lips. He legitimately thought this might be his final breath, but the enemy's arrogant, mocking tone bought him a crucial sliver of processing time. He rapidly analyzed his own bleeding wound, the man's identity, and his flawless CQC style. None of that mattered now. From this second forward, he was nothing but a blade. There were only 2 possible outcomes: break or cut the enemy down before he broke. He gripped the hilt with both hands and unleashed a devastating downward chop with everything he had left. The man merely shifted his weight, effortlessly dodging the lethal strike. He raised an eyebrow. To reach this level of combat proficiency at your age? And you're actually willing to throw your life away for the Empire? The violent strain of forced acceleration tore at his torso, and fresh blood began pouring from his side wound. Yet, in the attacker's eyes, his desperate strike was still painfully slow. The man's voice dropped to a lethal chill. Do you really think I can't kill you? Luca's body was rapidly burning out. He was literally using his sword as a crutch just to keep himself from collapsing. He spat back. The Empire is the Empire, but your arrogant tone alone is making me sick. The man shrugged, then burst out laughing. I love that rebellious streak. Kid, you're honestly a lot closer to our side. He paused, letting the silence hang. My name is Rick Kaiser. I'm a Republican. To Luca, the word Republican was just a fancy synonym for terrorist. He sneered through his teeth. Sorry. Unless you stop barking like a rabid dog, I can't understand a damn word you're saying. Rick didn't respond. He looked annoyed. Actually, he looked absolutely furious. He shifted his footing lightly and vanished entirely from Luca's field of vision. Pure survival instinct forced Luca to guard his chest, but his mechanical arm was completely obliterated by the sheer kinetic force of the impact. In a chaotic storm of shattered metal and flying sparks, he saw a drill-like fist driving straight into him, everything stretching out in agonizing slow motion. He tried to throw a desperate counterkick, only for Rick to viciously snap his leg mid-motion. Rick clamped his hand around Luca's throat and hoisted him into the air. This is your absolute last chance. Beg for your life, and I'll actually let you live. Luca forced a bloody, broken smirk. His lips twitched, and he spat a mouthful of blood straight into the terrorist's face. Rick let out a dark, low chuckle. That's exactly what I like to see. If you somehow survive this, tell Keanu I said hello. After whispering those words, the attacker brutally tightened his grip. The absolute last thing Luca remembered from that night was the sickening crunch of his own neck snapping. For an organic human, a broken neck is almost always an instant death sentence. Most of the time anyway. In the hospital ward, Felix forced a weak, ragged sound from his throat. Luca, it hurts. Luca muttered back, his voice hoarse. Idiot. If you try to turn a broken neck, no shit it's gonna hurt. He looked over at Felix and gave a bitter, empty smile. Felix wasn't ever coming back from this. His brain damage was catastrophic, a direct result of being choked out with a snapped cervical spine for far too long. Luca, however, had gotten incredibly lucky. He heard that right after he went down, Giselle stormed the area with a 4-man Imperial Guard squad. Immediate, aggressive trauma care was the only reason he hadn't suffered total brain death. If they had been even a minute slower, he wouldn't be breathing right now. Just then, the ward door slid open. Imperial Guard Captain Hira stepped into the room. Specifically, he was there to see Luca. Felix was entirely unresponsive to the outside world. The captain pulled up a steel chair and sat down. Hyros cast a long glance at Felix, a complicated, unreadable emotion flickering in his cold eyes. Felix fulfilled his duty, Luca stated firmly, making sure to acknowledge his comrade before even beginning the debrief. Then he delivered a precise verbal report of the entire bloody encounter to the captain. After absorbing the intel in silence, Hyros informed him that this incident would remain entirely off the books. No written reports. Rick Kaiser, true name, Rick Silvanunes. He is a Class 1 most wanted fugitive of the Empire. It was the first time Luca had ever heard the name. The Empire didn't broadcast every single target on their hit list, especially not the ones intimately tied to the Empire's darkest stains. That specific word sent a cold shock through his system. Stains? The Empire was drilled into their heads as an absolutely flawless, divine entity. To hear a high-ranking captain use a word like that bordered on heresy. Hyros didn't hesitate to explain the grim reality, primarily because Luca had now survived enough to earn the clearance to hear it. Operation codenamed Juliet was a deep cover initiative 5 years in the making. The sole objective was to get dangerously close to the high command of the anti-imperial terrorist syndicate known as Nemaxis. He couldn't help but ask, why just get close? Why not fully infiltrate? The captain slid a heavily encrypted terminal across the table toward him. Because no matter how many external limbs we sever, this syndicate acts like a virus, constantly mutating and breeding in the dark. If we don't annihilate them at the root, the bloodshed is entirely meaningless, he pressed further. Since they failed to capture Rick alive tonight, did that mean the entire 5-year operation was a failure? The Imperial Guard captain's smile lines deepened. We achieved a brilliant success. We planted our own operative deep inside the core of Nemaxis. Luca didn't understand at first. Hyros laid it out plainly. Barbara is our asset. Nemaxis recruited her because she possesses exceptional cyber warfare skills. All the blood and sweat we poured into making the enemy recognize her talent finally paid off. I just never expected her to go completely insane. He gripped the metal bedrail until his knuckles turned bone white. How many lives had the higher-ups sacrificed to build this lie? Even Giselle, the captain's own flesh and blood, had been brutally tormented by Barbara for months. Were all of them just disposable pawns on a twisted chessboard? He couldn't stop himself from asking. Does Giselle know too? The question bled with raw, unrestrained emotion. Iris answered with absolute frost. She knows nothing, and for her own sake, it is best she never does. The captain narrowed his eyes. Do you know why I'm telling you this? Luca's heart slammed against his ribs. Elimination. That was the first word that flashed through his mind. No matter how lethal he was still just a bottom-tier asset that could be erased without a trace, especially a street rat with zero background like him. Right then, Iris slid a glowing electronic file across the table toward him. The suffocating tension in his shoulders broke into a bitter, hollow smile. It was a legal adoption document, officially signed by Imperial Guard Captain Hiros Castoria. Only one single line was left blank. The adoptee's name. Iris spoke with terrifying calm. Welcome to the Castoria family. The scene shifted, jumping ahead several months. A surgical robot was meticulously extracting the external spinal brace from Luca's back. Blood-slick titanium screws were dropped into a metal tray one by one, clinking softly. He muttered under his breath. I almost ended up living with an external spine for the rest of my damn life. He stood up and pulled on the crisp coat of his Imperial Guard trainee uniform. Felix still lay paralyzed on the hospital bed in a heavy neck brace, calling his name in broken, breathless fragments. You're leaving? He gave a single nod. I have to. Felix gathered every ounce of strength he had left to force out one last sentence. May your future be full of good luck. He nodded again. He was going to keep moving forward. Felix's story ended right here in this room, and nothing more. But he would remember Felix, and he would remember all the ones who had already bled out along the way. The scene shifted to the Imperial Guard Training Center. Out in the hallway, Luca was tangled in a chaotic web of his own thoughts. He checked the Empire's wanted list, sorting by the latest updates, and Barbara's name was sitting right there. A meticulously engineered spy operation orchestrated by the Empire, all just to infiltrate the anti-imperial terrorist syndicate Nemoxis. Yet, Barbara's twisted personality still made his heart pound, because he didn't believe it was just a flawless act. She was undeniably, fundamentally broken, and even that psychological distortion felt like a weapon custom forged by the Empire for this exact mission. Was she literally a human manufactured for a task? Either way, none of this was a coincidence. Back at Clashia Academy, he had merely been walking blind on the skeletal framework of a master plan laid down by the higher-ups, and he had foolishly mistaken it for his own free will. The more he uncovered, the more terrifyingly unfathomable the Empire felt. Perhaps even his fateful encounter with Kinu and his training in Aegis combat arts had been completely orchestrated from the start. The dark thoughts piled up violently, until he had to force himself to breathe and calm down. Enough, Luca. You can't start thinking like a radical. It's all just paranoia and baseless predictions. The Imperial Guard captain revealing the brutal truth might have been a calculated test too, a psychological probe to see if his loyalty to the Empire and his absolute faith as a soldier had wavered, but the golden ticket to change his miserable life had finally arrived. Luca Castoria. The heavy door slid open, revealing Kinu's office. Kinu looked up and asked, Did you enjoy your fleeting youth at the academy? Luca already knew the man's dry cadence perfectly. So much that I almost ended up in a body bag instead of coming back to the training facility. Kinu added smoothly, What happened to Felix is a real tragedy. He was an outstanding student. A bitter question nearly tore its way out of Luca's throat. Does he actually feel an ounce of regret? Kinu calmly took a sip of his hot tea. Luca stared at him. Rick told me to give his instructor his regards. He said he's doing very well. Kinu answered with absolute icy calm, not even twitching a single brow. Rick Silvanunes? I'm genuinely glad to hear he's doing well. I never pegged him to become a terrorist. Luca frowned hard. Why the hell was his instructor using such an intimate, nostalgic tone for a wanted terrorist? He asked bluntly. Were you too close? It turned out Rick and Kinu had actually entered the Imperial Guard in the exact same recruit class, though they had severed contact a long time ago. Kinu spoke in a flat, even tone. It seems you didn't pass Rick's regards to the Imperial Guard captain. Luca paused. One wrong word here, and his instructor could be executed for high treason on the spot. Finally, he answered, At the very least, I wanted to confirm things with my own eyes before filing a report. Kinu stared dead at him. So what is the real reason you deliberately covered for me? He rapidly sorted through everything that had gone down. Almost every single major player involved knew about Aegis combat arts. That meant it wasn't just a martial art. It carried a much darker, deeper significance. He didn't dance around the issue. So what exactly is Aegis combat arts? Kinu's brows tightened slightly. You're truly that curious? And suddenly it clicked. That was exactly why Rick hadn't completely obliterated his skull. The terrorist had deliberately left him a sliver of life by only snapping his neck. Kinu looked out the window and took a slow sip of his cold tea. Then he smiled, looking exactly like a man who had been waiting for this exact question. You reached the core much faster than I anticipated. Luca Castoria, for a bottom-tier asset, you know far too much. You understand exactly what that implies, don't you? Luca understood perfectly. The more you knew in this empire, the faster you died. If he hadn't secured Hyros's backing, he would have been quietly purged by now. Kinu spoke with slow, deliberate weight. In the year 3518, the first person in the history of the empire to lead an armed rebel uprising was a man named Noel Muriska. He was the supreme leader of the rebellion, the original founder of Aegis, and the absolute architect of the proto-tactical theory. Noel realized that a full-scale, frontal assault on the empire was suicidal, so he chose asymmetrical guerrilla warfare instead. That was the bloody cradle where Aegis Combat Arts was born. A cold sweat broke out across Luca's spine. The very foundation of the combat techniques he had been bleeding to master were rooted in high treason. To be exact, what the Empire desperately wanted to erase from history was Noel's sheer brilliance as a combat theorist. But the rebels had already reshaped their entire doctrine around Aegis and used it to keep the war alive. A flood of terrifying questions rushed into his mind, but it all made a brutal, logical kind of sense. When utilized in hit-and-run guerrilla warfare, the catastrophic flaws of Aegis Combat Arts practically vanished. When your life is constantly hanging by a thread, burning out your neural functions simply stops mattering. Furthermore, since the rebels lacked centralized military discipline and logistics, they desperately needed a highly lethal, wildly flexible method of combat. Kinu confirmed his grim deductions. Even after the Imperial Guard launched countless eradication campaigns to wipe the rebels off the map, Noel and a handful of elite core members always managed to slip through the cracks. They scattered themselves into the darkest corners of the Empire, recruited fresh blood into the meat grinder, and launched devastating strikes on critical Imperial infrastructure. Even if their cells were captured, it didn't matter. They could simply sever the tail to save the head. Luca could already picture the grim reality in his head. The rebels could effortlessly disguise themselves as harmless commoners. Because their cybernetic implants were heavily downgraded and rated as non-combat, standard security sweeps would never flag them, and no one would ever suspect they were high-ranking rebel commanders. Meanwhile, practitioners of Aegis Combat Arts could unleash lethal force without relying on high-output military cybernetics. This made them invisible ghosts slipping straight through any security checkpoint. That completely explained why Rick had spared his life. He finally understood exactly why the Empire obsessively maintained a watch list of every known Aegis user. He pressed further. How did the Empire crush Noel's rebellion back then? Kinu casually spread his hands. Every single person who fell under suspicion was slaughtered. He didn't bother asking how many innocent civilians were butchered in the crossfire. The body count would be incomprehensible. As long as the Empire slapped the Aegis user label on you, it was an automatic death sentence. Luca asked if the Empire actively tried to bury this bloody chapter of history. Kinu replied, "They don't aggressively censor it, but they certainly don't teach it either. If you don't actively dig into history, you'll simply die without ever knowing the truth." Noel Muriska, the Empire's greatest military hero turned ultimate traitor, followed by a massive, indiscriminate purge by the Empire. Yet Kinu was still sitting here as an elite Imperial Guard instructor, utterly fluent in the rebels' deepest combat doctrines. He stared dead into Kinu's eyes. "The captain sent me here because he suspects you have direct ties to the terrorists, doesn't he?" Kinu clapped his hands together twice, a slow, mocking sound. Kinu smiled. "Bingo, Luca. If you can dig up or fabricate hard evidence that I'm colluding with Nemoxis, you'll instantly be fast-tracked into the absolute inner circle of the Imperial Guard." He stared hard at the man, but couldn't read the bottom of those dark waters. He spoke evenly. "I don't believe my instructor is in bed with terrorists." Kinu's tone remained dead flat. "You might believe that, but the captain certainly doesn't. So here's a little pro tip for your career advancement. Go dig into the bloody trail I left behind down in the lower sectors." It didn't sound like advice. It sounded exactly like a taunt. Luca couldn't figure out how much Heyros actually knew, or why he was specifically using him as the hunting dog. He slowly pushed himself up from the chair. "I will report exactly what I heard in this room to the captain." Kinu stood up as well, personally opening the heavy door to see him out. The second he stepped out of the training facility's main building, he broke into a dead sprint. He didn't stop running until he hit the absolute dead end of the corridor. He leaned heavily against the wall, fighting to steady his violently heaving chest. "Damn it. Every single one of them is playing me. The captain and Kinu are both using me as a pawn to probe each other's defenses. How much longer do I have to walk this razor wire tightrope?" Kinu's true identity was getting buried under thicker and thicker layers of fog. What the hell was that man? He knew for a fact that going through official legal channels would yield zero hard evidence, but he absolutely refused to be manipulated like a mindless puppet. He didn't crawl out of the gutter and bleed his way up here just for this. He decided to head down into the lower sectors Kinu had mentioned and start digging for clues. Hyras had deployed him as a hound to probe Kinu, purely because Hyras suspected the man had deep ties to the terrorist syndicate. Yet Kinu himself, despite being surrounded by lethal suspicion, remained completely unfazed and carefree. And then there were the words Kinu had spoken to him. Why actively point him in a specific direction at all? Was it a calculated trap, engineered specifically to eliminate him? Or was it just another psychological test? A sick game played by both Kinu and the Empire to measure his absolute loyalty. Luca made a silent, ironclad vow to himself. He absolutely refused to let them play him like a mindless puppet. Next, he needed to gear up and start tracking Kinu's bloody footsteps. His very first move was to relay the exact transcript of his conversation with Kinu straight to Hyras. Rick and Kinu apparently ran Black Ops' unofficial missions during the exact same time frame. There had to be a dark connection between them. Hyras asked him point blank. You're curious too, aren't you? If Kinu is that highly suspected, why the hell has he been allowed to operate freely until now? He was intensely curious, but survival always took priority. If there's a classified reason I'm not meant to hear, I'll gladly keep my ears shut. Hyras folded his arms and slowly closed his eyes. A heavy moment later, he leaned back into his chair and opened them. I've decided to put my trust in you, Luca. The kill order to investigate Kinu came down from a level much higher than the Imperial Guard. The top brass believes that by using Kinu as a proxy, we can finally penetrate Nemoxis's absolute core. Luca still couldn't wrap his head around it. Why place a man that lethally dangerous in a position as critical as an elite instructor? Hyras explained the grim reality. If we didn't give him the instructor post to keep him on a leash, he would have tried to walk away. Of course, Kinu would never be allowed to leave the Imperial Guard alive. The higher-ups parked him in that role because he's highly competent, and more importantly, it makes him incredibly easy to monitor. Hearing the sheer cold-blooded logic behind it, he swallowed hard. He spoke slowly, measuring his words. I've shadowed Kinu for a long time. Honestly, I've never seen a single crack in his armor. His self-discipline is absolute, and he never leaks a single true thought. Hyras signaled for him to go all in on the operation. You are the only viable candidate left. Over the last decade, we've thrown countless trainees at Kinu to act as spies, but not a single one of them got as close to him as you did. Looks like even Kinu genuinely values your potential. He chewed on the captain's heavy words, turning them over in his mind. There was absolutely zero chance of backing out now. He laid out his unnegotiable terms. I need operational authority far above a trainee level. I need high-clearance database access and a black budget for the investigation. The scene shifted, jumping ahead 3 days. Luca boarded the Custoria family's sleek flying car. The moment the adoption papers cleared, Hyras personally took him home to meet the rest of the bloodline. Hyras leaned back comfortably and casually asked if he was nervous. He gave a stiff nod. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. My hands are actually shaking a little. After he had laid out his demands to Hyras, the top brass granted him a specialized pass, giving him absolute clearance to travel freely between the upper and lower sectors. He was also officially authorized to carry lethal personal weapons and granted a black budget for the investigation, plus a massive upgrade to his database access privileges. He didn't push for more, simply because he hadn't put enough blood on the ledger yet, but he knew damn well it still wasn't enough. At any given moment, the Empire could still treat him as a completely disposable asset, so he had to push himself to the absolute limit and execute every single move flawlessly. He was a soldier. He would rather die bleeding out on a battlefield than be quietly suffocated in some shadowy conspiracy beneath the surface, especially now that he knew dark secrets way above his pay grade. If the higher-ups suddenly pulled the plug on the mission, Hyras' hands would be tied. The captain wouldn't even know how many loose ends he'd have to exterminate, and Luca would undoubtedly be one of them. Even so, Hyras signaled for him to drop the anxiety. As long as it falls within my authority, I will do everything in my power to shield you. That was the real reason Hyras brought him into the Custoria family fold. But that calculated decision also meant he was officially placing his life entirely in Hyras' hands. Luca spoke up. I despise all this aristocratic red tape too, but if we're technically family now, I should at least introduce myself. If you tell me exactly how I need to act in front of the others, I will play the part perfectly. Hyras gave him an amused, sharp smile. The captain stroked his chin, pausing for a moment before answering. Just act exactly the way you always do. It'll give the kids a refreshing shock to the system. He still couldn't read the depths of Hyras' mind, but if he wanted the captain's protection, he had to play by his twisted rules, no matter how infuriating they were. As time trickled by, the sleek flying car arrived over the massive estate. Imperial Guard Captain Hyras stared out the reinforced window in silence. He had spent his entire childhood here, but the cold look in his eyes held no real attachment. The Custoria family estate sat on the desolate outskirts of the capital, Clashia. Around it stretched a barren, blood-red wasteland. Only inside the estate walls were there lush green plants and running water, glowing like a synthetic oasis in a dead desert. The balance thrusters beneath the chassis hissed, making micro-adjustments as the car stabilized and descended. It was his very first time setting foot inside the fortress of high nobility. The scene shifted, and he found himself standing in a lavish guest room. Hiras gestured for him to get some rest first. Once he recovered, they would handle all the remaining bureaucratic mess in one sweep. Every single person in the estate was busy swarming Hiras with desperate flattery. The endless parade of hollow, polished words wore him down fast. The twisted social politics here were exactly the same as the grimy lower sectors. Was this really the high life he had bled to reach? Right then, a soft knock echoed at his door. A familiar girl stepped into the room. "So you really became part of the Castoria family." It was Giselle. She had her deep blue hair tied back, and whenever the strands swayed, it looked like a shifting midnight sky. Giselle spoke with quiet intensity. "I owe you a sincere apology for losing control back there. I let my emotions consume me. As a member of the Castoria family, I should never have acted so disgracefully." He brushed it off, genuinely not caring. A normal civilian panicking in a kill zone is perfectly normal. Don't sweat it. Giselle offered a bitter, fragile smile. "I went to see Felix too. He didn't even recognize me." She looked heavily weighed down by the guilt of what happened to the trainee. He stated the cold, hard facts. "You can be grateful, but you don't need to feel guilty." Felix was simply fulfilling his sworn duty to the Imperial Guard. He wasn't trying to offer cheap comfort. He just didn't have a sentimental bone in his body. Giselle pressed her lips together. "I know your nature. You are exactly like blue fire, freezing cold on the surface, but burning infinitely hotter than any red flame underneath." He could feel the shift in the air. Giselle wasn't the same arrogant aristocrat as before. Her defensive thorns had retracted. After all, he had thrown his own life on the line to pull her out of hell. Just then, Giselle stopped him again. "Do you remember what you told me back then? You said if you officially became part of the Castoria family, you would back my play." He nodded. "I don't make empty promises. Other than Captain Hiras, you are the only Castoria I've actually had a serious conversation with. And more importantly, I think you're the kind of opponent I can strike a real deal with." He offered a faint, approving smile. "Now that sounds exactly like an Imperial noble. Someone who actually knows how to bare her fangs and fight for her own interests." Giselle walked over to a side table and hard-linked her terminal into the holographic projector. Pointing at the glowing blue schematics, she said, "The people you need to watch your back around the most are my two older brothers, the first and second sons. Your sudden adoption has triggered a massive paranoid crisis in both of them." Luca frowned slightly. "I'm just an adopted stray." Giselle instantly shot that down. "Castoria is a purely military house. Among all of Father's children, you are the only one who actually meets the lethal standards of an elite soldier. Bloodline doesn't mean a damn thing when your raw combat potential is enough to make them sweat." Luca finally understood. The two heirs were terrified he was going to usurp their throne. He asked her point blank, "What about you? You don't have any ambition to become the next head of the family?" Giselle froze for a split second. Luca held her gaze, not letting her look away. "Are you telling me you truly have zero interest in the seat of power?" Giselle's voice dropped to absolute zero. "I have no obligation to discuss my ambitions with you." The icy distance in her tone threw them right back to their very first hostile meeting. Luca laid his cards on the table. "I have zero intention of fighting for the head of the house. Having the name Castoria shielding me is more than enough for my goals. But if anyone tries to step on my neck, I won't just lie down and take a days for the fallout after that. That's not my problem. If the throne opens up, snatch it, Giselle. Consider it a piece of free advice from your new older brother." At first, Giselle thought the title older brother was utterly ridiculous coming from him, but then a genuine laugh escaped her lips. It was incredibly rare to see her smile that brightly, which made the moment feel strangely valuable. Giselle looked at him with dead seriousness. "If that bloody day actually comes, will you stand behind me? I made you a promise. As long as you don't become my enemy, I have no reason to hate you, and absolutely no reason to eliminate you." Hearing his stance, Giselle extended her hand. "Then I will officially accept you as an ally. I'll be counting on you," she added in a low, quiet murmur. "Brother Luca, that is the first and absolutely the last time I will ever call you that." Luca gripped her hand firmly. "Perfect. I despise cheesy, sentimental titles anyway." The grand clock on the wall chimed with a heavy, steady thrum. It was time for dinner. Because today was a highly significant event, a formal banquet had been prepared. Before long, he changed into a sharply tailored aristocratic suit and stepped into the opulent dining hall. Just by analyzing the rigid seating arrangement alone, he could instantly map out the ruthless hierarchy of the bloodline. The eldest son, Nicholas. The second son, Joel, and the undisputed lady of the house, Ava Custoria. Ava looked down at him and spoke. So you must be Luca. I have heard quite a lot about you recently. On the polished surface, her smile was gentle and welcoming, but her velvet voice carried an undercurrent of freezing contempt, laced with hidden venomous thorns. Ava then motioned for him to find a seat. Beside him, Giselle whispered a warning. Don't give Joel any excuse to nitpick. Even though the head of the family wouldn't care about table manners, Joel certainly would. Then the doors opened again. Hyros appeared before everyone. He said, let's begin. But before we eat, we will offer a prayer. Once the prayer was finished, the meal began. The clink of silverware rose and fell in waves. Just as he expected, every gaze in the room was fixed on him. Only minutes earlier on the way to the banquet, Giselle had told him to be careful. They had probably already gathered information on him. Nicholas couldn't use high-performance cybernetics, so he became a government official. But with his ability, he could pull most of the family to his side. As for Joel, he wasn't as capable, but he still believed he could become the next successor. Because he was a soldier, the more conservative members supported him. Since he was a soldier too, Joel was bound to see him as a threat and try to embarrass him over his background or manners. From the moment he picked up his utensils, Joel never took his eyes off him. He knew basic etiquette, of course, but he remembered what Hyros had said in the flying car. If he behaved perfectly, that would likely go against what his father actually wanted him to do. Luca glanced at Hyros, his father now. He decided to move to his father's rhythm. Giselle shot him a tense glance. Because he speared the sliced meat with his fork and shoved it in, wolfing it down. Just as expected, Joel spoke up immediately. He put on a blank look. What is it, Brother Joel? This food is amazing. Joel smiled with practiced falseness. As your elder brother, I need to point out your table manners. I don't know how you used to live, but basic etiquette matters. The Custoria family's reputation is on the line. Joel was so eager to smear him that he couldn't even see he was acting. Joel had to be nervous because he was an elite soldier. On one hand, he couldn't tell whether Nicholas had seen through the act. In Nicholas's eyes, Luca and Joel could split the conservative bloc's support. Either way, Nicholas was the real threat he needed to watch. He cut Joel off. Compared to someone who served 10 years and still couldn't earn a 7th grade cross-key medal, this trainee at least got a merit medal. I think I can bring more honor to the Custoria family than table manners ever will. A few relatives burst out laughing, then hurriedly covered their mouths. Joel's face flushed red instantly, like he'd been hit with boiling water. Luca said evenly, I may not have studied etiquette, but I'm good at fighting. After all, I trained under an excellent Imperial Guard captain. He set his utensils down properly. He cut a piece of meat with knife and fork, then brought it to his mouth with practiced elegance. Nicholas stepped in at the right time. Luca, don't tease Joel. Joel, that's enough. He cleverly knocked Joel down a peg while making himself look generous. Joel tried to argue, but Nicholas cut him straight off. Our new brother obviously knows table manners. Nicholas looked at Luca. He was just deliberately pretending he didn't, right? Luca explained calmly. I studied ahead of time, but I forgot a moment ago. First time at an event like this, I was a little nervous. Joel walked straight into his trap and became the punchline. With the conversation firmly in his control, Nicholas continued. I heard you earned the 7th grade cross-key medal. I'm not a soldier, so I don't know much, but I've heard it's rare for a trainee. He nodded. Any Imperial Guard soldier has one. It's nothing to brag about. Nicholas sighed. I'm the eldest son, but I was born weak and couldn't become a soldier. I've always felt I failed father. Now that we have such an excellent soldier like you, I feel a lot lighter. Joel's anger burned inside, and he slammed a fist on the table. Brother, are you saying I'm not good enough? He fell right into the pit Nicholas had dug on purpose. Nicholas answered smoothly. Seems like a misunderstanding, Joel. As your brother, I know your abilities better than anyone. I firmly believe you'll achieve great merit in the future. Joel was frustrated too, because his father was the Imperial Guard captain. His superiors were always overly cautious and kept him out of real combat. That last shred of pride was finally forced to act out. To some extent, it might be the truth. With Hiras's personality, even if his son died in battle, he wouldn't hold the superiors accountable. But petty people would naturally read the room. Still, that was fine. That was the outcome Hiras wanted. As a son, Luca could tell Hiras's smile came from the heart. Ava stepped in to intervene, and after the conflict settled, the dinner was followed by a small reception. When the reception began, Ava introduced him to everyone. She called him Lukis because she said the name Luca sounded too much like the lower district. His old name could just be treated as a nickname, which he didn't mind. Relatives took turns greeting him, but he just couldn't remember their names. Joel's little outburst ended up doing him a favor. It stamped his presence into the room. Everyone could see it now. He wasn't someone easy to handle. After greeting Giselle, his first day in the Custoria family estate came to an end. He fell into a deep sleep on an unfamiliar bed. Then someone entered his room. The lock slid open without a sound. It was Hyros. Hyros spoke softly. Quick reaction, Luca. Sorry for the late visit. I have to keep up the appearance of neutrality. He lifted a bottle of liquor with a casual shake and sat in a chair, which surprised him. By regulation, Imperial Guard personnel weren't supposed to drink. Doctors and scientists said alcohol and tobacco harmed the nervous and hormonal systems tuned for combat. Want a glass? He refused. I don't want unnecessary risk. Learning Aegis combat arts is already enough. Hyros smiled like he expected that and took a drink anyway. As your senior, here's my advice, Hyros said. Your heart needs a little irrational, inefficient impurity if you want to last. It's the key to staying human. He frowned. Is that really necessary for a soldier? People who talk like you usually get swallowed by the core first. His chest tightened. You sound drunk, Captain. Of course. He knew Hyros wasn't drunk. Hyros chuckled. I'll say it again. This is just advice. Consider it a family gift. Cultivate a hobby or habit unrelated to combat. Something that might even get in the way. Hyros stood and patted his shoulder. It was the most human he had ever seen him, because the advice offered Hyros nothing in return, like a father speaking to a son. Just sharpening himself into a weapon had already exhausted him. He didn't have the spare strength to carry more impurity. Maybe he already had plenty inside him. Now he was supposed to add more? He didn't want to become someone like Eli or Kinu, someone who broke rules, let emotions steer them, and caused trouble. But if not, why would an Imperial Guard captain say something like this? He couldn't understand Hyros's purpose. The scene shifted to the next day. He didn't enjoy the second day at the main estate either. The only thing that actually pleased him was a tour of the family armory. He asked, Is guiding the armory also part of your duties? Giselle nodded. Yes. That's why I study mechanical engineering at Clashia Academy. In the Castoria family, managing and maintaining the armory has always been the women's responsibility, because some things can't be entrusted to outsiders. My mother manages it now, and I'll take over later. Luca thought of his stepmother, Ava. His image of her was a classic noble lady, someone who didn't look like she'd ever get oil on her hands. But in Giselle's eyes, her mother was extremely capable. Hyros's prosthetics and weapons were maintained by her. He asked, puzzled, Noble marriages are often arranged, aren't they? If the relationship sours, wouldn't that make tampering easy? Giselle nodded like it was obvious. Exactly. That's why Mother handles it. It's a family tradition and proof of deep trust. As Giselle spoke, he stopped walking, almost spellbound, staring up at an ancient suit of armor. Giselle tilted her head, watching him. The armored frame bore faint traces of an old legion. The most striking features were its single-horned helm and its asymmetrical arms. The right arm was longer and larger than the left, modified as if to operate a special weapon. Giselle stood before the horned frame and introduced it. This is a relic tied to our family history, the full assembly mech frame, Celia. It was the personal armor frame of Agatha, the founder of the Castoria family, the only one of its kind. Luca lifted his gaze and etched Celia's silhouette into his mind like a photograph. The scene shifted again. The Castoria family had an annex called Silver Moon Hall, where retired elders lived. They couldn't wield direct influence. The elders were advisors, meant to keep the head of the family from losing control. They didn't directly participate in decision-making. If they did, the head would become a puppet. Hyros explained the elders of Silver Moon Hall to Luca. There were 7 of them in total, neither too many nor too few. He then asked if anyone had opposed the adoption. Hyros answered, 2 opposed, 4 stayed silent, and only 1 supported it. Silence means they follow the head's will. So the head's decisions usually pass. Opposition is just expressed concern. Don't overthink it. They went up to the 2nd floor, where a long hallway stretched ahead. They entered the room at the very end. The first thing he saw was a massive triangular incense burner. Behind it sat several elders who looked like shadows. Smoke hung like a curtain between them. The atmosphere was solemn and refined, but the elders' conversation was surprisingly casual. Hyros cleared his throat, and the chatter stopped. This child is Lucchese, he introduced. It was obvious he still wasn't used to the new name. The elders began murmuring, judging him in louder and louder voices, while he and Hyros simply stood there in silence. An elder motioned for him to come closer. Luca walked toward the incense burner in the center of the room. The elder who called him over lifted a hand, signaling again. He didn't stop until he stood right in front of him. The elder reached out and stroked his cheek. Child, you must survive, the elder murmured. To do that, you have to devour chaos, rather than be devoured by it. Even if your throat is torn open, you have to do it. It sounded like he was speaking to his current situation and hinting at things he still didn't fully understand. Luca thought about how to answer, then said only, I will. Instinct told him this elder, the one touching his cheek, was the lone supporter of his adoption. He passed through the veil of smoke and returned to Hiras's side. An elder spoke up. "Everyone, quiet down. Let's move to the next agenda." Then he gestured for him to leave first. Luca turned to go, but Hiras grabbed his shoulder and stopped him. Luca was confused. If Hiras might suspect he was colluding with Kinu, why let him overhear something this important? The elders whispered among themselves. "Since the head of the family has decided, we proceed." He ended up sitting in on the elders' meeting with the head for a full hour. After they stepped out of Silvermoon Hall's front gate, he asked Hiras, "Why didn't you let me leave? Why did you make me stay for the meeting?" He guessed Nicholas and Joel had probably never been allowed to attend an elders' council either. Hiras answered only, "You'll find the answer yourself." Without looking back, Hiras added, "That's my way of teaching. Those kids need to taste hardship." The scene shifted to the final morning of his stay at the main estate. The last 3 days had been nothing like he expected, but he thought, at least he could finally say goodbye to this place. When he stepped out of his room, a kid a head shorter than him was aiming a pistol at him. "Dad said kids like you can dodge bullets. Is that true?" He knew the face and the name perfectly. Nicholas's son, Emilio Castoria. He said, "Emilio, you know I'm your uncle, right?" Emilio answered coldly, "I know, but you're lowborn trash." Luca cursed inwardly. Calling him a brat was being polite. He was a shameless little bug. The gun's parts clicked as it chambered. Then came a sharp bang. Luca didn't move. The distance was close, but he expected Emilio would miss. Emilio stomped in place, furious. "Why didn't you dodge? You're supposed to move and dodge!" He snatched the pistol away. Then he kicked Emilio, sending him flying several meters. Emilio collapsed on the ground, staring at him in confusion. He stood over him, aiming the gun down. "Go tell your father that your uncle tried to kill you." Hearing the shot, servants came rushing from every direction. Nicholas sprinted in too and pulled Emilio into his arms. In Nicholas's embrace, Emilio bawled, snot and tears everywhere. Nicholas stared at him, cold as ice. "What happened?" He answered evenly. Emilio pointed a gun at an adult. "So I gave him a little lesson so he won't do it again." Nicholas covered his face and let out a sigh. "I suppose so, but..." He cut him off. "I'm angry too. If it were an ordinary person with no combat skills, they might already be dead. That brat doesn't value other people's lives at all." Nicholas handed Emilio off to the nanny. "Can we talk alone?" Then Nicholas led the way into Luca's room. Luca followed and shut the door. Nicholas sat in a chair, smiling. Nicholas said, "Luca, people outside will think we're in serious conflict." He exposed him coldly. "You used your own son to create a chance for us to meet alone because you don't want others thinking we've formed a private alliance. I'm starting to doubt Emilio is even your real son." Nicholas wore a frightening smile. "Just as I thought. You're excellent. 3 times smarter than Joel. He is my biological son, but even if something happens, I can always have another." Luca moved toward the door, ready to throw Nicholas out. Nicholas kept talking. "I know you've allied with Giselle, but she doesn't fully understand the whole truth. At this rate, the next head of the family will be Joel, and if that happens, I might not survive." His interest flickered. "You have a few minutes," Nicholas spoke slowly. "With your insight, you've probably already figured out what kind of people Joel and I are. It might not look like it now, but once the situation is set in motion, you'll watch people suddenly swarm to support Joel. If Joel becomes head of the family, I might die. If I had overwhelming authority like father, it wouldn't be a problem. Sadly, neither Joel nor I have that kind of power." He acknowledged it, but pressed on. "Joel can't stop you. Why do you think he'll win?" Nicholas explained. "Some people strongly want a successor with a military background. Some like an idiot they can control, but I'm not like them. And the ones who oppose father? They want the next head to be weaker." He finally understood what those people were after. They wanted a puppet, someone whose decisions they could steer. His thoughts sank. Did that mean the Hiras he knew wasn't the real Hiras as head of the family? He asked, "So what do you want me to do?" Nicholas smiled. "Simple. Pretend to oppose me. Build prestige inside the family. Gather connections. Relatives who want a military-born head will naturally lean toward you. If you strip away Joel's supporters and peel off a portion of his faction, then I, the stable choice, become head of the family." Only then did he realize, from the moment Nicholas met him, in just 2 days, Nicholas had already designed and set his victory plan in motion, without even hesitating to put his own son in danger. Just like Giselle said, Nicholas really did resemble Hiras. He asked, "And if I'm strong enough to aim for the head seat myself?" Nicholas stopped. "If you truly wanted that, you wouldn't ask." His voice was calm, certain. "Even if you become head, you won't kill me. Lucchese would need an advisor like me to run the family, wouldn't you? And you're capable of controlling me." He bared a grin. "I'm not being sarcastic. I mean it. Back when I was digging through trash, I thought nobles lived carefree lives." Nicholas didn't deny it. Everyone has their own troubles. If you need something, I'll help however I can. After all, I'm a fairly high-ranking government official," he added. "Don't worry about Giselle. Even if you support her, she'll never become head. Giselle isn't our competitor, so there's no reason to eliminate her." Then Nicholas stepped out and shouted loudly outside, "Luca, no matter how talented you are, if you ignore your elder brothers, you'll never be accepted by the Castoria family." His acting was impressive. He almost wanted to clap. 3 days at the main estate ended there, but to him, it felt like a full week. From now on, he would be visiting the Castoria family estate frequently, though most of the time it would be alongside Hiras. On paper, this aristocratic fortress was his new home, but he already found himself missing that cramped, simple little room back in the training dorms. Inside the sleek flying car, Hiras booted up a holographic projection and began chewing through a massive backlog of work. The man hadn't stopped for a single second since they got in. He never expected an Imperial Guard captain's daily workload to be this grueling. During his short stay at the estate, he had pushed himself to the absolute limit to meet Hiras's towering expectations. But looking back now, he wasn't entirely sure if those were the actual results Hiras wanted. Hiras was simultaneously playing the role of a father and the role of a lethal guard captain. It was nothing like the one-dimensional commander he thought he knew. He ruthlessly replayed the events of the past few days in his head, terrified he had missed some crucial hidden detail. Right then, he felt the heavy thrusters beneath the chassis suddenly groan and shift. The vehicle was actively reversing course. There was absolutely no logistical reason to change trajectory mid-flight. Hiras suddenly killed every single holographic screen. "Don't panic, Luca," Hiras said, his voice terrifyingly flat. "This is part of the plan. Our transport has likely been hijacked. The terrorists will be waiting for us at the designated crash site. Reinforcements are exactly 10 minutes out. We just have to survive until then." Hiras popped open a hidden tactical compartment and tossed him a loaded pistol and a combat dagger. "No parachuting? We'd just be floating targets. We ride it down to the ground. Brace yourself for impact." But landing straight into a prepared kill zone is suicide. Hiras walked calmly toward the vehicle's main navigation console. "Figures. I guess to sit in that mastermind chair, you really do need to know how to do everything." Just as he was trying to process that cryptic statement, Hiras completely bypassed the software firewall with raw physical violence. He drove his fist straight through the armored glass of the monitor. Hiras smirked. "Your shocked expression is priceless. Pop quiz. What do you think our current tactical situation is?" He gripped the reinforced handles on the wall and ceiling to steady his balance as the car violently lurched. The grim answer hit him instantly. "Captain, you deliberately turned yourself into bait." Hiras nodded in confirmation. "This incident will earn Barbara trust inside Nemaxis, because she created a situation viable enough to attack an Imperial Guard captain." He didn't expect the topic to circle back to Barbara. Honestly, whether she was an ally or an enemy, he just wanted to smack her hard in the face. The flying car crashed violently into the ground, sending thick smoke billowing into the air. A second later, the deformed car door was kicked away. Thanks to the impact-absorbing gel, the two of them were almost completely unharmed. Luca vaulted out through the window and quickly surveyed the terrain. This wasteland didn't even have a decent piece of cover. His heart sank. Could they really hold out for 10 minutes? Hiras stepped out and patted his shoulder. The force was as light as a sea breeze. Then, a red glow edged Hiras's pupils. His terminal completed its link with the satellite. Under the satellite's operation, the Sky Eye quickly locked on to the Nemaxis members, even pinpointing their exact numbers. Immediately after, Hiras drew the pistol hidden at his waist. He said casually, "The weather is really nice today. I can see very clearly." As he pulled the trigger, the laser gun began to continuously gather energy. A moment later, a laser beam trailed toward the west. This scene left Luca completely stunned. Hiras acting as bait didn't mean he was unprepared for an ambush. He was willing to be bait because he was confident he could handle those guys alone. Hiras continued shooting while speaking. "You'll be able to identify the enemies in 12 seconds. The sounds of explosions and screams faintly reached Luca's ears. Unable to see the enemy, yet able to lock onto their positions, he had already guessed the reason. This was definitely the use of a military satellite. Hiras said flatly, "I am an Imperial Guard captain after all. I can at least allocate one military satellite for personal use." He just found it incredible. Could one person really do such a thing? Even the most excellent person would find it hard to imitate this kind of sniping. It required a military satellite and massive computational assistance. It looked easy, but it was actually tactical level support. Was this the power held by the Empire's chief Imperial Guard captain? Soon, a bullet whizzed by, grazing the spot where Luca's forehead had just been. The distance was extreme, yet it was a precise snipe. They were here to assassinate the Imperial Guard captain and had clearly made ample preparations. The true target of all attacks was Hiras. As for whether the annoying kid next to him lived or died, it didn't matter to them. Hiras grinned. He drew a spear. I'll take care of the ones wearing full-body mechanical armor, and you just try your best to survive," Luca retorted in dissatisfaction. "Vague instructions and orders are a failure of superiors," Hiras shrugged. When he swung the spear, it screamed through the air, the heavy tip scraping the ground in a brutal arc. "Luca," Hiras said, "if you want to climb to the top, you have to learn to follow garbage orders like a dog, because this world is full of people without honor." He didn't even know how to argue with that logic. He could only cover Hiras from the rear. The enemy fought like a suicide squad, throwing their lives away. For a bunch of rebels, they were damn solid fighters. Imperial Guard Captain Hiras was one of the Empire's absolute strongest soldiers. Even without a heavy armored frame, he was monstrous. The vast majority of the attackers rushed straight at him. With a single devastating strike, Hiras obliterated a rebel on the spot. After dropping the next two in front of him, he charged headfirst right back into the bloodthirsty pack. Outnumbered several times over, Hiras didn't feel a shred of fear. He looked more excited by the second. He had wanted to hang back and observe how Hiras fought, but the four opponents currently boxing him in were no pushovers either. These fanatics didn't care about friendly fire. Even taking a bullet wouldn't make them stop their advance. He activated Aegis combat arts, calculating their kinetic movement trajectories. The surrounding environment instantly snapped into a pre-mapped 3D tactical layout in his mind. In a flash, one of the heavy machine gunners went down by his hand. The very next instant, he was locked in brutal close-quarters combat with another fighter. A shooter behind them fired indiscriminately straight into their tangled melee. His gaze locked onto an Aegis combat arts user, and the man was staring dead right back at him. Aegis combat arts really did run terrifyingly deep within the terrorist syndicate. The enemy could fight him to a standstill without relying on high-tech cybernetic gear, but he knew they were still fundamentally different entities. Right then, he caught the opening. In a blink step, he was in front of the man. His left hand clamped down on the man's arm. A line of light cut across his body, and the man was severed in one clean slash. The moment he grabbed him, the man's focus snapped, and his Aegis combat arts flow collapsed. If he'd been a skilled user, he would have cut his own arm off the instant contact happened and escaped. He flicked his gaze toward Hiras. Bodies were already piled around them. While he was still dealing with four opponents, Hiras had already wiped out most of the attackers. For an assassination attempt on an Imperial Guard captain, it felt sloppy. Hiras told him it wasn't that simple. "Rick is probably hiding at range. If I'm injured in the crash or the fight, he'll jump in and strike immediately. That's a major chance for Nemoxys, and for us too." He asked, "Then why don't we flip it and set a trap to capture Rick?" Hiras shook his head. "Capturing Rick would hurt them, but it wouldn't destroy Nemoxys. Either way, the priority of this operation is raising Barbara's standing. If we trap Rick, Barbara, the infiltrator, might die. Years of effort from above would be wasted." Hiras's tone was flat, almost cruel. "To the higher-ups, Rick and I are both replaceable parts." His gut clenched. Even an Imperial Guard captain was replaceable? Is there anyone in the Empire who isn't? He cut himself off, but Hiras already understood the question. Hiras lifted one finger, pointing upward. "Only one. You know exactly who. People like you and me? Dozens can die, and it doesn't matter. The Empire just loses a few bricks from its wall. But if the Emperor dies, the Empire collapses. So in the end, we're just pieces the Empire can use." The scene shifted back to the training camp. News that he had become an adopted son of the Castoria family spread fast. Everyone looked at him with envy. Some even started sucking up to him. He knew exactly how they saw it, but it wasn't what he wanted. He'd wanted to get close to Hiras for one reason, so he wouldn't be watched anymore. Now he realized it was pointless. He hadn't escaped the surveillance. He'd inherited something worse, a mission that could get him killed. Investigate Kinu. And sooner or later, the price of joining that family would come due. He steadied himself. He had to do everything he could to keep raising his ability and his status. His trainee period had been shortened to 1 year. Next came the lower district. After that, he could finally fulfill his wish, becoming a full Imperial Guard member. Just as he was about to head back to the lounge, he overheard nobles talking about Eli. Confused, he stepped in to ask. What he heard made his blood go cold. Eli had beaten his own brother so badly he was practically crippled. Now Eli was the strongest successor candidate of the Kartika family. He couldn't laugh like the others. What did Eli do? Eli had never cared about inheritance or promotion before, and he'd heard the brothers didn't even have a terrible relationship. Yet Eli had brutally injured his brother and was now reaching for the heir's seat. He could roughly guess the reason. Lillian's death had twisted Eli's mindset, maybe even rewritten his life's goal. He waited outside Eli's door for nearly half an hour. A familiar figure finally appeared in front of him. Eli lifted a brow. Luca? No. Shouldn't it be Lucchese Castoria now? He didn't bother answering. He still preferred his old name. Eli tossed out those pointless words and walked straight into his room. He stayed outside the door, waiting for him to come back out. When Eli emerged, he said, I heard you put your brother in the hospital. Eli's expression didn't change. It was a formal duel. Eli spoke like he was stating a fact. My brother's always been simple. He can't take provocation. That only made him more curious. How did Eli push him that far? Eli lowered his head slightly. I slept with his girlfriend. Maybe because I'm better looking, she came with me fast. I feel bad for him. He frowned at the handsome bastard. You're a real piece of work. Then Eli's tone shifted. So what kind of dangerous deal did you make? Normal terms don't get you adopted into a great house. He didn't reveal his mission. My life's always been a tightrope. Nothing's changed. Eli tapped the ground with his boot. Tightrope walkers fall too. He knew the truth. If you're on the rope, you don't get to stop walking. Eli glanced at him like he'd already seen through everything. He had never had a choice. From the start, not doing it meant dying. Eli stopped him as he turned. I've decided I'm done running from reality, he asked carefully. Because of that woman? He didn't say Lillian out loud. Eli closed his eyes, then opened them again. If my family has a problem, I'll become the heir and fix it. And if I'm dissatisfied with the empire, I'll climb high enough to change it. The words sounded dangerous, but he liked Eli's hunger. With Eli's talent and ability, he believed that if Eli went all in, he'd make it happen. He wasn't going to stop him, especially when he couldn't even give anyone advice right now. He said, either way, welcome back, Eli. If you want to become the heir, you'll need to work harder than you are now. Eli shot back. And you too, aren't you? Becoming an adopted son of the Castoria family already cost you plenty. So why don't we push forward together? Eli added. That's why we're Imperial Guard trainees. He agreed. Because all he could do now was cling to the rope, no matter what. Eli proved it with action. The very next day, he volunteered to lead a mission to exterminate indigenous creatures on Nova Planet. Meanwhile, he went to the Imperial workshop. He needed a better weapon. He swung his blade at a trial robot. Ruina, the three-armed girl, laughed and asked, well, how is it? He approved the design. Just holding it makes my cybernetic body feel tightly wound, in a good way. But I think the output could be dialed down a bit. Ruina understood the intent behind his design immediately. Just as the master smith of Debo expected, Ruina didn't demand anything extra, and what he had was more than enough. He asked what it was called. Runa answered, Cruxus, an ancient word meaning calamity and destruction. And the gun from earlier is Runa.it means destruction. They're both girls. Treasure them like you would a lover. He chuckled. One weapon in each hand. He never expected his first love would be a gun and a blade. He didn't even know which one would end up as the main wife. The scene shifted, and he stepped into the lower district. Just as he was about to contact Gabriel, a man eyed his wallet. He caught the vagrant's wrist and twisted hard. The wrist tore apart on the spot, wires and metal parts spraying out. The vagrant screamed and bolted into a dark alley. He was starting to get used to it. Yes, this place was supposed to feel like this, but after several calls, Gabriel still wouldn't pick up. He followed the address marked on the map and headed over. His temper rose. If Gabriel was ignoring him to go have fun, he would smash his nose flat. When he pushed the door open, he only saw Gabriel sprawled on the floor like a corpse. So this is why you aren't answering? Just then, his arm began to tremble slightly. Relax, man. I'm not dead yet. He got Gabriel to a hospital fast. Gabriel took 4 bullets to the chest and abdomen, yet he wasn't in immediate danger. This meant they probably weren't trying to kill him. He demanded an explanation. It turned out to be a warning. The lower district was tense recently, and factions were forming up fast. But Gabriel wasn't in a gang. He was a freelancer who made a living with violence. He still advised him to join one, otherwise he wouldn't last long. But Gabriel would rather die than work for trash like that. More than anything, he wanted to know why he had come looking for him. He didn't explain much. Same time tomorrow, I'll be back, and have the strongest painkillers ready. Gabriel didn't like it, but he would follow his instructions anyway. Gabriel was loyal and wouldn't betray people he owed, so he had been investing in Gabriel for a long time. Finding traces Keanu left behind in the lower district wasn't easy. Keanu seemed tightly connected to old contacts in the duel arena. If he could figure out what Keanu did back then, he might be able to dig up a lead. He couldn't understand what Keanu was doing in a place like this. In this barren land, there were no dreams. He didn't return to his upper district residence. He planned to stay in the lower district for a few days. He walked from the prosperous quarter into the slums, occasionally stopping at the boundary where he could look up at the upper district. Finally, his steps halted in front of a crumbling building. Orphanage No. 72, the place where he grew up. Across the street, he stared at the orphanage facade. A truck had pulled up right in front. He sneered inwardly. Embezzling again. That pig. A few children who had woken up peeked out, watching timidly from inside. The older kids clearly knew what the director was doing, but they had no power to stop the corruption. He understood perfectly that the world wouldn't change because of this. The only thing he could change was himself. Still, he could interfere. It wouldn't fix the world, but it could at least buy these kids a few full meals, and then everything would quickly slide right back to how it was. When he walked up to the 2 men, a porter stared at him. They weren't thugs, just ordinary laborers. But even a change this small was worth acting for. The man sneered. Where did this soft weakling come from? He pulled a pistol straight from inside his coat, but the moment the bullet fired, he caught it with his bare hand. He opened his palm, and the deformed slug dropped at his feet. The other man was already scared stiff and didn't dare to interfere. The director finally recognized him. You're Luca. A second later, his fist smashed into the director's jaw. Still running this scam? Haven't you stolen enough? The director immediately tried to play the guilt card. I treated you well. I even gave you more food than the others later on. He smiled at the director. I'm grateful, which is why I haven't snapped your neck yet. The director begged in a panic. I was wrong. Tell me what upset you. I'll apologize. He didn't have any sense of mission to take care of the orphanage that raised him. Such charity was just the hypocrisy and passing impulse of rich people. He listened to the director's nonsense in silence. A man like that wasn't even worth the trouble of beating before killing. Even if the director was replaced, the situation wouldn't change much. He looked toward the children watching from the windows. One kid's eyes shone as they waved at him. He remembered the days he couldn't eat and had to dig through the trash heap. The next second, he punched the director in the face. He said coldly, "Watch your behavior from now on, and tomorrow, make sure the kids eat until they're full." With that, he vanished into the dark alley. The scene shifted to the next day. Gabriel loaded himself up with a massive amount of painkillers and followed him out. Gabriel complained loudly the whole way. Normally, he would have kicked him in the leg by now, he replied flatly. It's because I slept well last night, Gabriel remarked. Beating up someone you hate is good for your mental health. He had to admit Gabriel had a point. Before long, they reached the entrance of the duel arena. A gang member at the door looked in disbelief. Gabriel? I heard you got shot, and you're actually still alive. Gabriel chatted with the acquaintance. News travels that fast? I don't know which bastard did it, but I'm definitely going to kill them. Soon, the gang member noticed him standing to the side. I watched that last match too. Led by a lackey, the two arrived at Aleph's office. Aleph still wore that sharp expression. Aleph stood up to welcome him like a VIP. Do you want to participate in the matches? He denied it. No. I have some things I want to talk to you about alone this time. Aleph pulled out a cigarette. That won't do. I'm not good at fighting. I need some security. He replied calmly. Those two bodyguards behind you are just scarecrows anyway. The two guards bristled in anger, their brows nodding as their fingers clamped tightly onto their gun grips. Aleph stared at him coldly. I don't care if you're a good boy or Luca. Don't think being able to fight gives you the right to be arrogant. I respect your instructor, but that doesn't mean you get to be rude. It seemed a fight was inevitable. Aleph stubbed out his cigarette. The two subordinates immediately aimed their guns at him. He grinned, simultaneously signaling Gabriel to block the door. After hearing Gabriel's bewildered response, he bent his knees slightly and launched himself upward with sudden force. His fingers dug directly into the concrete ceiling. He hung upside down from the ceiling, looking down at the two guards. Their aiming reaction was half a beat, too slow. He then moved across the ceiling like a spider clawing its way, before spinning and dropping down. Using the momentum of the fall, he evaded their intersecting lines of fire. The two guards broke into a cold sweat on the spot. When they fired again, the bullets passed right through where his head had been, and due to the crossfire, they ended up shooting each other. Two screams instantly echoed through the room. Aleph frowned, realizing the guards were indeed useless. The scene shifted, and heavy rain began to fall on the streets outside. He and Gabriel had already arrived at Gilda's repair shop. Gilda was working on Gabriel's mechanical arm, because whenever it rained, his arm would ache. Meanwhile, he thought back to the agreement he had just reached with Aleph. Aleph reluctantly used his terminal to scan his code, but the information that popped up on the screen startled him. In the end, Aleph agreed to his request. He wanted Aleph to provide information about the former manager Drala, as detailed as possible. In return, Aleph wanted his guarantee to become a retainer. 1 year later, when he came of age, he would gain the right to appoint an aide. A person receiving such a guarantee could be registered as a noble's retainer, and thereby gain the right of residence in the upper district. Until then, Aleph would first prove he was worthy of his guarantee. As for whether he could become a retainer, it would depend on his performance, and in the end, he agreed to this condition. When he heard about waterproofing, Gabriel got pissed. My limbs are already a waterproof model, and I have to pay to do waterproofing again? Gilda nodded. Even if the manufacturer did it carefully, impurities will get in over time. It's best to do waterproofing at least once every 6 months. He listened to their conversation, then took out a credit chip and tossed it onto the table. He said, use this to do a full overhaul on Gabriel's cybernetic body and do the waterproofing treatment while you're at it. Gilda smiled as she pocketed the credit chip. Ah, Luca really knows his stuff, but Gabriel's heart ached terribly over the cost. Gabriel complained, Luca, you're being scammed by this woman. You'd be better off using that money to upgrade. But Gilda wouldn't arbitrarily overcharge the two of them. He could also understand Gabriel's feelings, in the lower district. If you completely trusted a mechanic, you really could be bled dry. At the same time, his his terminal received a message from Aleph. After Aleph took over the duel arena, almost all of Drala's confidants ended up dead. One was still alive, but the problem was he was in a mental hospital. Although he didn't have high hopes, he still felt it was worth making contact. The scene shifted, and a flying car was seen crashing into a building. He then stepped out of the car. All this trouble, just to go to a mental hospital. The guy who shot at his flying car wore clothes with a gang symbol. He questioned Gabriel if he was hiding something, but Gabriel looked just as unaware. If Gabriel had lied, he would have noticed it already. The guy wasn't someone good at lying. Someone shouted, "Gabriel, so you ended up standing on Aleph's side after all? You ignored our warning." Sure enough, the other party was coming for Gabriel. It turned out they knew that Gabriel had appeared in Aleph's office the day after he was shot, so they mistakenly thought Gabriel had joined another gang. Gabriel's face flushed red, veins bulging. In a situation like this, it was hard for him to explain things coherently. He directly asked Gabriel, "Do you have a spare pistol?" "No spares." But Gabriel still handed his own gun to him. The opponent said coldly, "You picked the wrong side, Gabriel. The boss lady asked me to pass you a message." He completely ignored the other party and fired continuously to confirm the point of impact. The bullets pulled to the upper left. Just then, the opposing grenadier fired a grenade at them. But the moment the opponent pulled the trigger, he had already caught the sound. The next second, one of his bullets flew straight toward the incoming grenade. The bullet and the grenade collided, punching straight through the payload. The incoming grenade detonated in midair. He pulled the trigger again, and the leader's mechanical arm was shattered on the spot. By the time they tried to run, it was too late. Cracking sounds came from the gang members' knees and elbows in rapid succession, and they dropped their weapons and fell like puppets with cut strings. The driver, having regained consciousness, looked at him. "Our company has a contract with a security firm. The rescue team will be dispatched within 3 minutes." This kind of professionalism, rare in the lower district, almost made him want to give the driver full marks. Only then did Gabriel seem to realize something, frowning and muttering, "Don't tell me. It's really the boss lady?" Gabriel then grabbed a gang member by the collar. Yanking him up, he demanded, "The boss lady you're talking about? Is it Martina from Rose Life? You're hunting me down just because I refused to join the gang?" The gang member's eyes widened, his brow twisting fiercely. "You really are an idiot. The boss lady likes you. That's why she wanted to live with you." Gabriel looked bewildered. "Wasn't it to make me a full-time bodyguard?" The gang member sneered. "A guy like you who refuses to be tied down gets shot and immediately runs off to team up with Aleph. How could the boss lady not be angry? If she really wanted to kill you, she would have blown your head off long ago." At this time, he spoke up. "Tell Martina, Gabriel will come see her." A question arose in his mind. If an ordinary woman approached Gabriel, people might think she was after his money. But if it's a female gang boss, she shouldn't be short of money. To say he wasn't curious about this kind of woman would definitely be a lie. After several detours, Luca finally reached the hospital. By the rules, non-legal guardians weren't allowed to visit. But after Luca cleared the nurse's shopping cart, she let the two of them in. It looked like this kind of trade was routine. Noma was in room 401, Drala's former personal bodyguard. With a click, the heavy lock was opened. Luca stepped into the room and called the man by name. Noma sat on the bed, hollow-eyed and gaunt. Luca opened his palm and waved it in front of Noma's face. Noma's pupils followed only sometimes. His recovery was slow. His cognition had seriously deteriorated. Luca said, "I'm Luca. I'm here to ask about Drala, the former manager of the duel arena." One of Noma's cybernetic limbs twitched like a spasm. The neural pathways tied to muscle and movement were damaged. Aleph had done Noma dirty. Luca thought he could get answers, but in this state, Noma couldn't give him anything about Kinu. Maybe the only option was the Imperial Guard's temporary neural damage treatment approach. Noma was strong with close-range weapons, especially daggers. When Luca drew a defensive dagger, Noma's eyes changed, but Gabriel thought it was a waste of time. Luca immediately tested him with a quick strike. Noma raised the dagger and blocked Luca's attack. Luca's hand and the dagger clashed several times, attack and defense alternating. The neural circuits tied to combat and dagger technique were forced awake. Other functions might recover with it. If even that part was dead, then there was no saving him. Noma rasped out, "This feels like someone dragged me out of a swamp." "You're Luca, right? So you're here to interrogate me too." He stared at Luca, his awareness slowly coming back. To keep Noma's brain active, Luca kept the exchanges going and said, "I only got some information from Aleph. What I want is Drala's circle." Luca described Kinu's traits. "Someone with Kinu's vibe is rare." Noma frowned. "I might remember something, but why should I tell you?" He was a lower district survivor and wouldn't do favors for free. Luca made it simple. "As payment, I'll get you out of this hospital." He looked at Gabriel. "You've got a spare room, right?" Gabriel froze. "You want me to babysit a senile old man?" Luca cut him off. "Gather people you can trust. I'm building a gang with you as the boss." Gabriel jolted. "What the hell are you talking about?" Luca replied flatly. "If you don't want it, I'll find someone else. This had been in Luca's plan since last time. He needed people who could become his right and left hands. Gabriel alone wasn't enough. He needed an organization, something that functioned like a gang. Thinking of this, Luca suddenly realized, maybe Kinu was also this kind of existence. Kinu didn't participate in public affairs, nor did he belong to any criminal gang. Therefore, only someone close enough like Noma would know Kinu's specific situation. Kinu's relationship with Drala might be just like Luca's relationship with Gabriel. Although it was just speculation, he was almost certain. Kinu had gathered local followers in the lower district, executed unofficial missions, and built his own team. His heart sank. So was he retracing Kinu's footsteps while simultaneously recreating them? But he still didn't understand what the meaning behind this really was. The scene shifted, and Luca arrived at the Imperial Guard database room. Just as he expected, the time Kinu became an instructor exactly overlapped with Drala's downfall. But he still didn't know the purpose and reason behind Kinu's actions. Now Noma's treatment had to be accelerated. Perhaps he could dig out something new from Noma. He also realized that if he suddenly let go of Gabriel, even if he wanted to quit, he might not be able to. Gabriel would slowly decline like Drala and eventually die. Kinu might not have done anything wrong. On the contrary, Drala achieved great success precisely because of Kinu, becoming a gang boss and even controlling the duel arena. Of all the people he had met, Kinu was the toughest and most cunning kind, able to maintain balance amidst intricate interests. Kinu guarded his safe zone perfectly. Even amidst chaos, he never lost his direction. Under the purple light, dust drifted slowly in the air. Someone was hiding in the corner. Kinu revealed himself. He had been hiding his presence very deeply the entire time. Kinu spoke. "Good job, Luca. You have completed the foundation of Aegis. It's time to enter the next stage." Luca had to admit, he wanted to become someone like Kinu. The scene shifted to the training ground. While Luca warmed up, Kinu was calmly sipping tea. He'd even poured it into a thermos and brought it out here. He really did love the stuff. Kinu smiled. "Didn't expect you to brush up against the Miss threshold this fast." Miss referred to the level where someone was qualified to teach Aegis combat arts. Aegis used to be split into countless tiers, but with the lineage gone, those labels stopped mattering. He knew Kinu didn't call him here just to lecture. Kinu's grin widened. "Looks like you're dying to take a swing at me." Kinu rose from the chair. His steps were steady, but the limits in his body were still there. With the state he was in, Kinu couldn't beat him in a straight fight. Kinu flicked his fingers in a taunt. "If you don't want to end up bedridden, protect your head and torso." Only now did he truly notice it. Kinu's right arm was built for combat. The weight and feel were completely different, yet there wasn't the slightest imbalance. That level of control was absurd, but Kinu's damaged neural system couldn't handle a high-output cybernetic body. Kinu was taking a massive risk for him, and chances like today were rare. He held on to his respect, set his stance with genuine formality, and said, "Thank you, instructor." His foot skimmed the tile. Lost again. The entire exchange lasted 5 seconds. He drove in with everything he had, and every single strike was shut down by Kinu's arm. On paper, he should have had an overwhelming advantage. Still, he asked honestly, "Instructor, can you see the future?" Kinu chuckled. "If I could, do you think I'd be living this hard?" Kinu's tone sharpened. "Luca, Aegis combat arts were stolen knowledge. Up to now, you've learned how to use your eyes to take in more. By expanding your senses, you change the way you see the world." After that, Kinu signaled for Luca to step out for a moment. Luca pressed his lips into a faint smile. Kinu really was a cold-blooded instructor. If he couldn't learn on his own, then he didn't deserve to enter the next stage, and his Aegis combat arts would stop right there. Luca helped Kinu up from the floor. "I'll give you a shoulder to lean on." Kinu used a damaged brain to control a combat cybernetic body, and could still engage in high-speed confrontation. Luca knew exactly how amazing that was. That person who seemed to know everything was right beside him. But Kinu simply wouldn't give answers, and Luca didn't expect him to answer either, because both of them understood that to maintain a deep connection, emotional distance was actually necessary. When Luca was supporting Kinu on the way to the office, Kinu talked about trivial topics, saying there were subtle differences in feeling between a biological body and a cybernetic body, and even suggested Luca experience intimacy once before undergoing full-body cybernetic modification. These words sounded just like normal small talk between a master and apprentice. Luca knew that one day, this relationship might end in ruin. This bond was incredibly fragile. Both he and Kinu were ready to cut off their spiritual connection with each other at any time. Luca wasn't sad when he left, but to say there wasn't a trace of bitterness would be a lie. He only hoped that he wouldn't have to dispose of Kinu with his own hands. 2 days later, Luca went to the lower district to meet Gabriel. Gabriel had found some people. As long as they were paid, they were willing to do anything. Luca scratched his head helplessly. What he needed were people he could trust, not addicts. Gabriel had gotten Noma out of the hospital, and it cost a lot of money. Luca took out a credit chip and tossed it to Gabriel. Next time, try not to spend all the money. In this group, he played the role of the sponsor. Then he opened the door to the room on the second floor. Noma sat blankly on the bed. Noma's name should still be on the hospital's roster. As long as no one came to visit, no one would notice he was missing, except for those bribed security guards and nurses. Gabriel did even better than Luca expected. Luca loaded a vial of medicine into a syringe, then injected the medicine into Noma's body. After Noma's body absorbed the drug, he tossed a dagger in front of him. "Do you remember me?" Noma gave a small nod. "I'm someone you can trust." Luca kept pushing that mental therapy rhythm, forcing Noma's awareness back into place. The next instant, their daggers slammed together, sparks bursting off the blades. Gabriel just stood there, stunned. You could tell from Noma's speed, before he was crippled, he'd been a monster. Even now, he could handle one or two ordinary people without breaking a sweat. He brought down a heavy strike, and Noma was driven back several steps. Noma dropped onto the bed, his head suddenly clearer. Noma stared at Luca. "What did you do to me?" He answered flatly. "Just a combination of drugs." Noma wanted a cigarette, preferably a drink too, but he refused both. Noma chuckled. "You're strict like a soldier." Anyway, thinking back, Drala used to call that man Noel. He curled his lip. Kinu really did have taste. Noel was a rebel leader from the distant past, and Kinu had used that name as an alias. The more Noma replayed it, the more everything felt wrong. Drala was a good man, but he wasn't fit to run the duel arena. Probably because of that man called Noel. Part of the duel arena's income was routed through other businesses. Noma stopped mid-sentence, then let out a bitter laugh. "Before that, I've got a favor to ask." He sighed, knowing it was coming. "Is this about Aleph?" What happened to Noma was because of Aleph. Noma wasn't asking him to do it for him. He just wanted him to look the other way. He'd take revenge himself. Luca warned him, "You're under Gabriel's protection right now. If you want to go after Aleph, wait until you're out of here." Noma's voice turned cold. "Don't threaten me. I don't know much, but I keep my promises." Aleph betrayed Drala. He deserves to die. The situation was getting messier between Aleph and Noma. Who to trust? He would have to decide for himself. Right then, Noma finally spoke to Luca. "Aleph should still have Drala's old books. Track the companies that start with B. That money should be flowing straight into Noel's pocket." Before he could respond, a thunderous crash erupted downstairs. Gabriel rushed out to check. The bald was pinned to the floor under a high heel, stomped down by a woman. She looked down like she owned the place. The woman sneered. "Your people are terrible at recon, Gabriel." Martina had even less patience than Luca expected. Today was the time they'd agreed to meet, yet Gabriel never showed up that morning. He walked up to her at an unhurried pace. Before she could speak, his hand landed on her shoulder. "So this is your excuse for barging in?" She laughed coldly. "You're lecturing us about reason? Isn't that a joke?" He turned and ordered. The bald, flat nose, cross-eyed. "Listen carefully. Gabriel and I are heading out. You hold this place. I won't repeat myself. No drinking on the job." Rose Life was a lower district women's gang formed for survival. Most members were born here or had nowhere else to go. To keep their loyalty, the one in charge had to be a woman. He asked Gabriel if he had met Martina before. Gabriel admitted he had, and he even bragged, "I did temporary security work for them once. She was probably captivated by my charm." The way Gabriel talked, he barely knew Martina at all. At this rate, he'd either get hired by her or get killed by her. That couldn't happen. If Aleph decided Gabriel wasn't useful anymore, he'd sell him off. Luca had to keep this guy alive. Before long, they reached Rose Life's turf, a rare sight in the Empire. An Eastern-style 3-story building rose in front of them. On the stairs leading to the 3rd floor, the eye-patch woman stopped. Gabriel clenched his fist. "You want to fight here?" The eye-patch woman warned him coldly. "Don't reject Martina again this time, unless you want to lose your life." The moment Luca stepped inside, he noticed it. Something in the fragrance was messing with the senses, probably the result of multiple anesthetic agents vaporizing together. Just then, a pistol pressed hard against his temple. The combat reflexes formed from training made his body tense involuntarily, ready to move at any time. A voice said coldly, "Anyone who moves again dies." More than a dozen gang members completely surrounded Luca and Gabriel. One of the gang members ignored the warning and tried to aim his muzzle at Luca. Luca's gun was faster. He kept his promise and blew the man's head off. There were instantly 2 more corpses in the room. The atmosphere was stretched to the limit, and a massacre could break out at any moment. It wasn't until the person inside spoke that the smell of gunpowder was suppressed. "Who told you to be rude to the guests?" The voice was excessively beautiful. Whether it was a naturally good voice or the result of vocal cord modification, he almost immediately judged. The owner of this voice was Martina, diva. Martina wore a charming, Eastern-style cheongsam. Behind the fan, the edges of her eyelids glowed faintly. The eye-patch woman replied expressionlessly, I acted on my own. I'm sorry, Diva. Gabriel suppressed his anger. You invited me here just for an ambush? Do you think I'll just let this go? Before Gabriel could explode, he interrupted him. Calm down, Gabriel. He could tell from the eye patch woman's reaction she was lying. The eye patch woman's tone carried hesitation, clearly weighing things out. Martina had wanted to get rid of Gabriel but failed, and was now just finding a way out for herself to save face. Martina quickly grasped the right person to talk to, her tone elegant but sharp. Young master is not someone from the lower district. Why meddle in the affairs here? He had long been used to being treated as someone from the upper district, and only replied flatly, There are reasons. It's none of your business. Martina frowned slightly. We are Rose Life. Don't think you are safe just because you are a noble. I'm warning you in advance. He raised his hand to cover his face and laughed loudly. A few rats from the sewer huddled together, and suddenly think they become big shots. How ridiculous. Martina's frown deepened, and her subordinates also began to stir, ready to start a war at any time. Just then, the one-eyed woman interrupted Martina. She leaned in close to Martina and whispered a few words. Martina's expression changed slightly, then quickly composed itself. With a sigh, she snapped her fan shut. Martina glanced at Gabriel standing behind him. I only have one demand. Gabriel becomes my lover. And of course, he also has to join Rose Life. In a world where cosmetic surgery was almost routine, Martina was still stunningly beautiful. But would such a woman really take a fancy to Gabriel? Martina's tone was sharp. You said you didn't want to take orders from anyone. But Gabriel, aren't you working for this young master right now? Gabriel braced himself and replied, That's a cooperative relationship. I owe him a debt. Martina bit her lower lip, showing a look of frustration. Right then, Luca pulled Gabriel aside and lowered his voice. Agree to date her for a while first. Things will be much easier. You don't have to actually join the gang. That way they'll have less leverage over you. Gabriel panicked on the spot. You think I can meet this kind of beauty with my face? She's older than my dead grandma. This was indeed a question worth considering. But Lucas still comforted Gabriel without changing his expression. After careful consideration, he concluded that since Gabriel was going to build his own organization, it was impossible for him to join Rose Life. Martina called out to Luca. You plan to form a new gang? Her tone was sliding. You still don't quite understand the rules here. However, with Alep's help, it wouldn't be hard for him to set up a gang. Martina said flatly, I've never missed any man I want, I get. He smiled coldly. Then this time will be your first time experiencing failure. A first time at this age is quite fresh. Enjoy it. Martina stopped looking at him and instead stared at Gabriel, then thrust out her chest as if declaring her bargaining chips. Martina softened her voice. I can do more for you than you imagine. Please, stay by my side. Gabriel was visibly flustered and turned his head away to avoid Martina's gaze. No one expected Martina to be so earnest. He, however, quietly turned the power to maximum. If the negotiation failed, he would slaughter everyone without hesitation. Right then, Martina leaned back in her chair, showing an impatient expression. Fine, there's no other way. Since you're here, let's talk business. Martina's attitude suddenly flipped, as if the pleading from moments ago had never happened. Luca's battle-ready posture suddenly felt a bit foolish. This time it was Gabriel's turn to ask, Martina, didn't you say you liked me? Giving up that easily? Martina tilted her head. I like to entangle myself with ugly men, but that only makes me feel very lowly. Every time I think of a person like you actually daring to treat me that way, I feel a pang of pain, especially when pinned down by the most disgusting men. Martina smiled and shrugged lightly. Gabriel's face flushed red, and he clicked his tongue. It seems that if you live long enough, people really do get weird. He was still a minor. It was truly difficult to understand a woman like Martina. Soon, Martina switched back to another expression. Enough. Next, we talk business. After finishing the talk with Martina, Luca, accompanied by her subordinate Grace, went to see Aleph. Now, Gabriel's faction was connected to both the duel arena and Rose Life. Rumors like that were enough to drive away the pests, and new talent would also flood in. Capable people are ambitious and want to claim a good position in the new gang. Aleph's ability to handle affairs was very strong, which made him very satisfied. On his way back, Grace asked him, Young master, do you trust Aleph? He gave Grace a side eye. Your other eye must be blind too. You think I would trust him? Grace was about to answer, seemingly wanting to use Diva as a comparison, but he directly cut her off. He said coldly, Your boss is equally untrustworthy. She is capricious and unpredictable. When he slandered Martina, Grace frowned. That loyalty was indeed admirable. Martina had mentioned before that Grace used to be an Imperial Guard trainee. Martina clearly wanted to use Grace to pry into his identity and purpose, but he did not stop it. Grace was 10 times more useful than those addicts Gabriel had recruited. Moreover, Rose Life also gave them a patrol job in Rose City, which was a pretty good deal for his side. Grace asked Luca, "Young master, are you from a military family?" Hearing this, he stopped. "Why would you think that?" Grace explained, "Because you're stronger than me. I didn't expect to lose so easily to an opponent who isn't even an adult yet." Grace had very sharp eyes. She grasped the boundaries and pressure of his abilities. He couldn't figure it out. Grace hadn't even finished the Imperial Guard curriculum, yet why could she still work under Martina with such confidence? He actually became more curious about the reason why Grace left the Imperial Guard. After that, the two probed each other and asked each other questions. Although there seemed to be many topics, there was no substantial content. The important things were hidden by both sides, but he could feel that he and Grace had gotten a little closer. Her way of thinking was very similar to his. Getting along, it even felt a bit like a companion in the training camp. Surprisingly relaxed. Noma had said it. Track those companies starting with B. The money flowing in there would eventually flow to Noel. In other words, into Kinu's pocket. Luca checked around, but found that those companies had been shut down for many years, and a lot of information could not be traced. And the lower district database was already prone to data corruption. More importantly, he was almost certain that Kinu must have planted a large number of false clues. To find out the truth, he had to use a more complete and better maintained database. At least it had to be high-level network data. A name surfaced in his mind. Nicholas Castoria, a high-ranking official of the Empire, and nominally his brother. Soon, Luca called Nicholas's terminal. "I want to access the Empire's central database. Brother should have the clearance, right?" Nicholas confirmed it, but immediately refused. "I can't give you the clearance. I still want to keep my head." He certainly understood, so he changed his phrasing. "Then can you help me investigate a few ghost companies? Consider it a personal favor you owe me." Nicholas asked in return, "Will this help your status in the family?" He answered, "It might." Hearing this answer, Nicholas readily agreed. 2 hours at most. This kind of efficiency made him very satisfied. He also knew very well that Nicholas would sooner or later collect today's favor with interest, making more troublesome and harder to refuse requests. That was a matter for the future. What was more important now were the immediate threats. Noma, Gabriel's organization, Rose Life, the duel arena, and Aleph. Luca had been handling these matters consecutively and hadn't slept well for 3 days. Even if Hiras called him, he would probably couldn't help but show impatience. He murmured in a low voice, "Light, disappear," and then closed his eyes. When he woke up again, 6 hours had already passed. He connected his terminal to the wall display to check Eli's record. During the time he was away, exactly how many missions had Eli completed? Eli even voluntarily took on missions he didn't need to do, making it hard to catch sight of him. Luca and Eli were both busy with their own affairs. Because they had no joint missions, the two hadn't seen each other for a long time. A female classmate he met in the hallway said to him, "Eli has simply gone crazy lately. He might set the highest mission record in the history of the training center. If this continues, you will soon fall from the top spot," he replied coldly. "Then let Eli be the top." The female classmate laughed. "I heard you entered the Castoria family so leisurely. If I became the adopted daughter of an Imperial Guard captain, I would be relaxed and carefree too." He certainly wanted to relax too. He even wanted to punch this person who didn't understand him. After getting the name Castoria, the tasks on his back actually became more significant and complex. In the past, enemies and allies were decided by superiors. He only needed to swing his sword and pull the trigger. But what was he now? He even had to judge for himself who were allies and who were enemies. Who to follow, who to trust. Everything became blurred, extremely frustrating. He wanted to give up several times, but also understood that since he had come this far, giving up would only lead to being disposed of. People like Kinu, like Hiras, they weren't born monsters either. They must have also experienced trial and error similar to his before growing to where they are today. He also had to become an existence like them. Seeing his expression was not right, the young girl hurriedly apologized. "I wasn't mocking you. You are worthy of the Castoria name." This sentence made his mood slightly better. Status and power that make others read his face. That is what he wants. Not relying on pity and mercy, but a position won by his own strength. He gently patted the female classmate's shoulder as a greeting. "Just haven't slept well for a few days." A noble young master is not something anyone can be. After that, Luca headed for Eli's private maintenance room. The moment the sensors recognized him, the door opened. Eli was reclined in a service chair while precision mechanical arms were busy replacing parts of his cybernetic body. Eli turned his head to greet him. "Yo, Luca. You must have heard that I, the Caltica young master, have been working really hard lately." Eli gave a self-mocking laugh. "But compared to the old you, it's simply not worth mentioning. If I want to catch up, I have to work hard." He only realized then that Eli had been through so many battles in a short time that his whole person looked like he had aged a bit. Eli's talent had always been higher than his. He had just been coasting along before. Even so, Eli was able to achieve similar results to him. He also had to work harder to bring his Aegis combat arts into the next stage. Otherwise, it wouldn't be long before he was left behind by Eli. After changing his clothes, Eli motioned for him to follow. "I'll take you to see my trophy." Through the glass window, Luca saw a metallic creature covered in electrodes and cables. It was a beast made of metal and machinery, completely replacing flesh and blood, and its ecology was still a mystery. This was also his first time seeing such a thing up close. It was indeed worth showing off. Because they carry a natural electromagnetic field in their bodies, he heard that capturing one alive was not easy. He couldn't help asking Eli, are mechanical beasts also related to ancient civilizations? No matter how much he had changed, Eli was still Eli. His obsession with ancient civilizations hadn't changed at all. Eli gave his judgment. Although we can't be sure, the possibility is very high. Although mechanical beasts are composed of mechanical parts, their structure is as precise and complex as biological organisms. Some even say that they will grow and reproduce over time. It's just that no one knows the principle. He looked at the researcher on the side. Can this thing be tamed? The other party shook his head. There is no precedent. I can't give an accurate answer. While he was talking, the mechanical beast seemed to take an interest in him. The scene shifted as the two of them left the research room. Luca knew very well in his heart, this might be the last time he saw that mechanical beast. It would soon be transferred to a research department directly under the royal family. Rather than a transfer, it was more like an exile. It would be locked up in some unknown place and end its life as an experimental subject. He was not sympathizing, just stating facts. Eli added with a smile. There's a second trophy too. Consider it a congratulation on becoming the young master of the Castoria family. Saying so, Eli took out a dagger. This is the weapon of the alien I killed this time. An equation. That race famous for being mercenaries. The dagger was made from the bone of a unique beast on the Equasians' home planet, a beast that is now extinct. He was a little doubtful. Can a dagger made of bone really be used in actual combat? Eli took out his own dagger and struck it directly against the bone dagger, and a crisp collision sound rang out. The bone dagger didn't break, but crack-like scratches appeared on the bone blade. He was just about to speak. The scratches on the bone blade were healing on their own, like cell regeneration. The cracks and gaps disappearing little by little. Eli said, in the Equasian language, it's called Grekenbut, meaning immortal or eternal. So I call it Greken. This is a gift I made up my mind to give to my best brother. As a gift, its meaning was extraordinary. They both longed for eternity and immortality. But there is a truth in the universe. Even the universe itself is not eternal. It is heading towards an end. One day, everything will end. Not to mention their insignificant lives, not even counting as dust. Just a brief flash of light. Luca couldn't help but become sentimental after all. This was the first time he had received such a meaningful gift. After returning to his room, he opened his terminal. Nicholas had already sent over the compiled files. Nicholas had even verified whether the owners behind those ghost companies were real. The various companies operated funds intricately like a spiderweb. This is what is known as money laundering. Luca knew very well. He owed a huge favor. Nicholas had already figured out his bottom line, which was why he dared to be so generous. Nicholas was not someone who easily forgot a favor. If he was really lucky enough to become the head of the Castoria family, he would keep Nicholas by his side instead of getting rid of him. Nicholas would be an excellent staff officer and advisor. He scratched his head awkwardly. Was he thinking too optimistically? Luca decided to put this matter aside for now until Nicholas sent further investigation results. Reality is always cruel. Just in the afternoon, he received a notice from the family. Someone among his acquaintances had finally passed away. That person was exactly the name he had mentioned when talking to himself at noon. Nicholas Castoria. Nicholas was dead.